Welcome back to the channel. Today we will travel through the pages of What If Deku Trained Under Hawkeye Part 3. The link to the story will be in the description below. Now let's start. Chapter 6. No One's POV. Izuku, Sayu, and Mineta all walked ashore through the water as the ship they were just on sank to the bottom of the lake. The three heroes in training just escaped a ship surrounded by water-based villains, not only beating them, but coming out in victory. I enjoyed a really smooth dump this morning, so my balls should stick on those guys for a whole day, Mineta said with a strange amount of pride as Sayu pulled him through the water. Too much info, Mineta, Izuku said with a weak chuckle as he had a serious look on his face. We were seriously lucky, one wrong move or if there were more villains underwater and we would have been dead. Izuku, your muttering is scaring me. Sayu said, making Izuku blush a bit. Anyway, shouldn't we be deciding on what to do next? Izuku nodded to the frog girl. You're right, our top priority is contacting UA and getting help. If a thing goes our way, we can just follow the waterside to the exit, avoiding the central plaza altogether. He said while looking up and gave a small sigh. But the man made me nervous on the boat. He said with a shaky laugh. Mineta looked at Izuku as if he grew a second head. What are you talking about, Midoriya? The whole time on the ship you were calm as shit. Mineta said as he bit his lip with an annoyed look on his face. It was annoying to see you act so cool, so unfair. Izuku looked at Mineta with a slightly surprised look. I may have acted cool, but trust me when I say I was nervous to all kinds of hell. He said with a weak laugh as he stood up straight, at the same time he pulled down his hood and took off his glasses and mask. Right now I'm so tense you can't see me shaking, but if I loosen up. Both Mineta and Sayu blinked in shock as they saw Izuku's body slowly start to shake. It escalated to the point he was practically vibrating, sweat dripping down his face as fear formed in his eyes. Fuck hell. The sudden volume of Izuku's voice made both Sayu and Mineta jump in the water, shock clearly seen on their faces. Are you kidding me, villains? Goddamn villains are attacking UA with the intent to kill All Might. Of all the goddamn fucking luck, why do we have to get dragged into this? We're student, we might be heroes in training, but that doesn't mean we can handle this bullshit so suddenly. These villains are batshit crazy. One of them had a fucking costume made out of hands, human hands. Not to mention one villain is a goddamn warp quirk, you know how rare that is, 1 in a fucking million, and the user is some black mist villain fucker who thinks he's a gentleman despite being a killer. Fuck. Fuck. Shit. Villains. Balls. Fuck. Sayu and Mineta just stared at Izuku as he seemed to have a small mental breakdown of sorts. Neither expected the calm archer to have bottled up so many emotions in their current situation. Sayu felt sorry for Izuku and wished she could do something for him, she was also scared, but with her personality, she was easily able to handle fear. Mineta was just shocked period but also felt a little smug. Looks like the cool guy isn't so cool after all. After a few more seconds of ranting, Izuku finally took a deep breath before letting it out slowly, it was so intense it looked like he was breathing out steam. Well, I feel better. Izuku said with a weak chuckle as he put his gear back on, surprising the other two. Are you sure, Izuku? You were ranting for a good minute. Sayu asked while tilting her head. Izuku blushed in embarrassment as he realized he cured up a storm to rival Bakugo. Why yeah, sorry about that. I was just holding a lot in. He said while turning to the other two. The reason I was able to work clearly despite being scared shitless isn't that I was fearless, but because I was so scared not just for myself but you guys as well. If I freaked out and let fear take over my mind then you guys could have died, and as long as I can move and I have a bow on my back, I won't let that happen. Sayu nodded with her own determination, wanting to fight for everyone as well, just as a hero should. Mineta, on the other hand, was fuming in the water. Damn it, he goes from cool to panic to cool. Make up your mind, Midoriya. The perverted teen thought as they started to move again. In the distance, Izuku saw Eraserhead fighting off the mob of villains as they surrounded him. Izawa-sensei is at the plaza holding back that giant group of villains, Sayu said with some worry. There's gotta be too many of them. Eraserhead naturally planned to keep them under control until help arrives, but it's not a stretch to think he flew into action to protect us, Izuku said in a serious tone as they pushed through the water. But if something doesn't change soon he's going to overexert himself fast. Eh? Mineta questioned with a worried look on his face. Don't be stupid, Midoriya, you're not saying we should. Izuku shook his head. I'm not saying we should jump into the fray if that's what you're thinking. He said while keeping his eyes on the fight. If we suddenly jump into the fight, Eraserhead will have to not only worry about the small army of villains, but us as well. We'll wait for an opening and maybe relieve at least a little of Sensei's burden. As the three got closer to the plaza, Izuku noticed Eraserhead face off against a Hands villain, the same one who was the first to come out of the portal. Aizawa closed the distance fast and jabbed his elbow into the villain's stomach. Izuku blinked when he had the fight pause for a few seconds before Izawa punched the villain square in the jaw and threw him back a few feet. As Izawa jumped back, Izuku noticed his elbow was black, showing exposed muscles. The K-emission quirk. The user can destroy anything he touches with his hands. Most likely this requires either all 5 fingers or the palm to activate. Speed of the quirk may vary depending on the target, though it is deadly nonetheless. Counter. Avoid hands at all cost and break fingers, grab users' wrists and hold them in submission, use long-distance attacks instead of close quarters. As Izuku analyzed the villain's quirk, 2 more villains showed up and tried to attack Izawa from behind. The pro hero reacted fast and countered the 2 villains easily, though he did not use his left arm. Izuku blinked for a single moment before he paled as he saw the large figure behind Eraserhead with his hand out. The figure was muscular, purple with scars all over his body, and the strangest thing about the villain was blank in its eyes and his exposed brain. The young archer moved on instinct alone as he pulled out one of his arrows and fired. A second later he pulled Mineta and Saya down into the water, much to their surprise. As the arrow flew, the large purple figure grabbed Izawa by the arm and a loud crunch was heard, making Izawa screaming in pain. The arrow hit the purple Goliath and in an instant, his body was covered in a dark red foam. Izawa used this opening to pull himself away and gain some distance from the purple monsters. The pro hero's left arm was bleeding heavily and was bent in an awkward angle. He snapped me like a twig. Looking at any part of his body should have been enough to erase his quirk, that means this is his base power. He thought with some shock. Oh, the hands villain said in a bored tone. Well, aren't you a lucky one? My Nomu isn't one to let his prey slip by, even with some minor interference. He said as he looked around lazily to see where the arrow may have come from. The Nomu didn't move and seemed to just stare at Eraserhead with a blank expression, waiting for the villain's command as it pulled off the foam from its body piece by piece. The pro hero and villain just seemed to stare down one another, waiting for someone to make a move. Suddenly a black mist appeared behind the hand's villain, grabbing his attention. Shigaraki Tamura. The mist man said in a proper tone. Oh, Black Mist, is number 13 dead? Tamura asked with some hope in his voice. I have incapacitated him. However, I'm afraid the students whom I could not scatter impeded me and one was, therefore, able to escape with his life. He said in a neutral tone. Tamura was quiet for a long moment as he stared at the mist man. Huh. The young man then seemed to be twitching while scratching his neck excessively. Black Mist, if you can't be a proper warp gate, then our plans have crumbled. There's no doubt that if they throw dozens of pros at us, we can't win. He said in a shaky tone, more in frustration than actual worry. It's game over. It's game over for now. Izuku gave Tamura a long stare with narrow eyes. Despite being the leader of the villains, Tamura didn't seem the most mentally sound, more that he let his emotions determine his choice. And that made him all the more dangerous. Shall we hop back? He asked in a down tone. That seemed to catch the hero in training's attention. Hop back? As in retreating? Mineta asked in a hopeful tone as he peeked over the side. Why yae, we're saved. We're saw. Izuku grabbed Mineta by the mouth in a head grip and pushed him underwater. Will you keep it fucking down? The green hair team growled as he didn't take his eyes off the villains in the plaza. Do you want to give away our position? He said while narrowing his eyes. But I don't think they've done just yet. They came all the way here and did nothing but tell us a villain group is aiming for All Might. They don't seem the type to back down. He muttered while letting go of the purple hair teen, who was now deadly pale. Actually, before that, why don't we use this opportunity to take? Izuku blinked for a single second, and in an instant Tamura was right on the shoreline in front of them, his hand reaching out for Tsai. The symbol of peace's pride down a notch. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. The 3 heroes in training all felt shocked and horrified as his hand moved closer and closer to Tsai's head. Izuku remembered what Tamura's quirk did to Eraserhead's elbow, and he felt his heart stop before his eyes sharpened. Eraserhead tried to look to Tamura, but the Nomu was blocking his line of sight. No. Just as Tamura's hand was about to touch Tsai's face, it stopped just an inch with a jerk. Oh, the villain said in a playful tone as he looked to the right. Well, aren't you a cool guy? Izuku just glared at the villain as he tightens his grip around his wrist. It was only thanks to his reflexes that he was able to catch the villain's hand before he killed Tsai. The frog girl was breathing heavily while looking deadly pale. She had just seen her whole life flash before her eyes. Why don't you pick a fight with someone your own size? Izuku asked with a wicked grin on his face. Tamura pulled back and jumped a few feet back, at the same time Izuku climbed out of the water with Flash Fang ready. The hand villain sized Izuku up and noticed the quiver on his back. You're the one that shot the arrow. He said as a fact while tilting his head. Wasn't that hard, your friend's a big target, Izuku said with a grin as he got into a fighting stance. Tamura seemed to laugh at Izuku's joke as he ran his hand through his hair. "You're funny," he said before releasing a large amount of killer intent. "But for some reason, you seriously piss me off." Tamura crouched low before charging at Izuku at full speed. If the young archer didn't know any better, he would have guessed Tamura had a speed quirk of some kind. It was almost unnaturally fast for someone without a speed quirk. Izuku brought Flash Fang down just as the villain was close, only for Tamura to sidestep the sword and reach for Izuku's chest. But the young archer saw this attack coming a mile away. Grabbing Tamura's wrist like last time, Izuku twisted the limb before flipping the villain onto his stomach. Izuku held onto Tamura's arm and made sure none of his hands could touch him. "Ah, ah, ah." Tamura moaned in pain as he felt his shoulder joint nearly pop out. "Nomu." Almost as if teleporting, the Nomu was at the villain's side with his arm raised. However, as soon as Izuku heard the name, he already jumped away. The Nomu struck the ground with enough force to shatter it to pieces with a shocking amount of force, enough to shake the ground. Damn, that speed and strength is practically All Might's level, no wonder the villains feel cocky. Izuku thought while pulling out a red-tipped arrow. Just as the Nomu raised its arm, 3 pellets hit the ground between them, creating a large smokescreen. "Eraserhead," Izuku thought with some joy. He's not out of the fight just yet. Aizawa backfilled as a black portal appeared in front of him. He didn't stop moving on his feet as the black portals kept following his every step. "I should expel him for interfering, but they already knew the students were close. I'll just punish Izuku later for not following my orders." He then kicked a villain in the head, knocking him out as he tried to use his capture weapon with one arm. But the smoke cover, Izuku remembered where the Nomu last was and fired his arrow. At the same time, he pulled out Flash Fang and dashed forward. The arrow hit the Nomu in the shoulder, and a loud hissing was heard as the arrow burned into the Nomu's flesh, though it barely seemed to care about the arrow. Tamura was pushing himself off the ground as he looked through the thick smoke, keeping his eyes peeled. Just then Izuku came out of the smoke with his sword low, but his eyes completely focused. Swinging the sword up, Izuku managed to nick Tamura's cheek as the villain jumped back. "Wow, you're really good with that sword, are you a knight class?" the villain said with some warped curiosity. Izuku hesitated for a split second as he held Flash Fang in his hands. "I prefer an archer class, with a little samurai." But that said, Izuku crouched down before dashing forward. Tamura just seemed to stay still while standing up, making no move to dodge. Just as Izuku was 1 foot away from the villain struck. He closed the distance in an instant and kicked Izuku in the chest hard with a very surprising amount of strength. Izuku staggered a step back but did not fall. Instead, he swung his sword. Tamura dodged the blade perfectly without getting a single cut, but Izuku wasn't letting up. Izuku didn't give Tamura a single opening to attack with his hands. One wrong move from the villain, and he would lose a finger. As Izuku slashed down, Tamura caught the blade perfectly in his hands. "I'll admit, you're not bad for a hero in training. It might be best to take you out now before you become a threat later." Izuku jumped straight off the ground while pulling both his feet in the air before slamming them straight into Tamura's face. The villain's head whipped back as his body was sent tumbling to the ground with a loud thud. Izuku's body smacked to the floor, but he didn't waste a second to get up with his sword raised. The young archer instantly noticed something wrong with Flash Fang. More than 2/3 of the blade was no longer a gleaming silver, but a brittle rusted color. The blade was dull in the center, making it almost impossible for him to cut something with it. He only held onto it for a second, yet it's already this bad. Izuku thought grimly as he sheathed the blade and pulled out CC instead. He might be fast enough to dodge my arrows, but hopefully I can get a lucky shot in. As all the smoke disappeared, Tamura pushed himself off the ground while glaring at Izuku. "You're a very annoying hero," Tamura said with a low growl. "Nomu kill." Boom. "Have no fear," a single voice boomed through the plaza, stopping every single person in their tracks. "For I have come," he said while ripping off his tie. Everyone turned to the main door of USJ to see All Might himself at the top of the stairs. He was wearing his teacher uniform only without the yellow jacket. "All Might!" Mineta screamed with tears running down his face. Aizawa gave a small snort but had a small grin on his face. "What took you so long?" Izuku also felt relief wash over him, but also noticed something different about All Might. He wasn't smiling, laughing, or even grinning. Instead, he looked pissed to hell. "I guess I'd be pissed too if someone tried to kill a bunch of kids just to get to me." You didn't even have to see his face to tell he was pissed. The area around him was practically steaming. "We were waiting for you, hero," Tamura said in a calm voice, not even fazed by the number 1 hero's arrival. "Or should I say, you hero trash." The remaining villains Aizawa hadn't knocked out were also stunned by All Might's presence. As some tried to prepare for a fight, All Might just dashed forward and blinding speeds before appearing next to Aizawa, knocking all the villains in his way out with one blow. "I apologize, Aizawa, for being late. I came as soon as young Tenya found me." All Might said in a low tone while glancing at Aizawa's injuries. The other teacher had a severely broken arm and his right eye was swollen shut with blood leaking out. The teacher just snorted as he held his broken arm. "You always seem to take your sweet time getting places," he said in a bored tone, though his one good eye was still stuck on the large purple monster. All Might followed Aizawa's line of sight and his eyes instantly landed on Izuku, Sayu, and Mineta. Before anyone could even react, All Might dashed forward and grabbed the student before bringing them away from villains a safe distance. "Head towards the entrance, you three," All Might said while standing protectively from the students. "Aizawa, go with the children and find the rest of the students." The pro-hero hesitated for a single moment before springing off to see if number 13 was still alive. Izuku was surprised for a second to find himself in a completely new spot before he could even blink, but he pushed down his shock and turned his eyes to All Might. It wasn't very noticeable to most people, but Izuku could see the pro-hero shaking ever so slightly. Damn it. He doesn't have much time, minutes at most, if not then he's running on fumes. The young archer thought grimly as he tightened his hand around CC. "Ah, it's no good, I'm sorry father," Tamura said while picking up the severed hand, making Izuku feel sick to his stomach. "He took the opportunity to hit you while he was saving them, hahaha, they call it the state's legitimate monopoly of violence. He really is quite fast, my eyes couldn't follow him. And yet, he wasn't as fast as I expected. Could it be our intel was true after all?" Tamura sent the pro-hero a crazy look filled with mad glee. "About how you're weakening." Izuku felt a pit in his stomach as he grit his teeth. He didn't know how they came to the conclusion All Might was weakening, maybe they did some number and found his appearances happening less often over the years, or could someone have slipped that All Might was losing time? "All Might," Izuku called, making the muscled hero glance back. The hand villain headed to Quirk, "Whatever he touches with his hand starts to rot within seconds, it practically destroyed my sword in 1 second and the same with Aizawa's elbow. The Black Mist villain has a warp quirk, he can create portals with his mist and he's fast with them. The purple villain. He may be as strong and fast as you, but only to a certain level." All Might grinned as he gave Izuku a thumbs up. "Thanks for the info Midoriya, my boy." "Hey, that's not fair," Tamura whined like a child. "You can't give hero info like that, that's cheating." All Might's response was to dash forward with his arms crossed. "Carolina." "Nomu." The purple monster stood in front of All Might without a single second of hesitation. Smash. The Nomu took the attack full force, but to Izuku's shock, the monster didn't even flinch. Instead, it lunged forward and tried to grab the number 1 hero. All Might was caught off guard by the villain not being affected by his attack, but All Might was still able to dodge at the last second. Izuku then noticed the arrow in the Nomu's shoulder, confusing him a bit. "That was my flare arrow, it should have burned his entire shoulder, but the only injury he has is the arrow in his shoulder. He should be seriously burned. I can't believe it, my blows." All Might used his full weight to punch the Nomu in the stomach, only for nothing to happen again. "Aren't working at all," he said in shock but didn't stop attacking. Tamura stood off to the side with his hands at his sides, not even fazed from the two Goliaths fighting. Look no further than the beast's amazing shock absorption quirk. In other words, a fist-fighting hero is useless against someone like him, it'd be easier to scoop out his guts. He said as All Might punched the monster right in the brain, only for his punch to be ineffective again. Shock absorption mutation quirk. The user can absorb the kinetic force of all blunt attacks and store them inside its body, most likely can throw the force buildup back in attacks. This quirk most likely reduces the shock of blunt attacks, but not completely nullified. Counter. Use blade and energy attacks to weaken the enemy to the point of exhaustion. Knockout gas and other sleep drugs may be useful to slow down the user. As Izuku analyzed the Nomu's quirk, All Might went behind the Nomu and graved it behind the waist. "Thanks for telling me. If that's all it takes, then don't worry." The number 1 hero shouted as he started to pull up. "It'll be a cinch." In a dramatic fashion when All Might suplexed the Nomu there was a large explosion, creating a large dust cloud. "Since when do suplexes become so explosive?" Mineta shouted in shock and awe. "All Might really is a world away from us. Though when it comes to teaching, he's still a beginner who needs to read off of cue cards." Izuku gave a low snort at Sayu's attempt to lighten the mood, though he still had a serious look in his eye. A part of him wanted to help All Might, but at the strength and skill he was at now he would only hold the hero back, becoming a liability rather than an asset. All he could do at the moment was believe All Might can beat them. "Go All Might. Aim for his crew watch." Mineta cheered with tears in his eyes. "Maybe we were overthinking the situation," Sayu said as she stared at the large explosion. "His strength is dumbfounding." Even so. Izuku was one of the few people in USJ who knew about All Might's limit. The villain suspected, but even they didn't have any solid evidence. If All Might was pushed past his limit then he would die without question, and Izuku was the only one who could save him should he ever be pushed beyond his limit. GUHH. When the smoke cleared, Izuku paled at what he saw. The attack All Might had used failed. Instead of being embedded into the ground, the Nomu was instead inside a black portal, making the attack completely ineffective. Not only that, there was a second portal under All Might's body, with the Nomu's claws digging into his sides. You plan to dive him deep into the concrete and seal his movements, right? Tamura said with a smug tone. But it would have been useless, given that the Nomu is the same power level as you. Isn't it great, Black Mist? He handed us the perfect chance on a silver platter. Izuku's eyes widened as he realized the villain's true plan. The Nomu wasn't here just to combat All Might's power, but also his speed, specifically stopping him. Black Mist's portals were fast, but nowhere close to All Might's speed. But now that All Might couldn't move, it wouldn't take much for Black Mist to chop All Might in half or Tamura to rot All Might's entire body. Izuku. The young archer ignored Sayu calling out his name as he sprinted forward while pulling CC from his back. You can't die, All Might, there's still so much for you to teach me and Mirio. Izuku pulled out 2 different arrows before firing them at the 2 villains. The first arrow hit Black Mist's collar before he screamed in pain as he was electrocuted. This was enough to stop him from making more portals, but not the one the Nomu was in. The second arrow flew straight at Tamura's side, the villain seemingly not aware of the incoming attack. Just as the arrow was about to hit, Tamura's caught the arrow with a single hand, not even flinching. Tamura looked at the arrow as it started to rot away. Did you really think a toy like this could beat me? Boom. Tamura's head whipped back as his ears started ringing as his vision turned fuzzy. Concussion arrow, bitch. Izuku yelled as he pulled out another arrow and aimed it at the Nomu. Hopefully I can distract the Nomu enough so it loses its grip on all. Get out of the fucking way, Deku. Bakugo came flying in with his arm out and blasted Black Mist with an explosion. He then grabbed the metal neck and slammed the villain to the ground hard. At the same time, the Nomu started to freeze on the side, it was so fast it nearly took half of his body. I heard about you bastards' plan. About each of your roles in the scheme to kill All Might. A calm voice said as the temperature started to drop. Izuku glanced to the side to see Todoroki with a calm look on his face, though he still looked slightly pissed off. Rah. Kirishima came swinging in at Tamura with his hardened arm, but even with his senses confused the villain was still able to dodge the attack, though his shirt shredded a bit. Shit. I had him. Kirishima growled as he glared at the villain. No funny business out of you, you shadow-ass mobling. Bakugo said with an almost crazed grin on his face. The symbol of peace won't go down as easily as you clowns, Todoroki said, still keeping a calm look on his face. Izuku couldn't help but feel a grin on his face as he stared at everyone. About time someone else showed up, I thought I would have all the fun for me and All Might. Inside, however, Izuku felt relief. With them here we should be able to pull off some of the heat on All Might. Like hell, Deku. Bakugo shouted while glaring at the young archer. All Might noticed the Nomu's grip slack and saw its current state. A freezing attack. He then saw Todoroki off to the side and a trail of ice leading to him. He has so much precision, he was able to freeze him without catching me in it. But the Nomu half-frozen All Might used this opportunity to pull himself out of the Nomu's grasp. Thank you, my boy. The symbol of peace won't go down that easily as you clowns, Todoroki said with his usual face. Izuku, however, was thinking differently. I might have been able to shake the Nomu's grip, but there's no guarantee, not to mention the Nomu had All Might by his wound. Thanks to Todoroki, All Might was able to get away without too much injury. He thought as he glanced at All Might, who was grabbing his bloody side. Tamura was looking at Bakugo holding down Black Mist. You pinned down our revolving door well, now this is quite the pinch. Bakugo just grinned. Just as I thought, this prick was never that sharp. He said with a laugh. That bit on your body you used to get all misty and warp gatey just got sealed, motherfucker. You're gonna tell me you don't use that warp gate to hide your true body, huh? If that shadow mist were your true form and you had no actual body, then why would you call any attack dangerous? Izuku was slightly impressed by Bakugo's analyses. Mostly the blonde would just overpower his opponent, never analyzing their quirks. Erg. Don't you move. Bakugo threatens while pushing the villain down. The second you so much as twitch, I'll load you with a nice little explosion right here, right now. Not a very heroic line there, buddy, Kirishima said with a small laugh. But it fits his personality, Izuku added while pulling out an arrow and aimed it at Tamura. We've been cornered, and what's more, you're all nearly unscathed. The Hands villain said, though he sounded not the least bit concerned. Man, I have to hand it to kids these days, at this rate, the villain alliance will be a laughingstock. He said while folding his hands together. Just then the Nomu climbed out of the still open warp gate, both his right arm and leg falling to pieces from Todoroki's ice attack. Yet despite this, he was still able to move even with such injuries. The fuck? Izuku couldn't help but say what everyone was thinking. Wasn't his quick shock absorption, how the hell is he still moving? He said while pointing CC at the villain. This should be impossible, even with a shock absorption quirk he should be knocked out or bleeding out. I never said that was the full extent of his abilities, Tamura said before something even more shocking happened. The Nomu started to regrow his limbs in seconds. As you can see, he also has a super regeneration quirk. 2 quirks. 2 goddamn quirks. Izuku grits his teeth and starts to sweat a bit. Such a thing was considered nearly impossible in the super world. There was such a thing as dual quirks, a quirk that has 2 different effects but is still considered one quirk. Mutation-type quirks also have multiple effects, such as agility, enhanced strength, enhanced senses, but even then they were still considered one quirk. Despite being shocked, Izuku analyzed the Nomu and his quirk. Super regeneration mutant type. The ability to regenerate from any injuries on the user's body at incredible speeds. Combine that with the shock absorption quirk and the two become a deadly combination. Counter to both quirks. As Izuku started to think of a plan to take down the Nomu, Tamura started to speak. Nomu is a human sandbag artificially created to the height of physical fitness to withstand your 100%. Before any of the students could react, the Nomu started to move, despite his body still regenerating. Deadeye. Despite everything slowing down to a crawl for Izuku, the Nomu was still moving at speeds that were hard for him to track. But he was still able to tell where it was heading. Bakugo, move. A second later the Nomu throws a punch so strong it creates a shockwave that nearly blew everyone back. Bakugo. Izuku called out in worry, only to notice something next to him. Turning, he couldn't hold in his surprise at who he saw standing next to him. Bakugo, why you dodged him, how? Izuku then noticed Bakugo wasn't looking smug but instead was very pale and shaking a little. I didn't dodge, you fucking moron. He said while taking a shaky breath. I couldn't see him at all. Turning his head back to the Nomu, Izuku saw how Bakugo survived the attack. At the other end of the Nomu stood All Might with his arms raised and slightly bruised. All Might had saved Bakugo and took the hit himself. All Might coughed slightly as he glared at the villains. Do you show no mercy? He asked with a slight glare. We had no choice. We had to save our ally, didn't we? Tamura said while pointing to Black Mist. And not long ago one of your kids over there, which one? He said while looking over the student before pointing right at Izuku. The one with the quiver. He tried to break my shoulder, here. And from whom do you think he mustered such a touching act of violence while smiling and grinning? Hero. He said while opening arms. Now listen here, All Might. I'm very ticked off. We're all categorized as either heroes or villains, but at the end of the day, violence is violence. And who gets to decide right and wrong? Society does. The symbol of peace. Give me a break. You're nothing more than a bludgeon of oppression yourself. Violence only breeds more violence. And once we kill you, that'll be made known to the world. At the end of Tamura's speech, Izuku only had one thing to say that was on his mind. What? A load of horseshit. Everyone turned to the young archer as he was gapping at the hand villain. Come again? Tamura asked while tilting his head. You, Izuku said while pointing at Tamura. You're full of shit. And a moron. He said with a face so straight it could rival Todoroki. Of course society decides what's right and wrong, it's how the world works, thousands of years were put into creating this, and you want to tear it down just because of a bullshit reason of violence breeds violence. I don't know if you were given an education, but this whole mission of yours is very contradictory. Considering you're smiling under that hand every time you try to beat a hero or kill someone. Give me a break. You saw through me so quickly, Tamura admitted without much hesitation. It's 3 versus 5. Todoroki pointed out as the other students started to get ready. It'll be difficult, only All Might can really handle Nomu, we'll have to keep Black Mist and Tamura busy to give All Might some space, Izuku said as he gripped CC. Bakugo, you and Kirishima take on Black Mist, he's their only way out of here. Todoroki and I will handle Tamura since we work better at long range. Don't tell me what to do, Deku, Bakugo growled as he eyed Black Mist. I was already planning on doing that. These guys are outrageous, but if we give All Might some support, then we'll send them packing no problem. Kirishima shouted, getting pumped up for the fight. No. All Might called while putting his hand up, catching everyone's attention. Please escape. But if I and Midoriya hadn't come to support you earlier it'd have been bad. Todoroki pointed out while glaring at the villains. Izuku desperately wanted to point out that All Might was out of time, but he didn't want any of the villains to hear him confirm that All Might was weakening. The young archer blinked as he realized that was why All Might wanted to fight alone. If the symbol of peace needed the help of heroes in training, then it would only confirm that All Might was weakening. Even so, All Might is pushing his time limit right now. I might be able to help him if I interfere, but I still don't know how to take down the Nomu. The combination of a shock absorption and super regeneration quirk was almost perfect. Blunt attacks were useless, and any blade attack would heal in seconds. Izuku then came to a small realization. If a physical attack is practically useless, what about mental? Izuku didn't know if the Nomu felt any pain or it was highly resistant to it, but Izuku knows for a fact it could be knocked out. Anything even remotely human could lose consciousness at some point. As the young archer started to formulate a plan, All Might was already moving. Right you are, Todoroki my boy. Thanks a ton. But now I'll be okay. All you need to do is watch a pro show you how it's done. Tamura, however, wasn't fazed in the slightest. Nomu, Black Mist, do your thing. I'll deal with the kids. He said before crouching low and sprinting forward. Let's clear the game and return victorious. He's coming. Brace yourselves. Kirishima called as everyone got into their fighting positions. But before Tamura could get close, All Might suddenly released an intense amount of pressure. It wasn't killer intent, it was simply All Might's intense power being felt by everyone. It was enough for Tamura to stop his charge and jump back. All Might then charged the Nomu, and the two each threw a punch, their fists clashing. I told you before, Tamura said as he landed on his feet. He has a shock absorption quirk. I'm aware. All Might said, though he didn't stop throwing punches. In fact, the two started to exchange blows, their fists moving so fast they were practically invisible. The force of their attacks created powerful shockwaves that started to blow stuff away. The full frontal assault. Izuku yelled in shock as he crouched low, trying not to be blown away. If All Might is going for a full assault, that means he's trying to. It's shock absorption, not total nullification. It must have a limit. No, All Might yelled as the wind started to pick up slowly, almost becoming a tornado. He was made to withstand my 100% in that case. I'll give it more than 100%. Fuck. Izuku swore as he heard what All Might was planning. He's pushing himself past his limit, he won't have anything left after this fight. Izuku thought as his mind started to work into overdrive. All Might will be able to overclock the Nomu's shock absorption, but he'll be too drained to fight. Izuku then took a deep breath trying to calm his heart. I guess I have no choice. Pulling out a shock arrow, Izuku aimed it right at the Nomu. Kirishima noticed this and raised an eyebrow. Yo, Midoriya, I don't think that arrows are going to hit. The force of their punches will throw you off. Izuku ignored him and did something strange. He started to move the arrow away from the Nomu until it was facing an almost random direction. Bakugo glanced at Deku and clicked his teeth. Put that toy away, Deku, you're just going to get in All Might's way. Twang. The arrow flew straight forward as fast as a bullet. As it got closer to the fight between All Might and the Nomu, it seemed to curve through the air from the wind. Come on, come on. Izuku muttered loudly as he crossed his fingers, the other students following the arrow's flight. Todoroki's eyes widened as he saw the arrow curve faster in the air and saw where it was heading. That's impossible, he said with some shock as he glanced at Izuku. If that hits, how was he able to? Everyone's eyes widened as they saw where the arrow hit, right in the back of the brain of the Nomu. All Might's eyes widened as he saw the arrow sticking out of the Nomu's head, though he felt the Nomu's attack suddenly lacking. The pro hero suddenly understood what Izuku had done. Very clever, Midoriya my boy. But the Nomu's brain damaged, it couldn't attack properly. Even if the Nomu started to heal from the wound, it still needed its brain to process information and work its body, and if it's damaged in any way then it couldn't do anything. Buzz. A-H-H. The Nomu screamed in pain as his brain was shocked a second later, its the whole body freezing up as its eyes started to rapidly lose focus. All Might saw this and let loose a full-on attack. Each punch creating a shockwave through the Nomu's body as it took every single punch. Thank you, Izuku, for taking some of the weight off. All Might thought as he continued to bombard the frozen Nomu. A hero is someone who smashes through every obstacle life puts his way. Even the students here have that very thing in all of them. Do you know what I speak of, villain? All Might crouched low and started to swing his fist, a Hail Mary punch aimed right for the Nomu's head. Plus ultra. The punch hit with a devastating shockwave right into the Nomu's face, sending it flying into the ground. The Nomu skidded across USJ, destroying everything in its path from trees, to buildings, to even the ground. By the time the Nomu came to a stop, its body was inside a wall with its eyes blank and its teeth smashed to pieces. What is this, a comic book? Kirishima couldn't help but comment at the display of power. Even if the Nomu was shocked still, it's like he punched the quirk out of him, the ultimate meathead. So that power was bullshit in the end, and he even beat him to a pulp so fast his regeneration couldn't activate in time. Everyone else was staring at the scenes in shock and awe. So this is the top, Todoroki thought as he glanced at Izuku, who already had an arrow out and was aiming it at the villains. And that shot he pulled off, it really made the difference. This is the world of pros. Bakugo thought as he gripped his fist, compared to All Might and the Nomu, he was nothing more than a bystander. The blonde then glanced at Deku, and he grit his teeth. Why is he always trying to get ahead of me? I really have gotten weaker. All Might said with a chuckle as the smoke started to clear. In my heyday, it'd have taken me 5 good punches, tops. He said as he stood straight, his clothes ripped and his mouth leaking blood. Now I throw 300 of those suckers. I'm out of time, I already pushed my limit. Now then, villains. We both want to put an end to this dance of ours quickly, don't we? All Might said as his body slowly started to steam. Kimura was twitching as he scratched his neck excessively, his eyes twitching as he glared at All Might. You use cheats. He said in a low tone, sounding pissed off. You've gotten weaker. You lie, we're totally overpowered. How dare you lay hand on my Nomu, you use cheats. He nearly shouted as he turned his gaze to Izuku, who didn't flinch a bit. That brat did something to my Nomu, making him freeze. He said while turning his body to Izuku. What did you do? He said while releasing a large amount of killer intent. Izuku tightens his hand around CC and gave the villain a grin as he loaded the weapon. Honestly, it was kind of obvious when you think about it, Izuku said as he started to walk slowly in All Might's direction, his eyes never leaving Tamura. Quirks are amazing, but even then they have to follow some logic rules. Such as you need a brain for your body to function. Even if your Nomu could heal from any injury it was given, it doesn't mean it could move its body when its brain is getting shocked. For every word, Tamura spoke and he stared muttering like crazy while scratching his neck. He was clearly having a mental breakdown at the moment. All Might stood still as he looked at the villains, at the same time he saw Izuku slowly getting closer and closer to him with a big smile on his face. Midoriya, you know I'm completely out of time, don't you? What's the matter? All Might said, his smile never falling. Where'd your bravado go? What happening to clearing the game? The pro hero then sent the 2 remaining villains an intense glare. Try it if you can. Iwuwuo. Tamura screamed in frustration. While the conversation continued, the heroes in training started to make their way out, though they noticed Midoriya was still walking towards All Might. What is Deku doing? Bakugo growled in a low tone. Does he think his quirkless ass can help All Might or something? Kirishima gave a small shrug. Maybe he's trying to get close to All Might to be safe. I mean that Han's villain has been giving Midoriya a lot of attention, maybe he feels he's being targeted. Todoroki put his hand on his chin. You have a point. The leader doesn't seem mentally stable, it wouldn't surprise me if he attacked Izuku simply on a whim for interfering with All Might's fight. And if he follows us to the others. Others could get hurt. Kirishima finished with a grim tone. Then we better leave and hope All Might can take them out. As the others started to move, Izuku had something else on his mind. It's all a bluff. He thought with a grin on his face as he kept moving. The smoke isn't there for dramatic effect. It's mixing with the dust, but All Might is powering down, he can't push himself anymore. He thought before taking a deep breath. We just need to distract them long enough for the rest of UA heroes to come for backup. Eat is fast, by now he's already reached UA and the heroes are on their way. Well, what are you waiting for? All Might yelled, trying to keep up the act he was still strong. If only Nomu were here. He'd be able to face him without feeling any pressure. Tamura complained. Shigaraki, Tamura, please calm yourself, Black Mist said while floating next to the young villain. If you look closely, you can clearly see the damage Nomu succeeded in dealing with him. He said as the 2 looked at the pro hero's tattered body. Izuku tightens this fist as he heard the 2 talk about still killing All Might. The symbol of peace was out of time, only seconds felt. If the villains decided to attack, All Might would stand no chance. Do you honestly think it's that easy? Izuku asked with a raised brow as he finally stood next to All Might while grabbing the 2 villains' attention. I mean, sure, you had a small chance when that Nomu was with you, but without him, how do you plan to counter All Might's strength and speed now? So now you have to ask yourself one question. Handjob, Izuku said as he pulled out 4 arrows and aimed them all at the villains, a big grin on his face. Do you feel lucky? Well, do you a handjob? Tamura glared at Izuku as he started to scratch his neck like crazy. All Might felt a slight relief at the villain's hesitation. Well done, Midoriya, keep having them second guessing. Suddenly Tamura went very still and slumped forward, his head hanging low. You have been a thorn in my side ever since you jumped out of the water, Archer. He said before releasing a large amount of killer intent as he gave Izuku a death glare. I think I wouldn't mind if I just kill you. But that said, both Black Mist and Tamura charged forward and Izuku let his arrows start to fly. At this point, Izuku didn't care what arrow he was shooting, as long as it did something to stop them. Black Mist opened a portal in front and had the arrows fly through, going into different directions. Izuku pulled out 2 explosive arrows and shot them into the ground in front of the villains. When the explosive arrows went off, the two villains were forced to jump out the way but in different directions. This is what Izuku wanted. Turning CC to Tamura, Izuku shot an arrow and it exploded in mid-air to reveal a steel net. Tamura raised his hands and as soon as it made contact it started to decay, but then a second arrow hit his hands covering both in sticky yellow goo. What? Tamura yelled as he tried to rot the glue away but found it was taking a while. Not missing a beat, Izuku turned to Black Mist who was closing in before firing an arrow. Black Mist tried to open a portal but found the arrow instead embedded into the ground right in front of him. Screech. Ahhh. Black Mist screamed in pain as a high-pitched screeching noise was heard from the arrow. Izuku then turned back to Tamura to see he was able to free himself from his putty arrow and he looked pissed. Enough. Much faster than before, Tamura was on Izuku in a second. The young archer shifted CC into its staff from and swung it at the villain's head, at the same time Tamura's hand was closing in on Izuku's chest. I can't dodge, hopefully, my suit can hold on long enough for it to withstand his quirk for a few seconds. Just as the deadly hand was about to touch Izuku's chest, it was suddenly smacked away with a bullet. Izuku used this opportunity to smack Tamura's head up with his staff, he then took a step back with a flip before back-kicking the villain in the jaw, making him tumble away. So they finally arrived. Turning to the main entrance, Izuku felt complete relief, seeing every single hero from UA was standing at the very top of the stairs. In front of the heroes was Iida, who was panting hard. I came back with all the people I could scrape together. Iida called out at the top of his lungs. Class 1 Assistant President, Iida Tenya. Reporting for duty. Izuku couldn't help but grin and give Iida a big thumbs up. Iida. The archer called, grabbing the speedster's attention. You're my hero. He called, getting a look of pride from his friend. Tamura pulled himself from the floor as Black Mist floated next to him, his ears still ringing heavily. Ah, they came, it's our game over screen. Tamura said in a down tone as he rubbed his jaw. Back to the drawing board, Black Mist. Bang 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 bang. Tamura was shot in both his legs and his shoulder before Black Mist covered his body, taking the bullets and sending them somewhere else. Tamura started to fall into the black portal before he noticed the portal was moving. What's pulling us in? That would be, at the very end of the plaza was a battered but still alive hero, number 13 being helped by Eraserhead. My doing. He shouted as he tried to use Black Hole to destroy the portal. Izawa tried to erase the warp quirk with his one good eye, but he could tell instantly that Black Mist himself was already gone and only the leader villain remained. The portal started to move towards the space hero, but it wouldn't reach him in time. For the time being, we've failed, Tamura said while looking at All Might and Izuku. But we'll get you next time, symbol of peace, All Might. He then pointed right at Izuku. And you, archer, next time we meet those arrows of yours won't save you. Twang. Punt. Just as Tamura was about to pull his head into the portal, he was hit square in the face with a boxing glove arrow, throwing his head into the portal. Shut up, I've had enough long-winded speeches to last me for at least a month, Izuku said with an exhausted tone as he fell to his knees. Fuck, today felt way too long. He said as his entire body felt heavy as fatigue washed over him. The day was an experience nobody was ready for, what it was like to fight for your lives and others. The pro-hero world. I hope everyone made it out okay, Izuku said as he sat on the floor. I'm sure of it, Midoriya. Izuku glanced back to see All Might slowly turn back to his true form, steam rolling off his body in clouds. Yet despite being injured and weakened, All Might gave Izuku a smile. You saved me once again, kid, if you hadn't bought us that time and held them off, my head would be rolling right now. Izuku pulled off his hood and glasses before he gave All Might a smile. I'm happy you're alright. He said before letting out a sigh of relief. Midoriya. Are you alright? Izuku's head whipped to the side to see Kirishima rushing over. Oh, shit, he said while glancing at All Might's weakening from, it would only take a quick glance to see something was wrong. Kirishima, why? Izuku was cut off as a giant wall appeared between him and Kirishima. We want to check all the students for injuries, so everyone gathers in the front gate. A blocky hero said as he stood up from the ground. Leave the injured to the care of your sensei. Yeah, of course. Roger that. Kirishima said as he ran off to the front gate. All Might gave a sigh of relief as he sat down on the ground across from Izuku. Thanks, you really saved my hide, Cementus. Cementus was a scary strong hero with a quirk called Cement. It allowed him to manipulate any concrete he touches like it was clay, making him super strong in the modern world. I'm a fan of yours too, All Might. Now let's keep your true form hidden and head towards the infirmary. He said before turning to Izuku and gave him a concerned look. Are you alright, Midoriya, any serious injuries? Izuku picked himself off the ground with a small grunt and stretched his arms. A few bumps and bruises, but nothing too serious. Cementus nodded and opened a small hole in the concrete wall. If that's the case, go to the front gate please with the other students. We'll take care of All Might. Izuku nodded and turned to All Might with a small smile. I hope Recovery Girl heals you soon. He said before walking off. All Might gave a weak laugh as he slouched on the floor. Recovery Girl is going to be mad. Cementus gave a small laugh at the hero's dismay. Do try not to overdo it so much next time. All Might gave a small scoff as he whipped his cheek. If I hadn't gone that far I'd be a dead man. He said in a grim tone. That's how formidable they were. Izuku exited USJ's main entrance to see every one of Class 1's students was present and mostly unharmed. That made Izuku sigh in relief. As the archer approached the group he noticed a familiar detective counting the students. 17, 18, 19. 20, Detective Tsukauchi, Izuku said as he started to talk down the stairs. The detective turned around and was surprised to see a very familiar face. Midoriya, surprised to see you here. Izuku gave a weak shrug as he looked over the other students. I didn't think I would see you so soon either. Was anyone hurt? He asked with some concern. Tsukauchi smiled as he pushed his hat up. Everyone is accounted for and is relatively unharmed, aside from a few minor injuries. He said while looking Midoriya over, seeing he was covered in dirt and scuffs. And yourself? Same. He said while waving his arm as he looked through his classmates, see they were talking about where they were sent to. How's Izawa in number 13 condition? Izuku asked with some concern, grabbing some of the students' attention. Tsukauchi gave a small sigh as he pushed his hat up. It's nothing critical, but they were heavily injured. 13 has several broken bones and very serious lacerations to his back and arms, but he'll easily pull through. Izawa's arm was severely fractured and rotten, he won't be able to use it for a while, he also has a minor concussion and some fractures around his eye, or so I was told. He said while he held his phone. Ribbit's Ayu said in worry as Mineta held his hands together. Izuku gave a small sigh and rubbed his face. Well, at least they'll pull through. Tsukauchi gave a nod and looked to his partner, who was a catman. I have a business to attend to at the infirmary where All Might is being taken to. Is All Might well? Iida asked with a look of worry. Tsukauchi waved his hand with a small smile. It's nothing serious, he'll be just looked over by Recovery Girl. He said with a smile before he turned back to his partner. Sacha. You see to the rest. Affirmative. The catman said while saluting. Tsukauchi nodded before looking to Izuku. Midoriya, seeing as you were the one to talk to the villains the most, I would like for you to come with me to All Might to give a statement. It would help build up our investigation if you fill any holes. Izuku nodded and looked back at his classmates. I'll see you guys soon. He said, getting away from his friends. As the two started to walk Tsukauchi was suddenly stopped by another detective. Detective Tsukauchi, word came in sir. We apprehended the suspect thought to be the villain that attacked USJ. He was found in the building under a large pile of rubble. What's his condition? No external injuries sir. He's no showing any signs of resistance either moreover, he's unresponsive to stimuli. And he's not uttering a single word the cop said, a little unnerved. Izuku decided to add his 2 cents. As long as the leader of the so-called villains alliance, Shigaraki Tamura, does not give the Nomu any commands it will be unresponsive. He said, making the 2 cops look at him. And how do you know that Midoriya? Tsukauchi said while tilting his head, his quirk flaring. True. Izuku throws his thumb to USJ. Back inside during the fight, I saw the Nomu never did anything for itself unless Tamura told it to do something. He said before turning to the unnamed cop. Also I would be very cautious around it, it went toe-to-toe with All Might, that alone makes him very dangerous. He said, making the cop start to sweat at the thought of fighting it. If things get rough, damage his exposed brain to knock it out, it has a regeneration quirk, so any damage you do to it will be gone in seconds. True. Tsukauchi quirk flared as he turned to the cop. Go tell the others what you heard. Yes detective. The cop saluted before running off. Well let's go Midoriya, Tsukauchi said as they started to walk off. After taking a police car Izuku and Tsukauchi arrived at UA and made a beeline for Recovery Girl and All Might. Once there they opened the door to see All Might resting on a hospital bed while getting scolded by Recovery Girl. Midoriya, Tsukauchi. All Might said with a smile as he pushed himself to sit up. The two walked into the room while taking off their headwear. Sorry to be coming at you so suddenly, but I need your and Midoriya's testimony about the villains especially. Wait, hold on, before we get into that, are all the students okay? All Might asked with complete concern. And Azor Racerhead in number 13. Izuku quickly raised his hands. All the students are alive and accounted for All Might. No one was seriously injured, the teachers are hurt, but it's nothing life-threatening. He said making All Might sigh in relief. Thank goodness he said while laying back down. Tsukauchi smiled at All Might. You know, if you three hadn't buckled down and fought so bravely, then it probably would have been a very different story for the kids," he said, trying to cheer up his friend. All Might was quiet for a moment before he spoke. "You got one thing wrong, Tsukauchi. The students also fought bravely and gave it their all," he said before looking to Izuku. "If it wasn't for Midoriya, I would very much be dead. Not many high school freshmen have faced such terror, yet all of one have faced the perils of the world of the adults. They showed those villains for the idiots they are. And the students of Wano will make fine heroes," he said while giving Izuku a thumbs up, making him smile. Tsukauchi also smiled before he pulled out a pen and notepad. "If you're up for it, I would like for both you and Izuku to give your testimony, unless you wish to reschedule." All Might and Izuku exchanged glances before nodding. "Ask away, detective." Tsukauchi nodded before looking to Izuku. "From what I heard from your classmates, the leader of the villains was giving you a little too much attention, can you explain?" Izuku nodded and started to go into detail about what happened to him, Sayu, and Mineta from the villain's attack all the way to the plaza fight. He then started to explain his encounter with Tamura and the fight they had. "Honestly, I think it was lucky I was able to get out of there unharmed," Izuku said with a sigh as he put his hands in his pockets. "Why do you say that, Midoriya?" Tsukauchi asked while writing everything down. Izuku thought for a moment the best way to explain. "Shigaraki was fast, way faster than me. Not to mention he was able to go toe-to-toe with Aizawa and he was able to dodge all my attacks like they were nothing. If it wasn't for the fact he underestimated me and my arrows, then I might be more injured," he said in a grim tone as he folded his arms. "So the leader of the villains can hold his own in a fight and on top of that has a very dangerous quirk," Tsukauchi said with his eyes narrowed. That seemed to make a look cross Izuku's face. "Honestly," he said, grabbing the two's attention. "Something about Shigaraki being the leader feels wrong." "Why do you say that, Midoriya?" All Might asked while shifting in his bed. Izuku was quiet for a moment before he spoke. "To put it bluntly, Shigaraki is someone not mentally stable," he said with a serious look on his face. "For one, those hands all over his body are not for show. Apparently, they are real and most likely victims of his, and the one on his face, I heard him call it father," he said making a grim look across the two adults' faces. Not only that, but he kept making game references. Game references? Both adults asked in confusion at the same time. "Yeah, like classes, end screen, game over, the final boss. Things like that." Izuku listed the things he heard from the top of his head. That made a worried look cross the hero and detective. If he disconnected himself from reality and sees this all as nothing more than a game, then that makes him very dangerous. He'll kill anyone who gets in his way as if they were NPCs. Tsukauchi said as he wrote in his notepad. "There's more," Izuku said, making the detective look at him. "Another thing I noticed is the way he reacted to stuff. Whenever something didn't go his way, it felt like well." Izuku tried to find the right word to explain what he was thinking before he shrugged. "It felt like he threw a tantrum." "A tantrum?" That made Tsukauchi pause in his writing. "Yeah," scratching his neck excessively, complaining, whining, bragging about something he had, or threatening his comrades when they did something wrong. Things a child would do. "Or a man-child," All Might offered, making Izuku nod. "Exactly, a man-child. So the question is, how could a mentally unstable man-child lead 100 villains to attack UA?" Izuku asked before he shrugged. Answer. He couldn't. He might be the leader of the attack and the one calling the shots, but the leader of an organization seems unlikely. Both adults nodded at Izuku's reasoning. It was sound and they couldn't see many flaws in the theory. Tsukauchi wrote everything down before looking to Izuku with a smile. "Thank you for speaking, Izuku, I believe I have enough to start a profile. Is there anything else you wish to add?" Izuku was quiet for a moment before he spoke. "The thing that's really been bugging me is the Nomu itself." "What seems to be bothering you?" Izuku gained a slightly disturbed look on his face before he started to speak. Shigaraki said the Nomu was an artificially created human that was built to counter All Might's strength and speed. Shigaraki also said the Nomu had two quirks, not a dual quirk. To make something like that you need recourses, equipment, connections, and test subjects. He said in a grim tone, making the adults flinch at the thought. "What I'm trying to say is, this League of Villains might be deeper than most people are thinking, and not just some cocky villains looking to make a name for themselves." The room was dead silent as they processed what Izuku had said, even Tsukauchi had stopped writing. If everything the young teen had said was true, then this was not the last of the League of Villains. What could they be planning now? Shigaraki fell flat on his back with a loud thud on a wooden floor, a dead hand falling next to him. Practically embedded in his face was a black boxing glove with an arrow shaft sticking out the back. The dark room was dead silent as Shigaraki laid there on the floor, completely unmoving. "Shigaraki?" Black Mist said in a cautious tone, a good safe distance away. The young villain slowly raised from the ground until he was sitting up, the boxing gloves still embedded in his face. Slowly he reached up and grabbed a glove in a tight grip, so tight he nearly ripped the fabric to pieces. A second later the entire glove started to rot away until it was only dust in his hand. Archer. Chapter 7. No one's POV. Izuku panted hard as he hit a rubber dummy in all its vital areas, such as the neck, kidney, liver, heart, and anywhere else he knew would hurt. The young teen was currently wearing a tight tank top with black shorts and black shoes. He was currently training in UA's gym, and he was working up a sweat. It's been one day since USJ was attacked by villains, and currently, the school was closed for the students. The only reason he was in school was that he was the class president, and he, Momo, and Iida needed to go over some papers. He had gotten to school early and was able to finish his work ahead of time before the others arrived. Seeing an opportunity, Izuku decided to do some training in the school's gym. Then afterwards he may about making him a new sword. Ha! Izuku yelled as he back-kicked the dummy in the head, shaking it like a bobblehead. When the young hero in training's feet touched the ground he panted softly as he felt sweat drip all over his body. I need to get stronger, he muttered while narrowing his eyes at the dummy. He still remembered his fight with Shigaraki, making him grip his fist. To the outside person, it might have seemed like an even fight, however, Izuku knew better. Shigaraki was faster than Izuku easily, so fast it almost seemed like he has a speed quirk. That kind of quirkless speed was something he could only compare to a few. Clint in his heyday was said to move at speeds like that, same thing with Lila now. Izuku remembered his last spar with a woman, and she had him bested in speed, hitting him faster than he could react. The only advantage Izuku had over Shigaraki was strength. Thanks to All Might's training and his spars with Mirio, his strength was well above average. In fact, Izuku could say he was possibly in the top 10 strongest when it came to strength in his class. But strength means nothing when it comes to Shigaraki's quirk, Izuku muttered as he glared at the dummy. Decay, a powerful and deadly quirk. All it took was one touch to end a fight, and with Shigaraki's speed and reflexes, it was a deadly combination. Izuku remembers how the villain not only dodged his sword's attacks and arrows, but also destroyed his sword, the very sword he was gifted by Lila. When Izuku called and told his older sister about the villain invasion, she was worried, to say the least, but was relieved to hear he got out unharmed. She didn't care that his sword was destroyed, she was surprised it didn't break sooner. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad you took care of it like I knew you would, it's just that in the hero business, stuff breaks. You won't believe how many bows I shattered to pieces. Even with his sister's support, he was still upset his sword got destroyed. David Shield himself made that sword, and he doubts he could ever get another one like it anytime soon. Oh well, I'm sure May can make a better one, Izuku said with a small smile. Oh wow, a voice behind Izuku said, making him turn around. I thought I would be the only one in the gym. Standing by the gym's entrance was a familiar orange-haired girl wearing a tight sports bra and pants with a bag under her arms. Kendo. Izuku said in a surprised tone as the girl walked into the gym. Hey, it's been a while. He said with a smile. Yes, it has Mr. Number 1. She said with a grin as she dropped her bag off to the side. I never got to say it, but congratulations on becoming number 1 in the entrance exam. I was shocked, to say the least, when I saw your name and score. Izuku rubbed the back of his head with a small blush. Thanks, it was shocking for me too. He said as he smiled at her. And a nice job to you too for making it to the top 5, you did what 1,000 other students couldn't do. Thanks, Kendo said before she at the dummy behind Izuku. So you decided to do some training today? She asked, seeing a few bumps on the dummy. Izuku rolled his shoulder. Yeah, I was feeling a little antsy and just needed to do some training, you know. He said while glancing at the dummy. Kendo folded her arms and nodded her head. I take it, it's because of the USJ invasion yesterday? She asked in a soft tone. Izuku looked at her with a small frown. You heard about that? He asked, getting a nod from the other girl. Yeah, along with the entire school, everyone found out after the teachers told us school was cancelled today, and it was on the news last night, Kendo explained with a shrug. Izuku nodded before he blinked. Wait, if the school is canceled then why are you here? Kendo smiled as she put her hands on her hips. I'm the president of Class 1B, she said before pointing to Izuku. And since you're here, I can only guess you're the president to the class of 1A. She said making Izuku nod. So everyone heard about the attack on us at USJ? Izuku asked with a frown. Yup, Kendo said with a sigh as she rubbed the back of her head. Honestly, a lot of students are jealous of 1A for getting attacked, especially 1B. That made Izuku give her a weird look. What, seriously, people are jealous of the fact that villains came to kill us and managed to injure our teacher? Izuku asked in disbelief. Kendo nodded and gave a small shrug. Well, I know some people in my class are jealous that Wana was able to fight against villains and prove themselves, and a lot of the media is already saying Wana is the best of the best, making everyone feel a little sore. That made Izuku groan while he shook his head. We're all a part of UA, the very best school in the country if not the world, it doesn't matter what class you're in, we're all going to be heroes someday. Endo raised her hands in defense. Trust me, I know. I tried to explain to them not to be jealous, but they wouldn't let up. They want to prove themselves, and how can I tell them no? Izuku sighed at that. Right, sorry, I know it's not your fault. He said as he looked away with a small scowl. It's just that attack was not a game. You want to talk about it? Kendo asked with a concerned look on her face. Izuku was quiet for a moment before he spoke. There was this villain I faced at USJ, the leader of the attack, and he was so much stronger than me. He said while gripping his fist. He was faster, more experienced, and had an extremely deadly quirk. The only reason I was able to hold him off was that he kept underestimating me and the other teachers arrived, but if they didn't, I probably have been seriously injured. Izuku said as he remembered his fight with Shigaraki. So get stronger. Izuku turned to see Kendo giving him a friendly smile. We're not heroes just yet, so we still have a lot of improvements to go through. So train, get stronger, and show that villain who's boss the next time you face him. Kendo said with a confident smile as she gave Izuku a thumbs up. Izuku stared at the girl for a long moment, his jaw slightly hung. He then slapped both his cheeks hard, making the girl blink. Damn, what am I doing? Izuku said while giving a small chuckle. What would Clint say if he heard I was second-guessing myself? Izuku muttered before he turned to Kendo and smiled at her. Thanks, I think I needed to hear that. No problem. Kendo then gave Izuku a grin as she creaked her knuckles. So if you want to get stronger, how about a friendly spar? Izuku blinked before throwing the girl a grin. With or without quirks? Izuku asked as he stretched his body. Either way, he was going to fight the best he could. Kendo had a thoughtful look on her face before she spoke. Without, I think I need a small refresher. She said while getting into a fighting stance. So what do you say, want to find out which president is stronger? Izuku returned the grin and brought his arms up. Alright, but don't be sad when you lose. He said, making Kendo give him a playful glare. The two heroes in training quickly found themselves on a thick mat in the center of the gym, both ready for anything. The first one to hit the ground loses, agreed. Kendo asked as she eyed Izuku up. Agreed, Izuku said as he tensed his body. Neither one made a move and just stared each other down. Izuku glanced at Kendo's body, not sexually, and saw that despite being a girl, Kendo seemed pretty strong. Suddenly the first to move was Kendo. The girl dipped low and ran at Izuku with her arm held back, but her palm open. Once she was close enough she let out a palm strike and aimed for Izuku's chest. The green-haired teen saw this coming and put off a cross block over his chest. When the attack hit him, Izuku was surprised by the power she had, so much so he jumped back a few feet. Holy hell. Izuku thought as he rubbed his forearm. I knew she was strong, but that attack was almost ridiculous. Izuku was knocked out of his thoughts when he saw Kendo run at him again. The orange-hair girl started to throw palm strike after Izuku, though the teen was able to dodge them all at the skin of his teeth, that didn't stop his worries. Acting fast, Izuku backflipped and managed to kick Kendo right in the chin. The girl's head was spinning hard from the blow, but she grits her teeth and managed to keep focused. When Izuku touched the ground, Kendo was on him in a second. When Kendo throws another palm strike, she pulled back at the last second and throws a high kick instead. Izuku was caught off guard by the sudden kick and only had enough time to block the attack with his arm. Like last time, Izuku was shocked at how strong Kendo's attack was, but this time he was ready. Izuku grabbed Kendo's leg in a tight grip before jumping off the ground and slamming both feet into the girl's chest, knocking her to the ground. Izuku then backflipped and landed on the ground with both his feet, though a bit wobble he might admit. Kendo hit the ground with a thud and the wind knocked out of her. Ow, she moaned in pain as she pushed herself up. You're good, can't remember the last time I lost in a normal fight. She said while rubbing her chest. I think he bruised my boob. Izuku breathed softly as he whipped the sweat from his forehead. Same, the only time I've lost was to my older sister and friend, Izuku said, remembering all the times he lost to Lila and Miro in a fight. Honestly, I was shocked at how strong you were. Don't get me wrong, I know girls can be very strong, but that natural strength was still surprising. You can thank my quirk for that, Kendo said as she brought up her hand, and in an instant, her hand grows bigger than her body. My quirk is called Big Fist, the name kind of speaks for myself. I can enlarge my fist in an instant to this exact size. And carrying it is no joke. Whoa, Izuku muttered as he looked at her giant hand, seeing her lift it with her arm easily. That's a great quirk you have, Kendo. He said as the girl shrunk her hand. You think so? Kendo asked with a tilt of her head. She heard compliments about her quirk from the past, but they were always common stuff like it's cool to be big or it's great for smashing stuff. Izuku nodded with a grin on his face. Yup, it's a quirk great for close combat, thanks to your body staying the same you can still enter buildings without any problem. And since they can change instantly, if you throw a punch and switch to your big fist just as you're about to hit, you can do some serious damage. Plus there are no major weaknesses other than the lack of long-range possibilities, other than throwing stuff that is. Endo blinked at Izuku with a shocked expression on her face. Wow, you summed up my quirk pretty good. She said though she thought a little different. Almost scary good. Izuku gave the girl a mischievous smile. You just thought what I did was scary good right? He said, getting his answer in a shocked expression. Don't worry, you're not the first, and you won't be the last. He said, getting a small laugh out of her. So, since you know so much about my quirk, mind telling me what yours is? Kendo asked with a curious expression. Despite hearing that Izuku came first in the entrance exam, she hadn't heard anything about his quirk. Actually, I don't have a quirk, I'm quirkless, Izuku said with no hesitation. What? Kendo shouted with a shocked expression. But you ranked first in the entrance exam, not only that you fought villains. No offense, but how can a quirkless teen do all that? Kendo asked with a genuine expression on her face. Well, as you saw from our fight, I trained in martial arts, and I'm an expert marksman, Izuku said as he walked to his bag in the corner. He then pulled out his bow, a regular arrow, and an empty soda can. He then tossed the can to Kendo, who caught it by surprise. Toss that can however you want, and I bet you I can hit it before it touches the ground. Kendo weighed the can in her hands before giving a small shrug. Alright. She said as she winded her arm up and chucked the can as hard as she could. Twang. Shink. Only for an arrow to hit it just a few feet away from her. Kendo blinked in shock at how fast Izuku was able to make the shot. That's how I got into UA, Izuku said with pride as he put his CC down. And how I was able to last this long. Kendo gave a small laugh as she put her hands up. Point taken. She said while glancing at the can. I guess heroes come in all shapes and sizes, even quirkless ones. Well, for my case it's different. As far as I know, there has never been a quirkless hero before. Izuku said with a shrug. What, really, never? Kendo asked, trying to recall someone coming to be a quirkless hero, but was coming up with a blank. Izuku pointed at the other martial arts. There, you can't recall a single person ever to come to be a quirkless hero. Izuku then gave the girl a grin. I'm history in the making. Kendo laughed at that, though she was truly impressed with her fellow president. I'm looking forward to seeing that. She said before a confident smile crossed her face and she raised her arms. So, since we both need to get stronger, how about a few more spars? Izuku grinned at the challenge and walked over to the mat again. You want to use your quirk this time? He asked as he stood in the center of the mat. Kendo walked to the center of the mat and went into her fighting stance. Nope, I'm going to beat you at your own game, Midoriya. That made a wicked grin cross the archer's face as he got into his fighting stance. Well, this just got interesting. He said before they started round 2. Izuku walked down UA's long hallway with a slightly bruised cheek. Okay, maybe we should have stopped at round 9, Izuku muttered as he moved with a very slight limp. 11 fights with Kendo and Izuku had to admit she was very skilled. Out of the 11 fights, Izuku lost about 4 of them to Kendo. Her arms were very strong for a girl her size, and her technique was solid. Her attacks mostly consisted of rapid palm strikes or deadly chops and punches. That didn't mean she wasn't a stranger to a good kick, it just wasn't as useful when she could fight with giant fists. Boom. Izuku was knocked out his thoughts by the explosion, making him sigh as he looked up to see a familiar sign. Maze at it again, Izuku muttered as he entered the support course workshop. Inside he saw tools scattered about with a smoking Mei standing in front of some kind of broken robot. The pink-haired girl whipped the soot from her face and grinned at the invention, despite it being destroyed. Well, back to the drawing board, Mei said with a smile as she grabbed some tools. Izuku saw the pink-haired girl was wearing her usual baggy cargo pants and black tank top along with her specially made goggles on her head. As Izuku looked closer at the girl, he instantly noticed the dark circles under his eyes, making him frown. Mei, Izuku said in a warning tone, making the girl stiffen slightly. The young inventor turned to Izuku with sweat running down her face along with a forced smile. Hey Izuku, how's it going? Mei said while looking away from the green-haired teen. Have you been staying up late again? Izuku asked in a warning tone as he put his hands on his hips. Oh, I wouldn't say that, Mei said, sweating even harder and trying to look away from Izuku. The green-haired teen sighed and walked up to his friend. Mei, what did we talk about? He scolded, making Mei look down. I need at least 8 hours of sleep every night and not to stay up late, Mei said in a down tone while looking to the floor. And why? He pressed, making sure she remembered why he was concerned. Because my neuroreceptors will lose their sensitivity to serotonin and epinephrine, May said in a down tone. Which leads to impaired cognitive function, May said in the same tone. Exactly, Izuku said with a smile. And you'll only lose time and effort if you continue to push yourself. So find a nice place and take a nap. May gave Izuku a pout while sticking out her bottom lip. But I don't want to go to bed. Cute, Izuku thought before shaking his head. May, please, for me at least. I need my top inventor to be in perfect conditions to make me one of the best heroes ever. Izuku praised, getting a smile out of her. May has a lot of pride in her skill as an inventor, so getting praised by a close friend always felt good to her. Fine. May sighed as she started to feel exhaustion take over. Can you find Iron Bear for me? I think he got caught in the blast. Sure, Izuku said with a smile as he started to look around. It took a while, but Izuku was able to find the stuffed animal under a table with some broken parts around it. The toy looked to be in the shape of the bear with a ton of gadgets attached to it. Iron Bear was a gift Izuku gave May on her birthday when they celebrated together. It made her happy and she took it whenever she worked on a new invention. When Izuku returned to May, he was surprised to find her already sleeping in a chair, drool running down the corner of her face. Izuku shook his head with a smile and picked the girl up easily before placing her down on a nearby couch. He found a thin blanket not far away and managed to cover May before placing the bear in her arms. Giving a small sigh, Izuku sat on a chair next to the couch and brought up his Quirk notebook. Glancing at the time, Izuku saw it was only 11 in the morning, so he still had enough time before he needed to go home and take Yuri to the park like he promised. As Izuku worked in his notebook, the door to the room opened to reveal Power Loader himself walking in with a concerned expression. When the teacher saw May resting next to Izuku, he sighed relief. When I didn't hear any more explosions, I thought the worst. He said, making Izuku snort as he understood what he meant. So how did you get her to finally sleep? He asked in a hopeful voice, hoping to learn a trick or two with how to deal with May. Izuku just shrugged. She did the same thing at my house, so I pointed out how if she's so sleep-deprived she'll start to break more of her babies from her own mistakes. Our loader stared at Izuku for a long moment before pulling out a piece of paper and writing something on it. Once finished, he handed the paper to Izuku, who took it with a raised brow. When he read the note, he was a bit shocked at what it said. All accused passed to the support course from Power Loader. When Izuku gave the teacher a raised brow, who held his hands up in defense. Hey, you're the only one who seems to have a handle on her. She's been up ever since she heard Wano was attacked yesterday. She's been working non-stop. That made Izuku give May a surprised look. Really? He asked, a small smile on his face at the sleeping girl. Yeah. So please, come more often and try to keep May in check. He said before walking to the teacher's office. Izuku shook his head and sat back down next to May before turning to his quirk book. Looking over some pages, Izuku had practically written every quirk and wanted down from how to use them to how to counter them. Izuku mostly did this in case he ever had to face one in a fight or he fought a villain with a similar quirk. This continued for a few hours before again the door to the room opened, but this time 2 new people entered the room. What happened here? Momo asked as she glanced around the room, shocked to see it in such a state. Yes, it is highly unprofessional for the support course to be kept in such a shhh. Izuku shushed Iida's shouting, making them jump when they noticed him. She's resting. He said while pointing to the sleeping May. The 2 walked over and gave the sleeping girl a confused look. What happened? Momo asked with a concerned look on her face. She pulled an all-nighter and was still working by the time I got here, Izuku said while shaking his head with a laugh. I had to force her to sleep before she collapsed. Is this a friend of yours, Izuku? Momo asked while she looked at the sleeping girl. Izuku nodded with a smile. Yup, not only that, she's like my inventor. All my gear was made by her, from my bow CC to my combat armor. Wow, Momo said, impressed someone her age was able to make all the gadgets Izuku used to fight. It's true, I saw her working on Izuku's gauntlet when I visited his home, Iida said with a nod. So why is she so tired, Izuku? Iida asked with a tilt of her head. Izuku sighed and rubbed his head. She has a habit of staying up late working on inventions, sometimes even days. She heard about the USJ invasion and got worried about my health, so she started to make inventions like crazy. Momo gained a wide smile as she put a hand over her mouth. I see. She said while giving Iida a knowing look, one he returned. Izuku didn't see the look and continued to speak. I was planning to see if she can make me a sword to use, if only temporarily, since the one I had was destroyed. Sword. May shot up with a loud shout, her eyes wide open. The 3 heroes in training jumped a good foot in the air, all with a shocked expression as they turned to the pink-haired girl. May, what the hell? Izuku yelled as he put a hand over his heart. Are you trying to scare us to death? he said, but the girl was already moving. May went straight to her workstation and started to look over her blueprints. Where is it, where it is? She muttered before pulling out a small blue paper. Bingo. She said as she started to write down on the paper. The three heroes in training gave the girl a strange look before one of them spoke up. Hatsumi Ida said as they made their way over to the girl. May blinked before looking back. Izuku, and some girl and boy I never met, May said, making Iida's eye twitch. We met at Izuku's party, Iida said while pushing his glasses up, clearly annoyed at being forgotten. May tilted her head before snapping her fingers. Oh right, you were that stiff guy. She said, making Iida fall to his knees. Have we met before? May asked Momo, who shook her head. No, I'm the vice president of 1A Momo Yaoi Rozu, Momo said before giving a friendly bow. It's nice to meet one of Izuku's friends. Cool, you too, I'm May Hatsum, May says before going right back to the blueprint. Izuku gave a small sigh as he walked over to the girl and looked at the blueprint she was working on. So, want to explain why you scared us half to death? Well, earlier I was working on your new sword, May said as she pointed to the side, but didn't take her eyes off the blueprint and started to write again. Izuku followed May's direction and was surprised to see a katana almost identical to Flash Fang, only with the grip and sheath being black and gold. The archer quickly walked up to the sword and grabbed it in his hands. Holy hell, it's practically the same, Izuku muttered as he took the sword out of its sheath and swung it around, only feeling a tiny difference to the sword, one he could easily ignore. This is great, May, I can't wait to use it. It's not enough, May cut the green tin off, surprising him a bit at the serious tone. It's a good sword, but it's not enough. Izuku glanced at the sword before sighed as he sheathed the sword. May, I don't need any crazy inventions you have, this sword is more than perfect. May glanced at Izuku and met his eyes. I'm not making any missile-launching swords if that's what you're wondering. But I'm not just making any sword, come here and look at this. She said while holding up the blueprint. Placing the sword down, Izuku walked up to May and grabbed the blueprint. The first thing he noticed was that it was not one of her usual blueprints with robots or some other gadget, but a chemical formula instead. Since when did you get into chemistry? Izuku asked as he looked the blueprint over, trying to make heads or tails of it. May was a genius hands down, but her specialty was robotics and machinery. She was good at chemistry, but was lacking when compared to her other skills. Since this idea was floating around my head ever since I heard your sword was destroyed, May said as she took the blueprint back and went back to work. Swords are fairly weak when up against strong quirks. It doesn't take a genius to know that someone on All Might's level could shatter it to a million pieces. Izuku nodded while narrowing his eyes. Swords were a very uncommon weapon used in the present hero world. There were so many powerful quirks that can bend and break steel that even a well-crafted sword would be as useful as a plastic butter knife against a villain. Izuku could only use his sword for emergency close-quarter combat or if something needed to be cut, but a straight-up fight with a villain was not the best move. His chose to fight Shigaraki with Flash Fang was one of the reasons he was so disappointed in himself. He knew that Shigaraki Quirk would be able to destroy Flash Fang with a single touch, even his armor wouldn't have stood a chance, yet he decided to use it anyway, in hopes of just to hold him off and possibly weaken him. He should have used his arrows more instead of his sword. Long-range fighting was his best skill, not swordsmanship. So what's your idea? Izuku asked as he glanced at the blueprint. May put a hand on her chin and started to the blueprint. Well, this is more of a long shot, but I was trying to come up with a formula to make a stronger metal, May said as she tapped her chin. The idea is that the metal would be more stable at a molecular level, making it increasable hard to break. She said before scratching her head. I was going to use steel as the base metal, but now I'm thinking of using iron instead. Izuku looked at the blueprint one more time along with Momo and Iida. That's an incredible idea, Hatsum, Momo said, clearly impressed with the blueprint. I can see that you're thinking of using chemical resin in hopes to accomplish this. May looked at the busty girl with a surprised look before she grinned and nodded. Right. You're really smart, are you in the support course? Momo gave a small laugh, though she gave May a strange look. No, I'm in the hero course with Iida and Izuku. I'm the vice president, remember? Izuku gave a small sigh as he turned to his vice president. Sorry about May, she's very focused on her work and only remembers people who benefit her or she's taken an interest in. Interest, huh? Momo said while giving herself a small giggle, though nobody notices the giggle and continued to speak. Izuku had a thoughtful look on his face as he looked to May. Have you thought about condensing the metal? That might help with making it more stable. May nodded but waved her hand. That was one of the first things I did. The metal was stronger, but because it was so condensed it was incredibly heavy, making it impossible for someone without a strength quirk to use. May said before a big smile crossed her face. Though that metal won't do you any good, it's still very useful to others. Izuku gave Mei a smile before a thumbs up. Failure is the mother of all inventions, Izuku said, remembering Mei's favorite quote from Thomas Edison. Right. Mei shouted while giving Izuku her thumbs up. Suddenly Izuku was it with an idea. Wait a minute, why doesn't Momo help you? He said, making the two girls look to him. Momo is very smart when it comes to formulas, and with her quirk creation, it should help you out. It's true, Yaoi Rozu is a very skilled hero in training and is very knowledgeable. Iida added while throwing his hand up in the air. Mei turned to Momo and her eyes zoomed in. So, you think you can give me a hand? Mei asked with a grin. Momo smiled and nodded. I will be more than happy to. The next few hours were spent with the girls working together on a new metal formula while the guys tried to help and keep up, though it was clear that the girls were leagues ahead of the guys. They had made some progress much faster thanks to Momo's quirk, but nothing stronger than tungsten. As expected of the class's vice president and the top student of the support course, Iida said while on his hands and knees, his brain overloaded from all the complex information he tried to absorb. Izuku gave a small laugh as he rubbed his head, feeling his headache from trying to keep up with the girls. Things get pretty intense from trying to keep up. He said before turning to Mei and Momo, who was talking over a blueprint. So, any progress? The girls talked for a few moments before smiling and turning to Izuku. I think we have something, Mei said before looking to Momo. Care to do the honors? Mei asked with a smile. Momo nodded before unbuttoning the bottom of her shirt. The girl tightens her eyes shut before a large metal beam shot out of her stomach and landed on the floor with a loud thud. She then held her hands over the table before making several glass jars filled with some kind of chemical. Once she was done, Momo let out a sigh before whipping her brow from sweat. Thanks, Yaoi Rozu, this is perfect, Mei said as she picked the metal off the floor with a grunt. She then turned to Izuku and gave him a confident smile. It'll take a while, but I'll have your sword done as soon as I can. Izuku gave Mei thumbs up. I'm counting out you, pro-inventor. He said, making Mei blush a bit. So, you got a name for this super metal you're making? Mei looked up in thought while tapping her chin with her finger. After a few moments, a wide smile crossed her face as she turned to everyone. Yeah, I got one. How does adamantium sound? The next day UA was open and the class was back in session. Everyone was present for class, except for Izawa. Everyone in the class was talking about last night's news. Nearly every channel was dedicated to Class 1A and how they came out of the villain attack unharmed, putting everyone in the spotlight. Mostly everyone was excited about being on TV so soon, others were still shocked that they were attacked in the first place. Some were even talking about the fights they had with some of the villains. Overall, the class as a whole seemed to have gained some confidence from the attack. Suddenly Iida came speed walking into class and stood in front of the class right behind Izawa's desk. Everyone. Morning homeroom is about to start. Stop talking and take your seats. Iida shouted behind the next. Izuku sighed as he leaned against his arm on his desk. Iida, you don't have to worry, everyone is already at their seat, Izuku said with a small smile. All that's left is you. Shoot. Iida pouted as he sat in front of Ichako, who gave him a carefree smile. Don't worry about it. She said with a friendly voice. Izuku glanced around the class to see if everyone was seated before he noticed Shiro wave at him. Hey Midoriya, do you know who's going to be teaching our class today? Shiro asked while looking at the door. Izuku sighed and shrugged. I have no idea, I tried asking the principal, but he said not to worry. He said before leaning back in his chair. Honestly, I think Izawa going to come in. But wasn't he injured? Jiro asked, hearing the conversation behind her. He was, but it was nothing seriously critical. Plus with recovery girl skills and quirk, it's not too far-fetched for him to be back in class. Izuku said, making the two nod softly. Just as Izuku finished talking, the door opened with a loud bang and Izawa walked into class. He had a large patch over his eye and one of his arms was in a sling, though overall he still looked his same grouchy self. Morning. He said as if it were a normal day. Damn, that's dedication, Kirishima muttered, seeing as he saw the hero walk behind his desk with little effort. Sensei, are you alright? Iida asked with concern. Don't concern yourself with me, I've had worse in the past. He said before looking to the class. But remember, the battle hasn't ended for you yet. He said, getting a confused look from the class. The battle? Bakugo said with a confused look on his face. You don't mean? Izuku trailed off with a worried look on his face. More villains, Mineta screamed in fear. Izawa meant a different kind of battle. UA's sports festival is approaching, boys and girls. The sports festival. I keep forgetting this is an actual school. Izuku felt like hitting himself in the head as he forgot one of the biggest events UA hosts every year, the sports festival. The UA sports festival was both similar but very different from a normal school festival. Every year UA hosts a large tournament for students to show off their quirk, skill, and fighting capabilities for the world and other heroes to see. This allowed students to get noticed by big-time heroes and possibly be recruited to a hero agency as a sidekick or more. Izuku had watched every UA sports festival and knew a great deal about UA's style of holding them. Wait, hold up. That sounds like something villains would try to infiltrate, isn't it? Will it be alright? Someone asked in a concerned tone. On the contrary. Since we're going ahead with the festival, it means that the school is confident it has all its ducks in a row when it comes to its crisis control now, Aizawa explained while scratching his cheek. I hear police presence will be 5 times bigger than normal, for example. Plus you've got to take into account the number of pro heroes that will be there, Izuku said, grabbing everyone's attention. The stadium UA will be using will be filled to the brim with pro heroes from all across Japan, and some even overseas. No villain group would be stupid enough to attack an army of heroes. Aizawa nodded his head. Midori is right, security will not be an issue. What you should be thinking about is what a huge chance the Academy's sports festival presents for you all. He said in a confident tone. This isn't some event that'll be brought to a halt by the likes of villains. No, if villains do appear, can we halt it please, Mineta said while shaking in his seat. Izuku couldn't help but give the short teen a weird look. Mineta, have you never seen the UA sports festival? He asked with a raised brow while looking back. Of course I have. That's not it at all. Before Mineta could continue, Aizawa cut him off. Our sports festival is one of Japan's biggest events. In days past, the Olympics was the sports festivity that whipped all the nation into a front of enthusiasm. But now, as you know, the extent and population have shrunk and it's lost a lot of substance. So what has taken the place of the Olympics in Japan is the UA Sports Festival. Izuku nodded to Aizawa's words. Before quirks, the Olympics was one of the biggest events in the past where nations competed against each other on equal footing. However, with quirks coming into play no one had any equal footing anymore. Since quirks raised the bar on what it meant to be equal. That didn't mean the Olympics were gone, the countries of the world still kept the tradition and held the Olympics every few years. It was just no longer as big of an event as it was in the past. The country's top heroes are all sure to be watching us. Momo said, grabbing Mineta's attention. It's because they'll be scouting for us and other potential students. I'm thinking I might follow the tactic of going sidekick for a pro heroes agency after graduation. Kaminari said to Jiro with a grin. But there are loads of people who get stuck as sidekicks forever and miss their chance to break as solo heroes. And you seem like just that kind of dumbass, Kaminari, Jiro said with a grin making the blonde sulk. Naturally, Aizawa spoke up, making everyone quiet down. Entering the agency of a famous hero will get you higher status and more experience. Remember, time is limited. If you get noticed by a pro, that gives you the standing for a brighter future than otherwise. He said, grabbing every single person's attention. This is the chance you'll get only once a year for a total of 3 chances. If you aim to be a hero, this is an event you can't overlook. He said, making everyone serious about the sports festival. Izuku thought about what he would do after he graduated. From what Kaminari said, the most common thing every hero did was become a sidekick to a pro at an agency before going off on their own, but it was also possible for that hero to stay a sidekick for their whole career. The young archer didn't know what exactly he planned to do after he graduated, what he did know was that he would form his hero group at some point. What Izuku did know however was that he would show the world at the UA Sports Festival what a quirkless archer can do. After the end of the 4th period, it was noonday break, allowing everyone to finally talk about the sports festival. I mean I knew it was coming, but now I feel like the tension is flying high. Kirishima shouted while pumping his fist. If we put in the effort and stand out to a pro, it'll be a giant leap forward. Shiro added. Looks like everyone is getting pumped up, Izuku said as he could feel his excitement building up. Don't you feel it, too? Iida asked while moving his hands as his body shook. You've enrolled in UA to become a hero, so getting fired up is only natural, man. He said, a bit out of character for him. Iida's got an oddball way of unleashing his passion. Weirdo. Sayu said bluntly as she grabbed her lunch. Oh don't worry Iida, Izuku said with a grin. I'm getting fired up too. He said with a thumbs up. Izuku, Iida. The two turned around to the familiar voice, only to see something very out of place. Let's crush it. The sports festival. Achako said with a serious face and aura around herself, catching everyone off guard. Whoa, your face, Yurikaka. Your face. Some people yelled freaked out. What's up with her? Yurikaka's being, kind of, not Yurikaka. Mina said while tilting her head. Maybe it's PM. Before Mineta could finish his sentence, Sayu slapped him in the cheek hard with her tongue. Achako suddenly turned to the guys while throwing her fist in the air. Guys. I'm gonna. Go for it. She shouted in a scary tone with a fire in her eyes. Izuku throws his arm in the air a little awkwardly, clearly caught off by Ichako's sudden fire. Now that I think about it, I haven't asked why she wants to be a hero. After Izuku, Iida and Ichako left class and made their way to lunch, Izuku popped the question, and the answer was a little surprising, to say the least. For money? Izuku said with a shocked look on his face along with Iida. You want to be a hero for the money? Ichako blushed as she rubbed the back of her head. Yeah, I guess ultimately. She said as she frowned in embarrassment. Man, sorry, I know it sounds lame. Like I'm not being a pure as a hero. Iida especially is doing it for high-minded principles and stuff, not to mention Izuku is doing it to prove the world he can be a hero and create a hero group one day. I'm so embarrassed. She said while hiding her face behind her hands. Don't be. Iida shouted as he started waving his arms around rapidly. Why, what on earth is there not to admire about applying yourself to aim for a comfortable life? Plus you're not any less of a hero for wanting money, Izuku said while smiling at the girl. I always say actions speak louder than words. Remember during the entrance exam when you saved me, you could have just run away to save your skin, but instead, you and Iida saved me without any hesitation. You had nothing to gain but you didn't hesitate, that's what makes you a hero. He said, making Ichako smile a bit. Though I have to admit, it's a little unexpected. Ichako started to fidget uncomfortably as she avoided eye contact. I'm working at our construction company, but there's just no real work out there, so we're flat broke. She said in a worried tone. Construction? Iida said with some confusion. Izuku gained a thoughtful look on his face. With a quirk like yours, if you gained permission to use it by the government, it'd be super effective in construction work, not to mention economical. Your quirk would replace all the heavy machines needed. I know, right? Ichako suddenly shouted, making the two guys jump at her tone. That's what I told my dad. She said as she gained a down look. But. Ichako went on to explain that when she was younger she had asked her father to work at their construction company. Her dad instantly refused, saying it was a parent's job to push their kids to go for their dream and for the child to grow. Ichako gripped her skirt before she turned to Izuku and Iida, and for the first time since Izuku met the girl, he saw a look of pure determination. I'm going to become a hero and earn money, without fail. And I'm going to give my mom and dad the easy life they deserve. Izuku and Iida were momentarily speechless, completely caught off guard by the girl's determination. Irakaka, bravo. Iida shouted while clapping his hands, making the girl blush red. Izuku smiled and put his hands in his pocket. You know there's nothing to be ashamed about wanting to provide for your family, in fact, it's very admirable. You guys, Ichako said softly as she started to tear up. Before Ichako could say anything else they were quickly interrupted by none other than All Might himself, popping out from around the corner. Uo. There you are, Midoriya, my boy. All Might shouted, making the three jump. All Might, the three shouted in shock, clearly not expecting the hero to suddenly show up. What are you doing here? The hero cleared his throat. Would you care to have lunch with me? He asked in a bashful tone as he held up a lunchbox. You sound like a teenage girl. Ichako spit laughed. Izuku knew All Might wanted to talk about something important, so he decided to cover for him. So you want to talk about the USJ attack, make sure I didn't miss anything, Izuku said, while giving him a knowing look. All Might instantly catch on and nodded his head. Yes, just one final interview before we can put this whole thing behind us. Izuku nodded before he turned to his friends. I'll try to catch up with you as soon as I can. Take your time, and don't worry, we completely understand. Iida said while throwing his arm up, and Ichako nodded. With that, the two started to make their way to the lunchroom, while All Might and Izuku quickly walked to a private room together. The two entered a room not far, and Izuku saw a familiar person sitting on a stool. Mirio? Izuku said as All Might closed the door behind him and turned into his real form. The happy blonde gave Izuku a smile and a small wave. Izuku, it's been a while. Izuku gave a small laugh as he sat next to Mirio in the second stool. Sorry, things have been busy lately. He said, making Mirio nod in understanding. So, you know why we were called in? No idea, I'm as in the dark as you, Mirio said while crossing his arms. All Might sat down on the couch as he started to make some tea, a serious look on his face. There's a reason I called the two of you here, he said in a serious voice, making the teen sit up at attention. My time limit has been reduced again. He said, making the two swallow. How long? Mirio asked with a hard look on his face that almost seemed unnatural on him. All Might closed his eyes and sighed. A little less than an hour. An hour, Mirio and Izuku shouted in shock, clearly caught off guard by the large time reduction. All Might nodded grimly to the two. Yeah, that's my current limit. And it's getting shorter all the time. He said as he poured some tea. At the moment, I can manage to stay in my muscle form for maybe 2 hours if I'm stretching it. Damn, Izuku said while clicking his teeth with a down look along with Mirio. I'm sorry all. You don't need to apologize, boy. We're all very similar, aren't the three of us? All Might said as he whipped the blood from his mouth. But there's a reason I called you two here. Tagada. Yes sir? Mirio asked while grinning. How goes your control of One for All? All Might asked with some concern. Mirio folded his arms and had a thoughtful look on his face. Thanks to Izuku's help I can regulate the power and I no longer break my own body. However I can only use about 20% at the moment and combining the power with my fighting style has been a bit difficult. All Might nodded at that. That's still good progress, it shouldn't be long before you have full control of One for All. He said, making Mirio smile with pride. Now, Midoriya. Yes. The green-haired teen said as he stood a little straighter. Let's talk about the UA Sports Festival. All Might said, making Izuku nod. As it stands, you're still a long way from forming your hero group and forming the symbol of hope, just as Tagada is far from becoming the next symbol of peace. All Might said as he let out a long sigh. To be blunt with you two, I don't have much time left to stand as the symbol of peace anymore. But Izuku trailed off while Mirio looked down. It was a sobering thought that All Might's hero career was coming to an end. And there are those biding in the hive of villainy who have already noticed. He said before pointing to the both of them. I have entrusted you two to not only inherit myself, but also surpass me. All Might said, surprising the two a bit. Midoriya, the UA Sports Festival is a big event that the whole country will be taking note of. What I'm trying to say is this. As a hero of the next generation who's aiming to create a symbol of hope, you Izuku Midoriya have arrived. And I want you to make that known to the world. Izuku swelled with determination as he nodded to All Might, no matter what Izuku was going to do his best at the UA Sports Festival. Mirio grinned as he throws his arm around Midoriya's shoulder and put him in a headlock. You got this Izuku. He said, making Izuku laugh. All Might smiled at the two teens before he cleared his throat. Midoriya, do you know or remember how the UA Sports Festival works, right? Midoriya pulled away from Mirio and nodded his head. Yeah, of course. Izuku said with a grin. The respective departments of support, management, general education, and heroics will be mixed into a hodgepodge and organize various compactions as preliminary elimination rounds for each grade level, such as the freshman, sophomore, and senior. The winning students move up to compete in the main event which is the same every year. A one-on-one tournament with the 16 remaining students. The last one standing is the winner of the sports festival. Correct. In other words, it's your chance to present yourself. All Might said while pointing to the young teen. Wait, you're telling me to win the sports festival? Izuku said in shock. It is your best bet to accomplish your dream, Mirio said with a nod. When I won my sports festival heroes from all over the country tried to get me to intern with them, I even got some requests from overseas. If you win. People will take you seriously and not see you as just a quirkless teen. Izuku sighed as he nodded at Mirio's words. There were going to be people in the world who thought he shouldn't even be a hero for the simple fact he was quirkless. If he got low in the sports festival, no hero agency will want a quirkless teen with a low rank. Izuku had to prove that he belonged in the hero world. It's not going to be easy, there are a lot of talented students in the hero course and even some dangerous ones in the other courses, Izuku said before he looked at All Might with pure determination. But I'll give it my all and win. He said, making the All Might and Mirio smile. All Might suddenly clear his throat. Before you go Midoriya, there is something I must clear with you. He said, grabbing the young teen's attention. Since you came first in the entrance exam you are required to speak as the student's representative. That made Izuku's eyes widen. Wait, I have to speak in front of the entire stadium and to everyone watching, Izuku said slowly as sweat ran down his face. Crap he said simply, making the two laugh. Don't worry, it's not that difficult, Mirio said while giving him a thumbs up. Just say what's on your mind, such as a heroic speech or words of encouragement from your classmates. He said, making Izuku nod slowly. Also, since you came first in the entrance exam the school has provided you with 3 tickets to the sports festival. All Might said as he pulled 3 tickets from his coat. You're allowed to bring anyone you please. Whoa, seriously? Izuku shouted with a shocked look on his face. I'm surprised there's any room left. The UA Sports Festival was one of the biggest events in Japan. Because of this getting tickets was next to impossible for most people and the top pros were the ones with early access to the tickets. Izuku was going to give 2 of the tickets to his mom and Eri, as for the third. I wonder if Lila can make it. Izuku asked himself, hoping she could take some time off from her hero work. Thanks for everything All Might. The pro hero smiled and waved him off. All this is you kid, you're the one who brought yourself here. Izuku nodded and gripped his fist tight. I've got 2 weeks until the sports festival until then I'm going to train like crazy. And I'll help you, Mirio said while giving him a thumbs up to Izuku. It's been a while since we spared. It just made Izuku laugh with some dread. I want to be strong for the sports festival, not in a body cast. He said, only for Mirio to laugh. What the heck. After Izuku left All Might and Mirio, he quickly made his way to the lunchroom before continuing with his day. It was currently after school and just as everyone was about to leave they were blocked off by a mob of students. They're crowding the exit. Why are they here for? Mineta asked in a worried tone. They're scouting out the competition, retard. Bakugo said as he walked to the door, though Mineta was left shocked at being called a retard. They want to see the guys who came through the villain ambush. They're checking us out before the big battle, asshole. Izuku rubbed his head while letting out a small breath. I'm starting to feel like you have Tourette's or something with how often you curse for no reason. Bakugo clicked his teeth and just glared forward. It's pointless to try, so why don't you just fuck off, you goddamn extras. He said, ignoring Izuku. Don't go calling people you don't know extras right off the bat. He yelled while Izuku shook his head. I came to see what you kids are made of, true, but I didn't think you'd be this arrogant. Izuku blinked at a familiar voice as the person started to make their way to the front of the crowd. Are all the kids enrolled at the Department of Heroics this way? Izuku was slightly shocked to see Shinso Hitachi standing at the front of the crowd. When the two made eye contact, Shinso gave Izuku a small grin before turning back to Bakugo. Ah, Bakugo growled softly while glaring at Shinso. I'm a bit disappointed. So that's it, huh? Shinso said while giving Bakugo a flat look and rubbing the back of his head. There's a lot of kids who wind up in the general education department or other departments because they failed the heroics one. Did you know that? And based on the results of the sports festival, people can be transferred into the heroics course. However, the reverse is also a possible outcome. He said, shocking everyone. Who heard? Izuku rubbed his chin and gave Shinso a grin. So, this is your declaration of war, huh, Shinso? The purple hair team gave Izuku a nod and his grin. Why not knock you guys down off your high horse, you know? He said with a shrug. Wait, Izuku, you know this guy, Kirishima shouted with a surprised look. Yeah, we met during the entrance exam, Izuku said while throwing his thumb to the purple hair teen. I helped him out a bit when he was dealing with a robot. Shinso rubbed the back of his neck and gave Izuku a grin. This guy saved me from being choked out by a robot. He said before giving Izuku a grin. But don't think that just because you saved me that I'll go easy on you. Just as Izuku finished speaking, another kid jumped forward in the crowd. Hey. You? I'm from class 1B. He said as he pushed through the crowd. This teen had silver hair and eyebrows, not only that he had a row of sharp teeth in his mouth that could give Kirishima a run for his money. I heard you knocked around with villains or whatever. But I don't want to hear it from snot-nosed punk. He shouted while looking at Bakugo. Everyone glanced at Bakugo, expecting him to explode and yell at the mob of students, maybe even show off his quirk. Instead, Bakugo ignored them and started to move forward. Wait a second, man, what did you just do? Kirishima yelled in worry. Now we're gonna get haters all up in our grill. Bakugo glanced back with a passive look on his face. It doesn't matter. What? Kirishima shouted in confusion. None of that matters once you're at the top. He said before making his way out of the classroom. The simple words left an impact on the class, even Izuku himself. Despite being blunt, they did hold some meaning. None of the words or insults matter as long as you reach your goal. Izuku wasn't aiming for the #1 spot in the hero rankings, he was aiming for something different, to create a hero group to become a symbol of hope. We all have goals and dreams we're chasing, nothing should stop us from reaching them. Izuku thought as he felt his determination grow. Suddenly, sparring with Mirio didn't seem like such a bad thing. Mom, Eri, I'm home. Izuku called as he entered his home. Just as Izuku closed the door behind him, an adorable ball came rushing around the corner and slammed into his waist. Welcome back, Izuku. Eri said while looking up with a big smile. Izuku smiled down at the little girl and picked her up in his arms, making her giggle. Hey Eri, how was school? He said while making his way to the kitchen. It was fun, we got to play outside today. She said with a smile as they entered the kitchen. Inko was cooking at her stove as she glanced back with a smile. Welcome home, Izuku, how was your day? Izuku grinned as he placed Eri down on the floor. I got some good news for you too, he said, grabbing both girls' attention. Well, you know how I got first place in the entrance exam? Yeah, you said you fought a bunch of robots, Eri said while chopping her arm up and down. Right. He said with a small laugh, finding it adorable. Well, since I came in first, the school wants me to speak for the player pledge. Oh Izuku, congratulations. Inko said as she gave her son a hug. And that's not the best part, Izuku said as he pulled away from the hug and pulled out 3 tickets. The school gave me 3 tickets to the UA Sports Festival for you guys, box seats. What? Inko shouted in shock. They gave you 3 tickets, that's amazing. Eri, however, tilted her head. What's a sports festival? Izuku knelt to the little girl and pulled out his phone. A sports festival is an event where students compete in different competitions either by themselves or in teams. The ones to do the best get a medal in the end. Izuku pulled off some images of UA's sports festival and showed them to Eri. UA's sports festival is different, however. Since nearly everyone there is allowed you use their quirks, things get wild. He said the best word to describe UA's sports festival. Eri nodded with a smile on her face as she saw all the images of older teens competing in different events. Since you have 3 tickets, can you invite big sis Lila? Eri asked in a hopeful voice. Izuku nodded and smiled down at Eri. Hopefully, that's the plan. He said as he pulled out his phone. I'm going to go to my room and call Lila, call me when dinner's ready. Okay, tell Lila we said hi, Inko said as she got back to cooking. Izuku made his way to his room and dropped all of his stuff onto the floor. The young teen sighed as he glanced around the room, remembering how it changed over the years. There were still tons of All Might merchandise all over the room, but there was also more. There were several photos of Izuku with Clint and Lila training or just spending time together. Off to the side of the room was Izuku's workbench where he worked on his trick arrow, finding new ways to improve them or just keep in stock. There were also some weights and training equipment for Izuku to use to keep in shape or pass the time. Izuku pulled his phone out of his pocket and quickly dialed Lila's number before he saw it his workbench. The phone rang for a few seconds before it was answered. Hello? Hey Lila, it's Izuku. He said with a smile as he leaned back in his chair. Hey little bro, how's it going? Good, I was just told that the UA Sports Festival was in 2 weeks. Yeah, I've been trying to get tickets to that for months, but it's hard when you're a hero from another country. She said with a sigh. And I was looking forward to you kicking so much ass. Izuku grinned as he grabbed one of his arrows on his desk. Well then I got some good news for you, remember how I got first in the entrance exam? Yup, still proud of you for that kid, Lila said with pride. You showed everyone what we archers can do. True. Anyway, turns out since I got first in the entrance exam I'll be making a speech during the opening ceremony. Oh, so the spotlight will be on you, huh? That'll grab some people's attention. Right, but that's not all. Since I got first in the entrance exam UA gave me 3 tickets to the sports festival. What, no way. Lila shouted in shock. Izuku, you've got to give me one, please little bro. Izuku laughed at his sister's desperation. Why did you think I'm calling you? Think you can take some time in the next 2 weeks? No problem, I got a 2-week vacation coming up anyway. Got it after a major bust on a weapons deal. I heard about that, some villain with long legs or something. Yeah, he was a better arms dealer than an actual villain. All I did to beat him was stick my leg out and trip him. Lila said with a laugh. So I'll see you in a week, we can do some training before the sports festival. She said before the call ended. Izuku gave a worrying laugh as he slumped in his chair. Training with Mirio and Lila, he said with a weak laugh as he covered his eyes. Damn, I might not make it to the sports festival. For the next 2 weeks everyone in class wanna train for the upcoming sports festival. Some trained their quirks, others trained their bodies, and some were already training for the standing ovation once they won. For the first week Izuku spared with Mirio to the best of his abilities, but still lost in the end. Mirio's quirk, Permeation, already made fighting him extremely hard, but add one for all and Izuku was practically fighting a mountain. Fortunately Mirio only used his first quirk to spar with Izuku, allowing the teen to get a few good hits in before the blonde beat him. When Lila came it was practically the same. The young woman was faster and more experienced than Izuku, and she was especially deadly with her primary martial art Sambo. Izuku ended more twisted in that 1 week than the whole 5 years he's trained. Once the day finally came for the sports festival, everyone climbed into the car Lila rented before she started to drive to the sports festival. Lila glanced at Izuku in the rearview mirror and gave him a smile as she saw him fidget. You feeling nervous kid? Izuku jumped at Lila's voice, blushing when he saw her cheeky smile. Like you wouldn't believe, plus I'm going to speak to millions of people in just a few hours. It's nerve-wracking. He said with a weak laugh. Eri reached over and patted Izuku on his head, giving him a smile. Don't worry Izuku, you're going to do alright. She said in a comforting tone. Izuku smiled at Eri and brought her into a hug, making her giggle. Thanks Eri, now I know I'll win. Inko smiled at her children and couldn't help but feel pride and happiness. I'm so proud of them. Lila smiled at the siblings' bond before she turned her eyes back on the road. So, is UA allowing you to use any of your weapons? She asked in a slightly worried tone. Despite being skilled in hand-to-hand combat, Izuku's weapons were his bread and butter. Without them he'll have a much harder time fighting. Izuku stopped Lila's worries when she saw him smile at her. Yup, I talked to the principal and he agreed to let me take my sword, bow, arrows, and grapple gauntlet since I am quirkless and I used them during the entrance exam. I just can't have my combat armor or other gadgets. That made Lila sigh a bit. She wasn't underestimating Izuku's skills, but she knew he would have a harder time with the crazier quirks without them. Hell, Lila herself knew she would become next to useless if she didn't have any plastic to use her quirk on. All she would have is her side weapon and martial arts, not the best in the current super-powered world. After a few minutes of driving and some heavy traffic, the group were able to make it to the UA Sports Festival. Wow, there are so many people. Eri said as she looked out the window. Yup kid, UA's Sports Festival is one of the biggest events in the world. Hell, my school didn't even come close to it. Lila said while shaking her head. Huh, do American heroes have their own sports festival? Inko asked as Lila drove into a parking lot. Lila gave a so-so. Kind of, sports festivals are more of a Japanese thing. But ever since quirks came into play, every hero school has some event to show off the next hero generation's skills. My own school had a big tournament with preliminary rounds before the main tournament, she said as she parked the car. Did you win? Izuku asked in a hopeful voice. Lila sighed while looking down. I only made it to the final tournament before losing to a blue elf in the second round, she said, making everyone raise an eyebrow. Alright, everyone out. Everyone climbed out the car and Eri grabbed Lila's hand, making the woman smile. We'll go find our seats Izuku, you go get ready for the sports festival. Inko said while giving her son a smile. And do your best, I know you can do it. Izuku smiled with pride as he gave his mom a thumbs up. You got it mom. Inko smiled lovingly as for a moment she saw her son as a little boy again in all might honesty. My boy is growing up so fast. Inko thought as she quickly whipped away her tears before anyone noticed. Lila smiled at her little brother before she gave him her own thumbs up. Now get out of here and show the world what an archer can do. You can do it big brother. Eri said with her own thumbs up and a big smile on his face. Izuku smiled at his family, suddenly feeling he could take on the world. Right. He shouted before running off. After leaving his family, Izuku made his way to the waiting room with the rest of his class. Everyone was currently wearing their PE uniforms and talking among themselves. Everyone, are your preparations complete? Iida shouted as everyone still talked among themselves. We're set to entree in no time, he said while waving his hands, though everyone barely noticed. Man, Mina whined as she looked down at her PE uniform. I wanted to wear my costume. To keep everything fair, we can't, Ajiro said as he closed a locker. Our costumes give us an edge with our quirks that the other classes can't have. If that's the case then why does Midoriya get his weapons? Mina asked with a pout as she pointed to Izuku looking through his arrows. Izuku put the arrow into the quiver on his back and turned to Mina with a smile. Because there are more rules to the UA Sports Festival than most people realize, he said, grabbing everyone's attention. For instance, outside the hero course, every student is allowed to bring in any supported device and/or weapon into the sports festival. However, there are some exceptions for students in the hero course, Izuku explained. What kind of exceptions? Mina asked while tilting her head. Izuku thought about the best way to explain this before remembering a certain student in his class. Well, a perfect example is Aoyama. Me? The blonde said while pointing to himself, who now had half the eyes in the room. Izuku nodded. Aoyama's quirk, Naval Laser, needs his belt for it to be powerful and useful. Take that away and his laser becomes less powerful and useful altogether, he said, making the blonde look down with a shadow over his face. But thanks to the belt it turns his quirk super flashy, Izuku added quirkily, making Aoyama smile and pose. Glad you see how great my quirk is Midoriya, he said, making everyone sweat drop. So we can only have equipment if it lets us use our quirks. Mina summarized before looking down at her shoes. I guess that's why they allowed me to use my shoes, but you don't have a quirk, so why do you get your weapons? Mina asked with more confusion than jealousy. Because I'm quirkless, Izuku said with a shrug. I need my weapons to give me any chance in a fight, plus the equipment I have is the same from when I took the UA entrance exam. I don't have my armor or the other gadgets I use. The only thing new I do have are the extra trick arrows. Mina finally accepted Izuku's answer but was still pouting. I still wanted to wear my costume, it makes me look so cool, she said, making Ajiro give a weak laugh. Hey, Izuku, Sato called, making the young archer turn to the large teen. Since you're so smart, you got any idea what are the first tasks going to be? Sato asked in a hopeful voice. Izuku gains a thoughtful look. I have no idea what the exact task is going to be. He said, making Sato look down. But I do have a general idea on what it will be like. Now that got everyone's attention. Alright class rep, why don't you tell us what we're facing, Jiro said as she crossed her arms. Izuku put a hand on his chin and started to think. Every year the UA Sports Festival is different but has a lot of things the same. Last year the first event was a giant maze with robots inside of it. Oh yeah, I remember that, Achako said as she rubbed her head. The robots kept popping out left and right. Right, and the year before that was the last man standing event. You mean the one where all the students were standing on a giant wobbly platform and they tried to push each other off, Kirishima said with a grin. Man, that one looked cool. So what you're saying is there's no way to tell what the first event might be, Sato said with some disappointment. Well, not exactly, Izuku said with a shrug. What I can tell you is this. The first event is going to be big, something where it's going to knock most of the students out of the sports festival and only leave about 40 to 100 left. Damn, UA is cutthroat, Jiro muttered while rubbing her neck. The next event is most likely going to be some event where it involves teams of 2 or 4, Izuku said before looking at everyone with a grin on his face. And the last event is always the same every year, a one-on-one tournament with the 16 remaining students. Izuku finished while letting out a breath of air. When he looked up he was surprised to see everyone staring at him. What? You're one scary dude, Midoriya Kaminari said with a laugh, making Izuku blush. Well, I'm quirkless, so I have to have a few tricks up my sleeve, Izuku said with a small laugh. Iida looked at his watch before raising his arm. Everyone, we have 5 minutes before the festival starts. But that everyone started to go through their mental preparations. Aoyama started to pose in front of a mirror as if it was a camera, Jiro listened to some rock and roll, and Tokoyami brooded in a corner. Izuku pulled his bow back and tested the string, glad to see it was still in top condition. Glancing to his side Izuku saw Mineta doing a ritual muttering person 5 times before eating air. Midoriya. Izuku turned to his side to see Todoroki look at him with a cool gaze. Something up, Todoroki? Izuku asked as he shifted CC and placed it at his hip. The 2-colored hair teen looked at Izuku for a moment before he spoke. On an objective basis, I think I'm above you in terms of practical strength. Well, that was blunt, Izuku muttered with a deadpan expression. Yet despite being quirkless you have managed to get All Might's eyes on you, right? Todoroki said, making Izuku's eyes widen a bit. I feel no need to pry into that, but Todoroki looked Izuku dead in the eyes and Izuku could see his determination. I'm going to beat you. Oh ho, what's this, a declaration of war from the strongest kid in class? Kaminari said, making Bakugo growl at not being mentioned as the strongest. Kirishima quickly got up from his chair and grabbed Todoroki by his shoulder. What's with the sudden belligerence? Don't spring this on him right before. Todoroki pulled his shoulder away from the redeed. I'm not here to play nice or make friends. But whatever. Izuku's hair shadowed his eyes before he let out a small sigh. It's true that on power alone, you do outshine me, Todoroki, Izuku said, grabbing everyone's attention. Not to mention you're no slouch with using it. On an objective standpoint, your quirk going against a quirkless teen, the outcome seems pretty obvious on paper. Izuku then grows a wicked grin on his face as he looked Todoroki right in the eyes. Which is why I'm going to beat you. Oh? Todoroki muttered, raising his brow ever so slightly. Izuku leaned against a table and looked right at the ice user. Sure, you might have the strongest quirk in class, but I can say for a fact that I'm the most skilled. He said, and nobody said anything otherwise. It's been an uphill battle for me since I got into UA, being the first quirkless teen to enter the hero course. So to prove myself to the world, I'm going to win the UA Sports Festival. He said as he gained a more serious look. We all got our own goals and dreams driving us, so don't go underestimating anyone here, you understand. The two stared each other down, and neither one flinched, the whole class staring at the two with shock and awe. The moment was broken however when Bakugo let off an explosion and glared at the two. Don't you think too far ahead, Deku, because I'm going to win. A quirkless shit like you won't even get past the first round. Izuku didn't say anything for a long moment before he looked at Bakugo with a curious expression on his face. I'm sorry, what? I was too busy remembering the time I beat you in the battle exam and how I got first in the entrance exam. He said with a wicked grin, making Bakugo turn red with anger. Before Bakugo could move, Kirishima grabbed his shoulder. Easy man, save it for the festival. Speaking of the festival, Iida shouted as he raised his arm. We should get moving, it's almost time to start. Izuku nodded and turned to Todoroki with a grin. I'll see you in the finals. He said before he started to lead everyone out to the stadium. I will win the UA Sports Festival. Todoroki thought as he tightens his fist. and prove that I don't need his quirk. Eri held onto both Inko and Lila's hands as they walked through the stadium. The young girl kept close to the two women as she saw dozens upon dozens of people and heroes flooded the large hallway, making the girl slightly scared. Eri was more comfortable with people she knew or her family knew rather than strangers. Damn, this place is like a maze, Lila muttered as she looked at her ticket before off to the side, trying to where their seats were. I hope we're not late, Inko said with a worried look on her face as she glanced at the time. We're going to miss Izuku's opening speech if we don't find our seat soon. Eri started to worry that she wouldn't be able to watch her big brother make his speech, and that made her a little sad. Suddenly the little girl spotted a familiar tall blonde, making her eyes widen. Big brother Mirio. Eri called out as she ran to the tall blonde. Mirio turned around as he heard his name only for something to slam into his waist. Looking down he smiled when he saw Eri. Hey, Eri, it's been a while, Mirio said as he picked the girl up. A moment later Inko and Lila came rushing by. Eri, you can't go running away like that, Inko said in a worried tone as she caught her breath. That made Eri look down with a sad face. I'm sorry. Inko sighed and rubbed the girl's head. It's alright, just please, don't run off like that again. She said, getting a nod from the girl. And hello to Gata, it's been a while. She said with a bow. Mirio bowed softly. It's good to see you again Ms. Midoriya. He said before turning to Lila and smiled at her. And you must be Ms. Barton, Izuku's older sister. Lila waved her hand. Call me Lila, Ms. Barton makes me feel old. She said while putting a hand on her hip. Mirio nodded to the woman. Then you may call me Mirio. He said before noticing the ticket in Lila's hand. Have you found your seats yet? Lila sighed and rubbed her head. No, I tell you, this place is like a foo-fracking maze. Lila bit her tongue hard, remembering there was a child close by. Eri grabbed Mirio's arm and squeezed it, grabbing the blonde's attention. Can you help us with our seats? Eri asked while tilting her head. Mirio smiled and nodded his head. Of course, he said before looking to Lila. May I see your tickets? Lila shrugged and handed her ticket over, at this point, she would accept any help. When Mirio looked at the seating his eyes widened ever so slightly. Oh, your seats are right next to mine. He said, getting a surprised look from the women. I guess those seats are reserved for special UA guest, my friends are there waiting for me, common. Mirio started to lead the two women with Eri sitting on his shoulders. It wasn't long before everyone found themselves in their seating sections. The booth was large with only a few people inside, some heroes and some students. Not bad, Lila said as she walked to the edge of the booth. These are seriously some of the best seats in the house. She said as she leaned against the railing. Mirio, there you are, what took you so who is this cutie? Everyone turned to see a lavender blur rush up to Mirio in the blink of an eye. The blur turned out to be a girl a few inches shorter than Mirio. She was wearing a UA school uniform, had long lavender hair that reached her lower back and had big blue eyes. The girl was currently trying to reach for Eri, who was hiding behind Mirio's head with a scared look on her face. Heido, you're scaring her. The next teen was on the lanky side. He had indigo hair and eyes, pointy ears, and was also wearing a UA school uniform. But she's so cute Tamaki. Heido gushed while looking at Eri with hearts in her eyes. Hello there, I'm Najire Heido, you can call me Najire. What's your name? Eri peeked behind Mirio's hair slowly to see a smiling Najire. I'm Eri Midoriya. She said in a cute voice, making Najire gush some more. Mirio smiled and pointed to the woman behind her. Najire, Tamaki, I like you to meet Midoriya and Lila, Izuku's family. Izuku, you mean the freshman you've been training with? Najire said as she looked to the two women behind Mirio. It's a pleasure to meet you. Tamaki bowed a bit stiffly and shuddered a bit. It's nice to meet you. He said in a quiet voice before he turned away. Friends of yours? Lila asked while putting a hand on her hip. Yup. Mirio said while giving them a thumbs up. We're all in the same class. So since they're here that means this Izuku Midoriya is in the sports festival? Najire asked in a curious voice. Maybe we'll finally get to meet him after the sports festival. Suddenly a horn went off making everyone turn to the stadium field. The UA Sports Festival. Present Mick shouted thought the stadium. Where the hero worlds inchoed little eggs aim for each other's throats and the top. Our grand yearly melee. And let me guess, all you miscreants came to see. Them, right. The freshly formed miracle stars that shrugged off a mass villain assault with wills of steel. The Department of Heroics freshman class. You're here for class 1A, right? As the hero spoke Izuku's class all walked the main entrance, causing the crowd to cheer for them. I see Izuku. Eri shouted as she pointed down at the group of teens. So that's Izuku. Najire said as she spotted the green hair teen with weapons. Wow, he has a lot of weapons, does he needs it to use his quirk? Everyone but Tamaki shifted slightly at Najire comment. The first one to speak was Lila, who looked down at the arena with a smile. "Why don't you wait and see?" she said as everyone sat down and got ready to watch her little brother kick some ass. "You can do it, kid." Izuku couldn't help but feel shocked as he glanced around the stadium, seeing hundreds of people all cheering for them. And this was only the people present, there were people all over the world watching them, waiting for them to make their entrance. The other students of Class 1 were all nervous but also pumped up. "They want to watch us shine," Izuku muttered as he gazed around. "Then let's give them a good show." "Excellent point, Izuku." Iida shouted while marching next to Izuku, making the team jump. "Let's be sure to do our best," he said, making Izuku shake his head with a small laugh. After President Mick introduced the rest of the classes to the students of UA, everyone gathered to the center of the stadium in front of a large stage. A moment later a certain hero walked on stage and instantly everyone started blushing like crazy. Time for the player pledge. The UA chief umpire this year was none other than the R-rated hero, Midnight. She was an older woman with long dark purple hair, blue eyes, and a very mature body. She wore a tight spandex suit with what looked like BDSM cloths over it, broken handcuffs in her hands, and with a riding crop in her hands. All this made her look like a dominatrix. Izuku found Midnight to be an interesting hero, to say the least, not because of her personality and fashion choice mostly. Her quirk, Somnambulist, is an emission type that allows her to produce gas from her skin that puts people to sleep but was more effective against men. It was very useful for a close-range fight, and from what Izuku had heard, Midnight was far from a slouch when it came to hand-to-hand combat. Most likely not at Izawa's level, but well above the average pro. "What is Midnight wearing?" Kirishima asked with a blush on his face, trying to look away but couldn't. "That's the R-rated hero for you," Kaminari said with a nod, but was drooling out of the corner of his mouth. "Is it okay to be at a high school even though she's R-rated?" Tokoyami said, the only one appearing not to blush. "Yes." Mineta shouted through grit teeth, practically drooling out a waterfall. Before anyone could say anything, Midnight spoke. "Quiet everybody." Midnight shouted before looking right at a certain green-haired teen. Representing the students is Izuku Midoriya from Class 1A. Izuku took a small breath as he started to make his way to the front stage. Izuku's representing us?" Achako asked while tilting her head. "Well, he did place first in the entrance exam, remember?" Shiro said, making Bakugo click his teeth with a scowl. "Yeah, the heroics entrance exam." A girl from the general education corps said with an annoyed huff. "Someone's feeling a bit buttered," Kaminari said with a snicker, getting a glare from the girl as she flipped him off. Once Izuku made it to the stage he was presented a mic facing the stadium with his back to the rest of the students. He looked at the mic for a long moment as complete silence filled the stadium. After a while, he finally spoke. "When I first heard I was going to represent the students, I thought about giving a long-winded speech and stuff with cheesy one-liners," Izuku said with a grin, getting a few laughs from the audience and even the students. "I then realized that wasn't the right thing to say and instead came up with something different," he said with a serious look on his face, getting total silence. He then took one final breath before he spoke. "Not everyone is born equal," Izuku said, instantly getting some murmurs. "Some of us are born with amazing powers, talent and skill, while others have to work for it. Some are unlucky in chasing their dreams and are forced to set back," he said, and he could instantly feel himself getting some glares from the students behind him, clearly hitting a few places close to home. "But right now, all that doesn't matter." Instantly all the murmuring stopped. Heroics, general education, support, even management, none of that matters. Right now, we're all students of UA and all of us with dreams and one goal in mind, Izuku said as he held up his finger. He then grabbed the mic and turned around to face the students, a big grin on his face. "To be number one. So forget whatever you were before, what class you're in, or even why you're there because right now, we're all aiming for the top, including me." As soon as Izuku took a breath the stadium roared with applause. Even some of the students were cheering at Izuku's speech. Damn it, I wanted to hate him, but that was so damn manly," a familiar silver-haired teen shouted with tears in his eyes. "I know," Kirishima shouted as he whipped the tears from his eyes. Izuku wasn't done yet however, as his eyes were still strong, no hint of hesitation. "No turning back now," he thought as he looked to the sky. "If I'm going to be a hero and tell the world I'm here, I'm not going to hold anything back. I mean, if a quirkless teen like me can not only enter the heroics course but get first in the entrance exam, then anything is possible," he said before putting the mic down. The EHHH was the common response through the whole stadium, even some of the students looked shocked. Izuku heard shouts, murmurs, and a few curse words fill the stadium as he put the mic back in its stand. So, you decided to bare yourself to the world and leave nothing to the imagination with little to no hesitation. Midnight said to Izuku in a seductive tone and bedroom eyes, making the teen very uncomfortable. You're almost as bold as me, maybe even bolder. She said before licking her lips. Izuku tried to hold back the shiver and blush but failed miserably. Why lie about who I am? He said before a serious look crossed his face while glancing at his weapons. I'm not going to be ashamed about who I am. If the world can't accept me for who I am, then I'll make them accept me. Dragging them while they kick and scream if I have to. He said with pure determination as he started to make his way back to the crowd of students. Midnight felt a shiver run up her spine as she held her body tightly. So youthful, so bold, so commanding. I like you, kid. She shouted in a hungry voice, making Izuku shiver again. Inside the crowd of students was a particular girl glaring at Midnight for the way she was looking at Izuku. After a moment she shook her head and looked confused. Why am I mad? The girl muttered to herself before she tried to focus on the sports festival. He's quirkless. Nijira muttered with a shocked expression. That's so cool. She shouted with pure excitement. A quirkless hero, the very first, this is history right here, Tamaki. She shouted while shaking the teen, who looked dizzy. Lila folded her arms with a proud look on her face, while Inko looked floored. Why would he say that to the whole stadium? Inko asked with a baffled expression. Because he's not ashamed of who he is, Lila said as she placed a hand on Inko's shoulder, grabbing the woman's attention. He's proud to be Izuku Midoriya, your son, my brother, my father's students. He's not going to lie for one moment about who he is, that includes quirkless. Inko put a hand over her mouth as tears formed in her eyes. She hadn't felt so emotional in a long time, but unlike before, she never felt such happiness and pride. Izuku. Inko cried as tears flowed from her eyes. Everyone smiled at the crying mother as she cheered on for her son. Just as Mirio was about to speak, he was cut off when by an obnoxious snort, followed by a laugh from behind. Oh please, does that kid seriously think he has a chance? An older man said with a laugh while in his hero costume. He's quirkless for crying out loud, a little girl is more useful than him. He said with a booming laugh. He'll fail the first round, cry to his is a mom like why can't I have a super cool quirk instead of being a quirkless nobody? He said before laughing even louder and more obnoxious. Shut up the fat ass. The person said to him growled as he folded his arms. You're just mad a quirkless teen can keep himself in better shape than you and was able to get into UA, well you failed miserably. Hey, I'm not fat, I'm big boned. The man shouted like a child. And so what if he got into UA, he probably cheated his way in. Maybe he even did some under the table favors, if you know what I mean. He said with another laugh. You are the worst. The other man stressed as he moved away as the man continued to laugh. As the man laughed, he didn't notice Lila, Mirio, and Inko release light but menacing auras. Mirio pulled Eri off his shoulder and handed her to Nijira. Please watch Eri, Mirio said with a smile, though it was strained. Alright, Nijira said as she placed Eri on her lap, much to the little girl's confusion. Wow, I haven't seen Mirio so upset before. She thought before glancing back with a flat look. Though I can't blame him. The man continued to laugh and didn't notice Mirio, Lila and Inko standing in front of him until it was too late. Lila cleared her throat, making the man finally stop laughing. Excuse me, would you care to repeat what you just said? Ah. The man said in an annoyed tone, not noticing the looks he was getting. Move out the way, I can't see. I said, Lila said, this time in a harder voice as she creaked her knuckles. Would you care to repeat that? The man finally noticed the danger he was in, causing him to start sweating. Hey, you better not try anything, I'm a pro hero. He said as he leaned back in his seat. I don't recognize you. Mirio said while tilting his head. The man grinned as he stood up from his seat. Not surprising jab, I only work exclusively for America. He said while posing, making Mirio's eye twitch. I am the invincible hero. The coon. Lila's eyes widened in shock and her mouth hung open. Wait, you're the coon? So you've heard of me? The man said while looking at his sharp nails. Yeah, as the worst pro hero ever. Lila said with a glare, making the older man trip. They had to create a whole new class for how bad he is, F class. How is he so bad? Inko said while glaring at the man, still mad for what she said about his son. You name it, aggravated assault against civilians, racism, cursing, and you won't believe the number of times he's messed up an operation to take down, Lila said while rubbing her forehead. He's an embarrassment to pro heroes everywhere, why he even still has his license is nothing short of a miracle. Hey, I'm not F class, if anything I'm S class, maybe even higher. The man said in an annoyed tone. Who are you to judge me? The three glared at the man, making him feel a seance of dread. Lila Barton, aka Hawkeye, the older sister to the quirkless teen you just insulted, Lila said, making the man pale. Mirio Tagada, aka Lemillion, a friend of Izuku, Mirio said with a smile, but you could still feel the annoyed aura around him. I was last year's UA's sports festival winner. He said, making the man pale harder. Inko Midoriya, the mother of the boy you insulted, Inko said, and for a moment the man saw a horn demon behind the woman. Mommy. What Tamaki saw for the next 5 minutes scared the living soul out of him as he saw his friend, the mom and sister teach the man a lesson he would not forget. All the while Nijire cuddled close to Eri, making sure the little girl didn't see what was happening behind her. So Eri, what do you think, can your brother win? Nijire asked while rubbing Eri's head. Eri looked up and thought before smiling. I know Izuku will win, he's strong. Nijire gushed as she held Eri close and the little girl didn't seem to mind. So cute. She squealed, trying to ignore the cries of pain behind her as best she can. Quirkless. A familiar figure muttered slowly as he stared at the TV. The archer doesn't have a quirk. He said, as his body started to shake and he started to scratch his neck excessively to the point he started to bleed. The dark figure standing behind a bar looked at the person in worry. Sir, is everything well? Crash. The figure slowly pulled his bloody fist from the TV as he sat calmly on the floor. Black Mist, go get another TV, now. Right away Shigaraki. The villain said before teleporting away. Shigaraki sat still on the floor while staring at the broken TV, his hand slowly dripping blood onto the floor. Izuku Midoriya Shigaraki said slowly as a laugh escaped his lips. It'll be fun to kill you. The lone figure sat chair large in total darkness. The sound of heavy breathing and medical equipment was the only thing that was heard as a large TV was in front of him with the sound off, but with subtitles. The quirkless hero, the figure said with a deep chuckle. How amusing. He's quirkless. Seriously? But didn't he get first in the entrance exam? How has he survived his long? Bullshit, there's no way a quirkless guy can make it into the hero course. He's lying to try and grab more attention, fucking 1A. Maybe some hero took pity on him and just let him in the hero course. Only way I can see a quirkless guy getting into the hero course. Izuku ignored all the comments as he made his way back to his friends, who were looking at him in confusion. Hey, back off, you don't know anything about Midoriya. Kirishima said while folding his arms. I saw this guy take on villains back at USJ, and he even backed up All Might. That's right, Izuku, despite being quirkless, follows the ideals of being a hero and is very strong. Iida shouted while waving his arms. Yeah, Izuku's the man with a plan. Sato said while folding his arms. He has more tricks and skills than anyone I know. UA is cutthroat and they don't let anyone into the hero course out of pity. Surprisingly Todoroki defended with a calm look on his face. If they did, then they wouldn't be number one. Izuku smiled at being defended by his friends and classmates. Well, at least they see me as an equal. Alright, quiet now. Midnight shouted to the crowd, grabbing everyone's attention. It's time to move on to our first event. She shouted. A second later, a large holo screen appeared behind her and started to spin like a slot machine. Onto the preliminaries, as they're called. Every year, many drink their tears here, and the first round of this year's Destiny is Midnight paused for dramatic effect as the spin came to a stop. This. Obstacle race. An obstacle race, Izuku said while nodding slowly. Yeah, I can see that as a way to lighten the numbers. He said before listening to Midnight explain the rules to everyone. All 11 classes will participate in this race, about 220 students. The course will be the outer circumference of this stadium about 4 kilometers. She said before she creaked the riding crop. Our school's selling point is freedom. She sighed before licking her lips. As long as you stay on the course, it doesn't matter what you do. She shouted, making the crowd roar. Now, take your place everyone. She said while pointing to a large red entrance off to the side. It didn't take long for the 11 classes to make their way to the entrance. Most pushed their way to the front thinking they could get a head start, but this caused a lot of people to bunch together, limiting mobility. Others hanged into the back, not wanting to be trampled over, but would be the last to exit the tunnel. Izuku stood close to the back, but was close to the center. For his plan to work, he would need to have as much room as he could while being close to the front. As the lights above the entrance lit up, Izuku couldn't help but start to think about all the people who were supporting up. All Might, Lila, Mom, Mirio, Eri, May Clint, all of you believe in me, despite being quirkless. Izuku thought as he tightened his fist as the lights above the entrance started to count down. All Might said I should show the world I am here. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. Show them all that this quirkless archer will become a hero, that I am here. As soon as Izuku finished his thought, the last light above the door went off and Midnight raised her hand. Start. And with that, the first event of the UA Sports Festival started. Chapter 8. No one's POV. Start. Izuku bolted forward as soon as Midnight shouted that word, but he wasn't the only one. Despite being closer to the back, it didn't take long for Izuku to be crammed in the tight hallway. Okay, here's a play-by-play. Are you ready to do this, sleepy man? You're the one who forced me here. Let's get this started right away, sleepy man. What should we pay attention to in the early stage? This part right now. Hey. This is too narrow. Ouch. Hey, move. Sorry. Hey, who just grabbed my tit? Wait, what? Izuku grit his teeth as he tried to move through the crowd as he was elbowed in the face. With the hallway so narrow and with so many people moving at once, mobility was a big problem. I see what Izawa means, with such a narrow hallway and everyone gunning for the exit, everyone's run over each other. He thought before a grin crossed his face. Luckily, I already have a plan for that. Izuku muttered before he acted. Throwing his right arm into the air, Izuku fired his grapple gauntlet. The claw embedded itself into the ceiling before Izuku zoomed up above everyone. Suddenly Izuku felt a wave of cold, making his eyes widen. Todoroki. Izuku thought as he quickly retracted his claw. In a second the entire tunnel was covered in ice, trapping a good portion of the students. Once Izuku saw the ice had stopped growing, he quickly fired his gauntlet again before he hit any students below him and swung out of the tunnel. Take this. Bakugo shouted as he rocked out of the tunnel with his hands exploding. Izuku quickly glanced around to see he wasn't the only one not caught in Todoroki's ice. Bakugo was flying low thanks to his explosion quirk, Aoyama used his naval laser to fly above the ground, Momo used her creation quirk to make a pole to push off the ground, and Kirishima had jumped just in time to dodge the ice. Naive, Todoroki. Momo yelled as she started to fall to the ground. I won't let you get away so easily. Bakugo yelled with an angry look on his face before he let off an even stronger explosion. You half-and-half bastard. Bajiro used his tail to jump off the ground before the ice covered it. You got me with that once. You won't get me again. Whoa. Mina yelled as she used her acid to skate across Todoroki's ice. Glancing back, Todoroki narrowed his eyes and tried to speed up. More people outside of Class A were able to dodge that than I expected. Izuku grinned as he saw a good portion of the students hadn't been caught by Todoroki's. What did I say, Todoroki? Izuku shouted as he landed on the slippery ice, managing to stay on his 2 feet. Don't underestimate anyone today. He shouted as he pointed his gauntlet forward and fired at the ground. Izuku's grapple gauntlet pulled him forward across the ice, and thanks to his training in martial arts, Izuku was easily able to keep his balance. As Izuku glanced around, he saw other students that weren't caught in Todoroki's ice. Such as Mina, who used her acid to skate across the ice, or Tokurayami using dark shadow to push him off the ground. The young archer made sure to keep an eye out for any interesting or dangerous quirks he might run into later on in the sports festival. Looking back, Izuku was both surprised and pleased to see Shinto pushing himself across the ice with a weapon in hand. A staff. Looks like he took my advice. Izuku thought with a grin as he looked forward, but was surprised to see what was just ahead of him. Well, didn't see that coming. The student just ahead of Izuku was none other than the perverted Mineta, throwing his grapes onto the ice floor and bouncing on them with a surprising amount of agility and speed. Hell, he even did a perfect flip forward before landing on one of his grapes. It didn't take long for the little pervert to become second in the race. I guess he made it into the hero course for a reason after all. I've outwitted you, Todoroki. Mineta shouted while in midair with an evil grin on his face. How pathetic. As he started to fall, Mineta's hand slowly moved to his head. Take this. My special attack. He already came up with his own special attack. Izuku couldn't help but feel not only shock but a little impressed. Now if only he could stop being a creepy pervert, he might actually make a decent hero. Mineta plucked one of the grapes from his hand and held it back, ready to throw. Graw. Wham. Mineta was cut off when something hard slammed into his side, sending him flying. Izuku was so shocked by the sudden attack he actually stopped in his tracks. Mineta was sent flying through the air before landing head first into the ground. Thanks to the grapes on his head, Mineta was unharmed, but due to them bouncing, the pervert started to cartwheel forward. What the hell, Mineta? Izuku shouted out the team before he realized what hit him as he heard machine parts move. Target found. Izuku looked to the side to see the very same robots from the entrance exam. Lots. The once thin trail led to a large field of robots, ranging from 1-pointers all the way to 3-pointers. Where the hell does UA get the money for these things? Izuku muttered as he pulled up CC and grabbed one of his arrows. The sudden appearance of robots was enough for everyone to stop in their tracks and assess the situation. Looking up ahead, Izuku paled at what he saw, making him give a weak laugh. Well, that's not very fair. Obstacles have shown up suddenly. Starting with the fist barrier. Robo Inferno. Near the center of the big field were a small group of zero-pointer robots. Aren't those the zero-point villains from the entrance exam? Kaminari yelled with a shocked look on his face, and he wasn't the only one. Seriously, the hero course had to fight those. This is what they meant by obstacles. There are too many. I can't get through that. What the hell is wrong with you, eh? Todoroki kept his guard up as he glared at the robot. So this is what they used in the general entrance exam? I wonder where they got the money for this. Momo said in a much calmer voice, looking barely fazed. Bright Izuku shouted, glad someone else other than him finally asked that question. Glancing over the field, Izuku started to formulate a plan. The sides of the field are covered with the smaller robots, while the center only had a few and the zero-pointers. If I aim for the sides, it will take me longer to make it for the exit, not only that I'd have to deal with a small army of robots. If I go for the center, I save time, but I'll have to face the zero-pointers. UA did this on purpose. Izuku thought as he tightened his hand over his bow. They want to see who has the guts, power and skill to face a giant robot in order to win. I may not have power, but I have guts and skill. Suddenly one of the zero-pointers moved and started to attack Todoroki. The ice user was already moving. If they went through all this trouble, I wish they would have prepared something better. He said as he placed his hand on the ground, freezing it instantly. Since my old man is watching. Throwing his hand forward, a large wall of ice crashed into the zero-pointer's hand, stopping it in its tracks and covering it in ice. Todoroki let out a small breath before running forward between the robot's legs. Izuku couldn't help but feel his jaw drop slightly. He knew Todoroki was powerful, he'd seen some of his fights, but this level of power was almost off the charts. As everyone stared at the frozen robot in shock and awe, Izuku noticed the slight movements it was making. Izuku's eyes widened as a grin crossed his face. Todoroki, you clever son of a bitch. Between the legs. We can get through. Someone shouted with glee, but Izuku knew better. I wouldn't if I were you. Todoroki called back just as the robot started to break off the ice. I froze it when it was unbalanced. It'll fall over. Just as Todoroki said, the giant robot fell over, creating a large dust cloud. Todoroki from Class 1A. He attacked and defended in one hit. How elegant. Present Mick shouted through the mic. Amazing. He's the first one through. It's, practically unfair. His actions are logical and strategic. As expected of someone who got in through recommendation. He'd never fought them before, but those robo-infernos couldn't get past his elite moves. Izuku coughed up dust as he shielded his eyes, a grin still on his face. Midnight said anything was fair in this race, even making things harder for everyone else. He said before letting out a breath of air before his eyes. Pardon. I've got to hurry, can't let Todoroki get too far ahead. He said before he started to move. In the stands, Inko was breathing in and out of a paper bag while looking a little purple. While she was doing that, Lila was rubbing her back. Breath, Inko, breath. Don't worry about Izuku, everything is going to be fine. Lila said in a soothing voice, but was thinking differently. What the fuck is wrong with you, eh? Giant robots, are they trying to train their students or kill them? Run away, Izuku. Inko shouted down from the stands with tears in her eyes. Eri looked down at the monitor with a worried look on her face. Will Izuku be alright? Eri asked Mirio, who gave her a confident smile. Don't worry, Eri, I'm confident Izuku will not only pull through, but make it ahead. Mirio said while folding his arms, making Eri smile. The adults, however, had different things on their minds. I'm going to kill whoever came up with this crazy plan. I'm going to kill whoever came up with this crazy plan. Ahahahaha. Once Izuku saw the robots moving in on them, he ran forward as fast as he could. Hey. Someone's trapped underneath. Someone shouted in worry. Wouldn't that kill them? Will people die at this sort's festival? Izuku would have ran to the fallen robot to help if he hadn't seen who it fell on. Not even a second later, a familiar Reed burst through the fallen robot, looking more annoyed than injured. Like I'd die. Kirishima shouted while using his hardening quirk. Kirishima from Class 1A was underneath. That's crazy. Kirishima let out a sigh before glaring ahead. That bastard, Todoroki. He timed it on purpose so it'd land right in our way. If it hadn't been me, someone would have died. Suddenly another hole in the robot started too from not far from Kirishima, grabbing his attention. At Class A, a second later, a familiar teen from Class B bust through, though this time his skin was a sleek silver. Really is filled with bastards. Tetsu from Class 1B was also underneath. That's crazy. Tetsu let out a sigh before glaring ahead. If it hadn't been me, someone would have died. Izuku raised an eyebrow at the familiar teen as he analyzed his quirk. Steel transformation quirk. Cover his body in a steel-like coating, most likely uses the iron in his blood to do so. Counter. Wear down steel until it breaks, trap person in a lock. High amounts of heat is also possibly able to melt steel. Izuku found it slightly surprising there was someone so similar to Kirishima just one class away. Izuku also noticed that this upset Kirishima greatly, he knew Kirishima hated how little he stood out, now he had to deal with someone with the same quirk he had. Small world. Izuku muttered before he saw something coming at him from the corner of his eye. The one-pointer rolled up to Izuku with its arms raised. Target lock. In a single motion Izuku fired a normal arrow right into the robot's eye without even turning, stopping it in its tracks. With that Izuku dipped low before running at full speed. Thanks to his training with Mirio and Lila for the past 2 weeks, Izuku felt like he had gotten faster, and his reflexes were sharper. When Izuku got close to one of the zero-pointers he raised his gauntlet before firing, zooming up to his head. It appears the quirkless Izuku Midoriya is making his way ahead of the zero-pointer. Is he allowed to have those gadgets and weapons? Those weapons and gadgets are the same ones he had during the entrance exam. They're not something just anyone can use, so they do require some skill and training. As Izuku zoomed up he noticed the zero-pointer raise its arm at him. Acting fast Izuku cranked up the power on his gauntlet and managed to dodge it just in time. Once he reached near the end of his gauntlet Izuku used the momentum to send himself flying up before landing onto the zero-pointer's head. Izuku let out a breath of relief, but it was short-lived. Deku? Turning around Izuku saw Bakugo flying right at him with a glare in his eyes. Class 1A's Bakugo. Since the bottom's blocked, he goes overhead. Clever. Izuku also noticed 2 others not far behind the blonde, Shiro and Tokoyami. Seeing as they would be there soon Izuku started to run to the edge of the robot's giant head. Once there Bakugo landed while glaring at the green archer. Deku, get back. Bakugo was cut off when Izuku spun around and fired an arrow at him. Acting fast the blonde rolled out the way. Damn it Dek. Poot. As Bakugo looked up he didn't have enough time to dodge the second arrow, which was a familiar black boxing clove. Right in the kisser. See you later Bakugo. Izuku shouted as he jumped off the robot, leaving a dazed but very pissed off Bakugo. As Izuku fell he quickly used his grapple gauntlet to land on the ground safely before he started to run again. Suddenly, large explosions started to go off behind him, making Izuku glance back. The green archer was surprised to see Momo had not only created a cannon, but also was able to knock down 3 zero-pointers. Damn, who knew my Vic president was such a badass? Izuku muttered before he noticed more and more students were catching up, one of them being an angry Bakugo. Need to pick up the pace. Looking ahead Izuku saw 2 zero-pointers and a few number pointers. Suddenly an idea hit him, making Izuku grin. Let's see if we can repeat history. Izuku thought as he moved his hand over to his gauntlet. Pressing a button and turning a knob Izuku was able to add more power to his grapple gauntlet, making shoot farther than normal. Aiming it at one of the zero-pointers' heads, Izuku fired before zooming up at top speeds. Izuku winced at the strain he felt in his shoulder, but that didn't stop him from pulling out his new sword with his free hand. Once Izuku was close enough he slapped his feet into the zero-pointer's head before stabbing his sword into its eye, shattering the glass. Acting fast Izuku sheathed his sword before pulling out a bulky arrow from his quiver with a grin. Wonder what happens when I put an arrow in here? Izuku thought as he tossed the arrow into the zero-pointer's head before he dropped straight down. A small explosion and the sound of static went off in the robot's head before its lights dimmed, then it started to fall over very slowly. Izuku shot his hand up and hit the robot in the chest with his grapple gauntlet before swinging right between its legs like Tarzan. Incoming. Izuku called back before he landed on the ground and started to run again. Damn it 1A. The zero-pointer fell on its side, only blocking half of the exit, giving more than enough room for the students. Despite Izuku being ahead of quite a few students they quickly caught up thanks to their quirks. Izuku didn't really care, he was going to win no matter what. Hey. The first barriers were a piece of cake. Then what about the second? When Izuku reached the second stage he stopped dead in his tracks with his eyes wide, along with a dozen other students. If you fall, you're out. If you don't want to fall, then crawl. It's the fall. The large fields was just a giant pit with giant stone columns connected by steel ropes. When did they build this stage? Achako asked with a shocked look. Most likely someone with an earth quirk helped make this. Izuku said while glancing over the pillars. Now they're testing out our speed, balance, and guts to see if we can pass this. Looks like I was right, each barrier is some kind of test that will show us off. As Izuku started to think he saw Tsuyu walk to the edge of the pit. Tsu? Mina asked with some confusion before Tsuyu jumped onto one of the steel wires. Tsuyu landed perfectly on the rope before she started to climb across. Ribbit, this is like a glorified tightrope. She's fast. Mina shouted in shock. Izuku put a hand on his chin with a thoughtful look on his face. Huh, tight rope. He said before a grin crossed his face. If that's the case. The young archer shifted CC into its staff from before he made his way over to the rope. Taking a deep breath, Izuku started to cross the rope while holding his staff in his hands. Wow, Izuku has a lot of balance. Ochako said in a shocked tone as the green-haired archer was already halfway across. Deku? Izuku glanced back to see Bakugo flying his way, a mad grin on his face. Eat my dust. Bakugo blasted past the young archer, his explosion shaking the rope greatly. Izuku grit his teeth as he tried to keep balance, but quickly lost his footing. Shit. Izuku shouted as he fell off the rope. Izuku? Ochako called out in worry. Quick, use the gauntlet. The young archer acted fast and fired his gauntlet at one of the pillars just in time. The claw embedded in the stone and swung Izuku into the pillar with a thud, much to the team's relief. There you have it everyone, it was thanks to my baby that saved Izuku from falling. Izuku gave a small snort as he looked back to see Mei at the edge of the cliff, a big smile on her face. The pink-haired girl was decked out in tones of gadgets from her main headgear to a grapple belt to some hover boots. Nice to know you have your priorities straight, Mei. Izuku called as he started to climb the pillar. Showing off my babies is my priorities. Plus it saved you, didn't it? I called it a double win. Mei shouted as she grinned across the creator. Here's my chance to show off my support items in the limelight. Mei said while laughing, getting a few strange looks from everyone. My new wire arrow and hover souls, it's time to shine. Mei shouted in a confident voice. Mei? Ochako said in a shocked voice as she looked at all the gadgets she had on. Mina looked over the pink hair girl before turning to Ochako. You know this person, Yurakaka? Ochako nodded. She's the one who makes all of Izuku's gear and weapons. She said, getting a surprised look from Mina. That made Mei puff up her chest with pride. Right, it's thanks to me that Izuku was able to make it this far. It's true, Izuku called as he crossed another tightrope before he smiled back at the girls. If it wasn't for her I wouldn't have made it first in the entrance exam. He said before making his way across another pillar. Mei's smile widened as she opened her arms. And now it's time to show off my babies in the UA Sports Festival. Mei shouted as she fired the wire arrow from her hip. The arrow soared across the giant pit and hit a pillar. Well, the grapple gauntlet I made for Izuku has more mobility options, it requires someone with a lot of arm strength to handle the strain of the pulls. My wire arrow however takes the strength factor out, allowing anyone to use it. Mei explained her invention before activating her hover boots, bringing her a few inches off the ground. Izuku smiled as he saw Mei as happy as can be. Go on, show all the companies why they want you. Izuku silently cheered for the girl as she jumped off the cliff. The archer always supported Mei when it came to showing off her inventions. For the girl, getting the eye of a support company wasn't about money or even fame. It was simply her passion to build to her heart's content, equipment and devices to help heroes and save people. And that was something Izuku will always admire about Mei. Take a look, all you companies. Mei called as she started to fall. Especially the big ones. As Mei fell she pressed a device in her hand, allowing the wire arrow to retract the cable. When it looked like she was about to smack into a pillar, Mei raised her feet just in time for her hover boots to take away all the momentum. Look at my super cute babies. When Mei landed on the pillar her hover boots allowed her to glide across the stone before she shot up at high speeds. It didn't take long before she shot herself into the air while landing on a pillar close to the center of the field. Izuku was already closing in on the exit of the second barrier, thought already a number of students were reaching the end farther than him thanks to their quirks. Todoroki was the one still in the lead. When Izuku saw Mei reach the center of the pit in a matter of seconds, he couldn't help but be impressed with the girl's skills and engineering. He also noticed a lot of other students were getting pumped up because of Mei's actions, bringing a grin on his face. Alright, now we got some excitement. Izuku said as he jumped off a pillar before firing off his grapple gauntlet. A lot of different people are working hard for their chance, Eraserhead. What are you idiots stopping for? Aizawa said in an annoyed tone. He clearly hated the fact that such a large amount of students had simply stared at the giant crater instead of doing something. When Izuku climbed up the pillar he noticed Todoroki had finally reached the end of the second barrier, using his ice to skate across the ropes. The young archer also noticed that Bakugo was closing in on the ice user fast thanks to his explosion quirk. And now, the leader of the pack is easily getting through first. Todoroki glanced back as he ran, seeing Bakugo flying through the air. Looks like he's getting fired up. A slow starter. Todoroki thought as he noticed his bruised cheek. Or anger. He thought before picking up the pace. Damn it. Bakugo yelled before he let of a second explosion. Izuku grit his teeth as he ran across another rope, careful to keep his balance. Looking back again, Izuku saw more and more students were getting the courage to cross the pit, some even passed him thanks to their quirks. such as Aoyama with his naval laser or Shaoji transforming his arms into something like wings. Izuku almost lost his balance when he laughed at Iida's stiff body coming across the rope. The lead pack is a step ahead, but below them, everyone's clumped together. They haven't announced how many people will make it thought, so you can't relax. Push forward. When Izuku finally reached the exit, a good number of students were ahead of him, despite his lead. Got to pick up the pace, I can't start lagging behind now. Izuku thought while taking a single breath before blasting off at full speed. It didn't take Izuku long to find himself at the second barrier, along with a bunch of other students. And now, we've quickly arrived at the final barrier. The reality here is that it's a minefield. True to the pro hero's words, when one of the students stepped on a dark brown circle, it exploded in a pink dust, sending him flying. Izuku noticed up ahead Bakugo and Todoroki were neck and neck, both fighting for first place. It's set up so that you can tell where the mines are if you look carefully. So you have to exploit your eyes and legs. Now they're testing our reflexes, critical thinking, and seeing if we can keep calm under pressure. Izuku thought as he started to come up with a plan. By the way, these landmines are for games, so they're not that powerful, but they're loud and flashy enough to make you wet your pants. That depends on the person. Izuku analyzed the explosion and minefield while narrowing his eyes. The mines release a minor explosion that's similar to a concussion grenade, loud and big enough to throw a person off, but no shrapnel or extreme force to seriously hurt someone. The mines also seem pressure sensitive. If someone steps on the dark circles hard enough, it will trigger the mine off, so shockwaves won't set them off. He thought before looking at the other students already on the field. Those in the lead are already at a disadvantage since the mine concentration is so high. The only ones who can easily get across are the flyers, but most are so worn out that they're hanging back and trying to make sure they at least cross the finish line. Izuku grit his teeth as he tried to come up with a plan. He wasn't fast enough to outrun the explosions, and thanks to his gear his steps were too heavy to not run light. If the young archer were to abandon his gear he might make it to first, but he would be useless in the next event. Even if he tried his best to go cross the field, even stepping on one mine would make him lose time. Suddenly Izuku noticed one student go flying from one of the explosions, but was relatively unharmed. That made an idea smack into Izuku's head, one so crazy he was sure Lila was going to wring his neck when the festival was over. But if you want to be a hero, Izuku muttered as he pulled out Flash Fang. You have to take risks. He shouted before stabbing Flash Fang into the ground. At a steady pace, Izuku slowly started to dig up the mines at the edge of the minefield before putting them into a pile. This grabbed some strange looks from everyone passing, but the young archer ignored them and continued his work. In less than a minute, Izuku had about 15 mines in a single pile in front of him, and not a moment too soon. In the lead are Bakugo and Todoroki. They'll get through the last barrier soon. Not if I have anything to do about it. Izuku thought with a grin as he pulled out an arrow from his quiver. The young archer stabbed his chest with the arrow before he jumped forward with no hesitation. Heads up everyone. Boom. As soon as the explosion went off, everyone on the field stopped in their tracks and turned back, staring at the huge explosion in shock. The closest students covered their faces from the explosion's force, trying not to fall back. There's a huge explosion at the back, what's with the force? When the force of the explosion finally died down, something flew out of the pink mist with surprising speed. What is that, a red ball? Where did that come from? To everyone, it looked like a red ball had been shot out of the explosion. As the red ball flew, everyone noticed it started to fall apart and reveal something underneath. Wait a minute everyone. That's no red ball, that's Izuku Midoriya from Class 1A present, Mick shouted in shock. And he's in hot pursuit with that blast. Izuku grinned wildly as he flew through the air as more and more of the red foam fell off his body. Thank God for the foam arrow. Izuku thought as he flew through the air. There's still a lot of force and I need to land just right to make sure I don't set off any more mines. He thought before another idea hit him. Or should I? A different kind of explosion went off behind him, making Izuku glance back. Deku? You won't go ahead of me. I'm already ahead of you. Shut up. Todoroki glared ahead as he froze the ground before he started to run at full speed. Thanks to him freezing the ground, he wouldn't have to worry about setting off any more mines. The two formerly in the lead have stopped trying to slow each other down and are chasing Midoriya. Now that they have a common enemy, they've stopped fighting. The fight's not over yet, thought. As Izuku moved through the air, he noticed he started to fall to the ground, making him click his teeth. I'm losing speed and fast, no surprise there. If I stop for even a second once I land, or I get caught in an explosion, they'll overtake me in an instant. Izuku thought as everything seemed to slow down around him. Bakugo and Todoroki were neck and neck while Izuku was falling to the ground head first. I gave myself one chance when I sent myself flying. But that explosion, Izuku thought as he pulled out an arrow from his quiver and CC. I'm not going to give up just yet. Izuku shouted. In a fluid motion Izuku shifted CC into its bow form before he pulled the arrow back and shot it straight into the ground between Bakugo and Todoroki. Boom boom. Once the arrow exploded it made the two Quirk users raise their arms up in defense. The arrow also set off a small cluster of mines, sending Izuku flying forward and throwing the other two back. As Izuku was flying through the air he threw his arm forward and shot his grapple gauntlet into the ground. Thanks to the gauntlet Izuku was able to stay above ground before he landed on his feet and started to run at full speed, using the momentum he had to give him a boost. Midoriya swiftly blocks those behind him. Would you believe it? He cleared the minefield in an instant. Izuku panted hard as he reached the end of the field, it was finally the final stretch. Glancing back the young archer saw both Bakugo and Todoroki were hot on his tail, both with determined looks on their face. Bakugo can't fly cause he knows I can easily pick him off in the sky, and Todoroki can't use his ice to reach me while he's running. Both are forced to not use their quirks, since it'll only slow them down. That made a big grin cross Izuku's face. If it's a test of natural speed, I'll win. Eraserhead, your class is amazing. What are you teaching them? I didn't do anything. They got each other fired up on their own. Izuku had finally reached the end of the obstacle race and ran into a long tunnel, a bright light at the end. Time to pick things up. Izuku took a deep breath before holding up, suddenly his speed increased. Normally it would be bad to hold your breath, but in bursts, it could help you gain just enough speed to win. And just in time, as Bakugo and Todoroki were using their quirks in the small tunnel to try and gain any kind of speed. UA Sports Festival, first year stage. Not listening. Who could have predicted the developments at the beginning or this conclusion? But it wasn't enough, as Izuku had just reached the light at the end of the tunnel. Right now, the first person back in the stadium is that young man, the first quirkless student at UA ever. Izuku Midoriya. Izuku could only hear cheers and shouts from every single person in the stadium cheer for him. The young archer was panting hard, completely out of breath as sweat dripped from his head. The young archer gripped his fist tight as he heard the cheers for him, a quirkless person. He could already feel the tears in the corner of his eyes. I did it, Clint, I did it. Izuku thought before he threw his fist into the air. Aya. Aizu. Inko cried as she tried to shout out her son's name, only for it to come out a babble. Way to go little bro. Lila shouted as she had her own tears in the corner of her eyes. You did it. He did it, Izuku won. Eri cheered while bouncing up and down. I knew he could do it. Mirio shouted while pumping his fist. Did you see what just happened? Nijire shouted while shaking Tamaki again, who was looking a little green now. It's very impressive. Tamaki muttered while putting a hand over his mouth, trying to stop himself from vomiting. He has a lot of determination and a strong passion, I can see why Mirio likes him, I wonder if we can become friends. Shigaraki was scratching his neck excessively to the point he started to bleed. He wanted to punch the TV more than anything, but he didn't want to miss anything either. Suddenly a dark laugh escaped the villain's mouth. Get stronger Archer and climb the ranks, so when I finally bring you down, it will be fun to see you fall. Inside the teacher's booth All Might was clapping slowly along with the rest of the teachers, but couldn't help but shake with excitement and pride as he looked down at the young archer. Through the race the pro hero couldn't help but feel worried for the quirkless teen in UA's compaction. Yet thought the three-barrier Midoriya handled each one like a pro, for better or worse. This sports festival is a competition where they have to aim for the top, even if it means defeating their friends and classmates. Modern heroes depended a lot on their popularity, so they need to have that desire to be above all others. All Might thought as he looked down at Izuku with a smile. At your core, you are a hero whose desire is to save lives and help others. That is what I saw in you that day a year ago, and I'm sure your master saw the same in you. All Might then grow a small frown on his face. But I was worried that may also be your one weakness, your desire to help others may outshine your desire to win. All Might then clapped his hands together with a smile on his face. I was worrying over absolutely nothing. Sorry. What do you think? An individual with tall brown hair that almost looked like a tower said. First of all, Midoriya's stocks were already high thanks to him being the student's representative. They only climbed faster thanks to him coming first in the obstacle race. Someone with classes said. However, despite clearly being skilled in many areas, the fact he is quirkless makes it hard to predict how far he will go. A dark-haired teen said with swirls on his cheek said. If you took on management of an agency, how would you market him? Options. Swirls asked the two people next to him. His appearance is out, Glasses said while tilting his head. Despite the green hair and freckles, he is relatively normal in appearance. He's clearly particular about his skills and athletic capabilities, we could highlight those parts, Hair said while rubbing his chin. Also, we can use the fact he is quirkless to our advantage. How so? Swirls asked. If he graduates from UA, he would become the first quirkless hero in history, not to mention he got through the best hero school in the country, UA. That alone would draw him attention. Hare said with a grin. We can also market the fact that he became a hero and reached his dreams simply by working hard. That will draw in people who also have big dreams. He would be the kind of hero people can relate to, someone not blessed with power or connections, but simply worked hard. The ultimate underdog if you will. Turn his weakness into his strength, clever. Glasses said as he wrote down what he just heard. The business or management course were classes used to train students in the art of business. Because heroes nowadays need popularity in order to survive, heroigenesis need a skilled manager to handle the hero's popularity and advise them on how to gain more attention. The hero business was very cutthroat, heroes fight for attention in order to get higher pay from the government for equipment and livelihood. Just above the three student was All Might, looking down with an amused smile. The business course. They never change, huh? All Might thought with a laugh as he sat back in his chair. Don't rest just yet Midoriya, you're far from finished. Izuku started to catch his breath as he noticed more and more people were exiting the tunnel. It wouldn't be long before everyone had finally come through and rest from the long race. And done, they're finishing one after another. We'll make a list of results later, but for now, good work. Izuku smiled to himself as he rubbed the tears out of his eyes. He was a little embarrassed he cried in front of so many people, he hoped nobody saw him cry. Izuku. The young archer turned around to see Ochako walk up to him, completely out of breath. You were amazing. Not far away Iida had a dark cloud over his head. Clearly disappointed he didn't come first despite having a speed-based quirk. That's so frustrating, dang it. Ochako said in a playful tone, making Izuku laugh. Well I couldn't have done it without my super cute babies. Mei shouted behind the two, making them jump. Thanks for showing off our babies Izuku. Mei shouted before she hugged the archer, catching him off guard and making him blush. I knew I could count on you. Then no problem Mei. Izuku shouted with a blush as he felt her chest press against him. What place did you come in? Mei pulled back and gained a thoughtful look on her face. Somewhere in the top 40 I think. I thought about hanging back, but when I saw you showing off our babies I didn't want to fall behind. Thanks to my hover boots the minefield wasn't a problem. Izuku nodded with a smile. At least everyone came out unharmed, he said before turning to the tunnel. When he saw who it was he deadpanned. Well, physically unharmed, mentally he let the word hang in the air as everyone followed his line of sight. The person who was stumbling just outside the tunnel was none other than Momo, who looked exhausted with her shirt open revealing her sports bra. What really caught everyone's attention was the little pervert Mineta clinging to Momo's backside with his grapes. The little teen had a huge bruise on his cheek and had blood running down his nose, whether it was from the hit from the robot or Rousel nobody knew. This isn't how it was supposed to. The poor girl was too exhausted to finish her sentence. Mineta gave a laugh of victory as he still hung close to Momo's body. I killed 2 birds with 1 stone. Mineta shouted in victory as if he won the race. I'm a genius. You're the worst. Momo yelled at the short teen as she tried to shake him off, but he wasn't giving up. That's one way to complete the race. Izuku said while rubbing his eyes. Iida, can you? Let go of the vice president this instant. Iida yelled as he zoomed to the young girl and pulled the little pervert off. You should be ashamed. No Mineta cried in agony as he reached for Momo, who stepped back with a shiver. Let me hold her a little longer, let me at least feel her chi. Mineta. The little pervert slammed his mouth shut as he heard his name from Izuku, who sounded pissed. If you don't get 50 feet away from Momo right now, that shiner you got from the robot will be like a love tap when I'm through with you. Izuku said in a low tone as he glared at the teen, who stopped resisting and looked ready to piss himself. Momo gave a sigh before turning to Izuku. Thank you Izuku, Iida, now I can finally rest. The girl said with a smile just before she fell to the ground. After about another 5 minutes of waiting it wasn't long before every person came through the race. Everyone soon gathered together again and stood in front of midnight. The first game of the first year stage is finally over. Now to take a look at the results. On the holo screen were the top 42 students to complete the obstacle course. 1 Class A Izuku Midoriya. 2 Class A Shoto Todoroki. 3 Class A Kitsuki Bakugo. 4 Class B Ibara Shiozaki. 5 Class B Juzo Hananuki. 6 Class A Tenya Iida. 7 Class A Fumikage Tokoyami. 8 Class A Hantasiro. 9 Class A Ajiro Kirishima. 10 Class B Tetsu. 11 Class A Maharao Ajiro. 12 Class B Yasedu Uwais. 13 Class A Tsuyu Asui. 14 Class A Mizo Shoji. 15 Class A Arikido Sado. 16 Class A Ichaka Uraraka. 17 Class A Momo Yarozu. 18 Class A Minoru Mineta. 19 Class A Mina Shido. 20 Class A Koji Koda. 21 Class A Kyoka Jiro. 22 Class B Senator Kubara. 23 Class B Kasate Tsuburaba. 24 Class A Denki Kaminari. 25 Class B Kajiro Bondo. 26 Class B Rikio Yangi. 27 Class C Hitachi Shinso. 28 Class B Itsuka Kendo. 29 Class B Jirota Shishita. 30 Class B Shihai Kurwaro. 31 Class B Yui Kodal. 32 Class B Hiryurin. 33 Class B Niranjeki Shota. 34 Class B Kanoko Komori. 35 Class B Tageru Kamakiri. 36 Class B Nido Monoma. 37 Class B Pony Tsunatori. 38 Class A Turu Hagakure. 39 Class B Satsuna Tokage. 40 Class B Manga Fukudashi. 41 Class A Yuga Aoyama. 42 Class F Mei Hatsum. Izuku smiled as he saw Shinso's name on the board. He didn't see much of the teen's fighting skills, but if he got this far despite being in the general education course, then he must have done some serious training. The top 42 made it through to the next round. It's unfortunate, but don't worry even if you didn't make it. Midnight said with a smile. We've prepared other chances for you to shine. She said before licking her lips. The real competition begins next. The press cavalry'll be all over it. Give it your all. She then whipped her riding crop, casing the screen behind her to turn into the same slot machine from the beginning and start spinning. Now time for the second game. But I already know what it is. Midnight said in a teasing tone, grabbing everyone's attention. What could it be, what could it be? She continued to tease, making everyone shake with anticipation. I just said it and now it's here. She shouted as the machine came to a stop. Cavalry battle. The cavalry battle. Kaminari groaned with a look of dread. I suck at those. It's like Izuku said, the second event will be with teams, I wonder how that will work. Sai wondered out loud. Let me explain. Midnight said, grabbing everyone's attention again. A strange image of All Might being carried by number 13, Snipe, and present Mick was shown. Midnight went on to explain that UA's cavalry battle was almost the same as the regular ones in schools. Teams would be formed with 2, 3, or 4 people, and if the leader falls the whole team loses. The major difference was that each team had points depending on each person's ranking. The total number of points will be added onto the rider and put onto a single headband, and if the person were to lose their headband they were still in the game until time ran out, which was 15 minutes. The lowest ranked person, Mei, was worth 5 points, and from that point they seemed to go up by 5 for each higher ranking. If that's the case, I should be worth 210 points. Izuku muttered to himself in thought. However, Izuku looked up to Midnight and for some reason the merciless look in her eyes made him feel a sense of dread. The point value assigned to first place is 10 million. Huh? Izuku said dumbly as he processed Midnight's words. 10 million, the hell, Izuku thought as he broke into a cold sweat and felt a huge weight on his shoulder, like he was lifting a car. In an instant, every single student's eyes were on Izuku, and all were the same. The look of a predator. Someone striving to win. And every single eye was on one quirkless teen. Every single person was thinking the same thing at the moment. No matter what place they were in before, if they took Izuku's 10 million points, they could stand at the top as well. All they had to do was beat one quirkless teen to do so. Fuck me, Izuku said in a low tone as he gave a wee chuckle. Standing at the top always comes with a price, you got to fight off everyone if you want to hold it. That's right. Midnight said. It's survival of the fittest, with a chance for those at the bottom to overthrow the top. She said before cracking her riding crop. Welcome to the survival game. Izuku forced a grin on his face as he stood tall. Well then I say, Izuku then threw his fists in the air. Bring it on. Midnight grinned as she licked her lips. That's what I like to hear, the passion of youth. She yelled while cracking her riding crop again with more force. Now you have 15 minutes to form your team. Instantly the large group of students broke off and started to from their groups. Practically everyone formed groups with their classmates, both for practicality and the rivalry between classes. For me, I don't have to worry about points. Izuku muttered while putting a hand on his chin. Thanks to my high points I'll most likely be on the defensive and running. Some groups might be gunning for me instantly in order to win, while others might pick off the weaker groups in order to survive. He thought before looking up with narrow eyes. The obstacle race highlighted our individuality and skills, now UA is showing off if we can work well in a team. As Izuku's eyes wandered he saw nearly every student in class 1 ahead straight for Bakugo. Izuku could understand why, thanks to Bakugo's skills and his quirk, it would be ideal for him to be the rider. His greatest defense would be a great defense. Yo, Bakugo. Team up with me? You need a strong man. Hey Bakugo, do you mind teaming up with me? You have to team up with me, right? Bakugo kept a blank look on his face as he was barraged with requests. Wait, what the fuck are all your quirks again? Bakugo said in the stiffest tone possible, getting some complaints from the other students. Izuku face-palmed before he let out a long sigh. Of course. He said before he started to look around, before his eyes widened. Shit, I was thinking for too long, almost everyone is already taken. Izuku thought before he started to move. Izuku was in a very tough position. Despite coming in first and being well known for his skills in his own class, everyone avoided him like the plague because of his high points. They knew that Izuku would be a target for nearly every other team in the game. Hey Jiro. Sorry man. Jiro, you wouldn't mind. Not happening green, sorry. Sai, would you? Ribbit, sorry Izuku, but I want to win. Izuku was starting to panic as everyone he asked to join his team was turning him down. If he didn't form something by the time ran out, he might be forced to forfeit the match. Damn it, damn it, damn it, everyone's thinking about stealing my points instead of keeping them, it's a better strategy. Not only that, everyone knows I'm quirkless and don't want to risk losing. Izuku thought as he bit his lip, things were not looking so good. Izuku. The young archer whipped his head to the side to see Achako running to him, a smile on her face. Let's be a team. She said without a single bit of hesitation and a smile on her face. Yes. Izuku cheered with tears in his eyes. Thank you Achako. He said before a more serious look crossed his face. Are you sure? Everyone is going to be gunning for me and my points. If we run away the whole time, then we'll win, right? Achako said with a bright smile. That made Izuku give a small smile. It's going to be harder than you think. He warned. You can still back out. Achako was one of Izuku's good friends, he didn't want to drag her into anything unnecessary. Like I would. She said in a confident tone while pumping her fist. Anyway, it's better to team up with people that are your friends and you get along with. She said with a bright smile on her face. Izuku put a hand over his mouth at how bright Achako was, it actually made Izuku choke up. She's so bright and innocent. Izuku thought before he pumped his fist. Alright, let's team up. He said, making Achako cheer. Okay, now we just need 2 more then we have a team. He said before he spotted not too far. To have a good team, it's best you communicate well with them he said before he started to walk to his next potential teammate. If we combine your quirk and someone else, it would be a devastation combo. The young archer walked off with Achako right behind him. It didn't take long for the two to reach a certain glasses warring team. Iida turned around to see both Achako and Izuku grinning at him. The three gathered together and Izuku explained why he wanted Iida on his team. The 3 of us together would be a well horse, with you in the front. Izuku whispered while pointing to Iida. Thanks to your engines and speed, you can easily get us out of tight situations. With Achako's gravity quirk she can make us lighter and able to move easier, and with my trick arrows, I can keep everyone away until time runs out. Izuku said with a grin on his face. With my points, all we need to do is maneuver our way around everyone until time runs out. Izuku said while putting a hand on his chin. For the 4th person, it'd be best if we get someone with some good offense and defense, just in case he said before looking to Iida. Iida was quiet for a long moment before letting a smile cross his face. I expected no less, Izuku he said before a much more serious look crossed his face. But I am afraid I have to refuse. He said, shocking Izuku and Achako. What? Iida then looked straight into Izuku's eyes with a determined look on his face. Ever since the entrance exam, I just keep losing to you. He said in a serious tone. Despite being quirkless, you have shown to be the most skilled in Class 1A, coming out on top despite all odds. He said before giving Izuku a small smile. You are a wonderful friend I am thankful to have, but if I keep following you, I will never grow on my own. He said before. Adjusting his glasses. Bakugo and Todoroki aren't the only ones who see you as a rival. Izuku was quiet as he processed Iida's words. He was slightly disappointed but also understood where Iida was coming from. Up until this point Izuku has come out on top more times than not and Iida recognizes Izuku's skill. They might be friends, but they were also rivals aiming for the top. The young archer gave his friend a grin before he stuck his fist out. I get it, but don't think I'm going to hold back. Iida smiled before he fist bumped Izuku. I would be mad if you did. He said before walking off to Todoroki's group who currently had Momo and Kaminari. Iida Achako said in a worried tone. Izuku gave a small sigh, but couldn't help but feel a grin cross his face. It's already begun Izuku thought as he glanced around, seeing a bunch of eyes on him. Right now, everyone is an enemy. I'm at the top, so I have to take everyone on. This is no time to be teaming up with friends. He thought before he bit his lip as he saw Shinso team up with some students from Class 1B. But we still need 2 more people, he said in a worried tone. All eyes are on you. And if all eyes are on you, they'll be on our babies. Izuku turned to the side to come face to face with a grinning Mei. Izuku's eyes widened before a grin crossed his face. Mei. Izuku shouted with glee as he grabbed the girl's shoulders in a tight grip, making her gain a blush. I need you. Yes. The girl said in a confused tone as her blush only grew. You'll be perfect on our team. Izuku said as he brought his hands down. With your gadgets and determination, I'm sure we'll pull ahead. That made Mei shake her head as she gave Izuku a grin. Right, and we'll be able to show off all our babies. Our babies? Achako asked in a confused tone. Mei grabbed Izuku's wrist and brought it up, showing the grapple gauntlet. I wasn't the only one who worked on this baby, so that makes it our baby. Mei said with a smile, making Izuku blush a bit. So, anything interesting you brought us? Izuku asked while glancing at Mei's suitcase. Here, take a look. She said as she popped the case open. What caught Izuku's eyes instantly was the jetpack. Wait a minute, this looks familiar. He said as he grabbed the jetpack. That a similar version to the Buster Hero, air jets, with a few tweaks. Mei said in a proud tone. This is perfect with Achako's quirk. We'll be able to fly around easily. Izuku said, getting a smile from the girls. Now we only need 1 more person. Izuku needed someone with good offensive and defensive capabilities. With Achako's quirk and Mei's gadgets, they had movement down, and with Izuku's arrow, a good portion off offense was taken care of. But now they needed someone who could act on defense. As Izuku looked through the crowd to see who was left, he started to think about everyone's quirk in Class 1A. Suddenly Izuku spotted someone off by themselves who was perfect for his team. Walking off in a hurry, Izuku grabbed the person's shoulder. Will you join my team, Tokoyami? The bird teen looked a bit surprised but gave a small nod. Izuku brought the bird teen back to Mei and Achako. Looking at the time, the archer saw they only had about 6 minutes left. Hey Tokoyami. Achako said with a smile and a wave, getting a nod from the teen. Alright, we have our team. Izuku said as he looked to everyone. Now, before we do anything, I think we should give a quick explanation on our skills and quirks, just to make sure everyone is up to speed. He said, getting a nod from everyone. The first one to speak was Achako. My quirk is called Zero Gravity, it lets me remove gravity from anything I touch with the pads on my fingertips. Achako said while showing the pink pads on her fingertips. My current weight limit is 3 tons. He said in a proud tone. Any drawbacks? Izuku asked while writing everything down in his notebook. Achako gained a blush and rubbed the back of her head. Well, when I use my quirk on multiple objects at once, I start to struggle. And it's super hard to use it on myself. When I push myself too far, I start to feel nauseous. Everyone nodded at the explanation before Izuku spoke up. As everyone knows, I'm quirkless. But I do have expert marksmanship, and my quiver is full of trick arrows to get us out of nearly any situation. Izuku said as he folded his arms. I think it would be best if I was the rider, since I need my arms free to use my bow and arrows. Nobody needed to argue, and it was decided there that Izuku would be the rider. The next to speak up was Mei. Well, my quirk is called Zoom. Basically my eyes act like a scope, I can see up to 5 kilometers. Mei said with a shrug before a big smile crossed her face. But my real talent lies with my babies. She said as she brought up her inventions. I'm sure my babies will take us to victory, and I'll catch the eye of a ton of support companies. Tokoyami tilted his head at Mei's personality before he spoke. Dark Shadow is the name of my quirk. He said as Dark Shadow exited his body, revealing a dark purple-like shadow that looked like a bird. I have full control of it now, and it's best used at a close to mid-range. Izuku glanced at Dark Shadow as he tried to remember the few times he saw Tokoyami fight. Does any damage Dark Shadow take effect you? As Tokoyami was about to answer, something else beat him to the punch. No, but that doesn't mean I like getting hurt. The shadow said with a small huff as it folded its arms. Everyone blinked at the shadow before Tokoyami spoke. Dark Shadow has a mind of its own, but what he says is true. I take no damage for any attack he gets, but I do waste more energy. He said as Dark Shadow went back into his body. Izuku nodded as he wrote everything down into his notebook. Any other significant drawbacks? Tokoyami seemed to hesitate for a second before he spoke. Light is a big weakness for me. He said, surprising everyone. The darker my surroundings are, the stronger Dark Shadow becomes, but with less darkness, such as daytime, the weaker Dark Shadow becomes but easier to control. Wait, you're telling me this whole time you have been fighting at your weakest? Izuku asked with his mouth slightly hung open. Damn, you are seriously strong, Tokoyami. He said, getting a surprised look from the teen. With your skills and quirk, you'll be perfect for the front. Thank you, Midoriya. Tokoyami said with a nod. Izuku nodded as he looked at the time, seeing they only had 3 minutes left. Alright, let's form a quick strategy to fend off anyone that comes at us. Wait. Mei shouted, making nearly everyone jump. Before we decided anything, this team need a name. She said with a grin on her face. A name? Tokoyami and Ichako asked while tilting their heads. Yup, if we want to stand out more, then we need a name other than Team Midoriya. Mei said before giving Izuku a smile. No offense. Izuku simply shrugged. None taken, it would make us stand out more to have our own team name instead of just using my name. He said, making Mei start to bounce with excitement. Anyone got any ideas? He said as everyone gained thoughtful looks on their faces. Team Darkness. Team Plus. Team Super Cute Babies. None of the names everyone suggested seemed to fit and this went on longer than desired. I got it. Mei said while snapping her fingers. How about Team Arrow? That made everyone pause as Mei's suggestion. Team Arrow? Izuku said in a confused tone. Yeah, like, we're going to take a straight shot to victory. Mei said while pumping her fist. Everyone mulled over the name in their heads before nodding. I like it. Ichako said with a smile. If the name will help clear a path to victory, then so be it. Tokoyami said while nodding. Izuku grinned as he nodded his head. Alright, Team Arrow it is. He said before clapping his hands together. Now let's come up with a game plan. Alright, time's up. Midnight shouted after the buzzer went off. Now then, it's time to get started. She said while stretching her arms. Come on, wake up, Eraser. President Mick muttering was heard through the microphone. After 15 minutes to form teams and talk strategy, 12 cavalry teams are lined up on the field. There are some interesting teams out there. Team Arrow. Total points 100,325. Team Bakugo. Total points 665. Team Todoroki. Total points 615. Team Awase. Total points 555. Team Shinso. Total points 515. Team Mineta. Total points 420. Team Hagakure. Total points 390. Team Monoma. Total points 305. Team Kodai. Total points 165. Team Tokage. Total points 155. Team Rin. Total points 125. Team Tsunatori. Total point 70. Now, rise those battle cries. The entire stadium was cheering as they saw the 12 teams on the large field. It's time for UA's bloody battle. Izuku tightened his headband around his head before adjusting the jetpack Mei gave. Tokoyami had Dark Shadow adjust the quiver on the bird teen's back. Hell yes. With Izuku wearing the jetpack he couldn't wear his quiver along with it. Luckily with Tokoyami wearing it Izuku could still have easy access to it. Ichako? Yes. Mei? Roger. Tokoyami? Yeah. Izuku grinned as he brought up CC and pulled an arrow from the quiver on Tokoyami's back. I'm counting on you. Alright. You've made your teams, right? I'm not gonna ask if you're ready or not. Tesu? The silver-haired teen looked up to see a smiling Monoma. Huh. No hard feelings, alright. Monoma said as he glanced at his classmate's rider, who was someone not from his class, but also not from class 1A. Well, at least he's not from 1A. Right. Tesu shouted while pumping his fist. Now let's get started. Counting down to the brutal battle royal. 3. We're aiming for 2. 1 thing. 1. Start. Midnight shouted as she creaked her riding crop. But that everyone charged into the open field, every single student with the same mindset. To win. About half of all teams charged straight for Team Arrow, hunger and determination in their eyes. It's a battle for the 10 million. Someone shouted as they charged at Team Arrow. Midoriya. I'll take that headband. A shirtless and invincible Hagakure shouted as her teammates all had blushes on their faces. An attack without delay, Tokoyami muttered as he saw about 3 teams charging at them. The fate of the pursued, he said, getting a strange look from Ichako. Izuku fired off an arrow and managed to stop one of the teams in their tracks. Everyone wants to be at the top and I have the golden ticket on my head. He said as he reached for another arrow. Make your choice, Midoriya. Tokoyami called as he tensed his body. Izuku grinned as he looked ahead. Of course, our plan was obvious from the beginning. Izuku called out, making some of the groups pause. What is he talking about? Does he have some super plan? Izuku grinned wider as he heard the comments. Of course I have a special plan, it's a plan that has been used for centuries by mankind. He said with passion that make all the other groups hesitant. What's this? Midoriya has some super plan to win. Do you have any idea what it could be, Eraserhead? No. Izuku grinned as he stuck his hand out. Our special plan is to before Izuku could finish his team was already moving. Run away. What? At them? Present mixed laughter was currently being heard through the stadium. Ha, the kid's got jokes, he didn't get that from your class. It's an ideal strategy. At the moment they already stand at the top, so there is no need for unnecessary conflict. We won't let you. A teen with a blue bandana yelled. Juzo, now. The skull-faced teen slammed his foot into the ground and it instantly lost color. Izuku's eyes widened as he saw whatever attack it was coming right at his team. Achako, activate your hover boots. The girl did as she was told and was able to lift her team a few inches off the ground just as the ground below them warped. However, her left foot still touched the ground and to her shock her foot went through the ground. What? I'm sinking. Achako shouted in shock. Softening emission quirk. The user is able to soften anything he touches to the point it's like quicksand or mud. The range of the effect is large and user appears to have high accuracy. Izuku thought while he shot off another arrow at the oncoming teams, delaying them a little bit. Counter, break the user's concentration. He thought as he reached for an arrow. Okoyami, pull us out, grab the ground that doesn't look warped. He said and the bird team quickly did so. Izuku quickly fired an arrow at the skull-faced teen before he could react. The arrow hit home and the skull-faced teen screamed as he was shocked. A moment later the ground returned to normal. As soon as Team Arrow landed he saw that despite his best efforts more team were closing in on them. Our backs right up against the wall, we need to move. Izuku thought as he grabbed a button remote connected to the jacket. Achako, look away. Izuku ordered before he activated the jetpack. It took a good second before Team Arrow shot up into the air, dodging most of the teams aiming for them. They flew, are you kidding me? Jiro, get them. Hagakure yelled out in panic. I know. Jiro said while narrowing her eyes and shot off her jacks at Team Arrow. Okoyami and Izuku acted at the same time. The archer shot a putty arrow at Hagakure team while Dark Shadow swiped at the jacks. Ah. Hagakure yelled as her body along with most of her teams were covered in putty. It's all sticky. She yelled as she tried to move her body, but found it rough. Okoyami, now. The bird team gave a nod as Dark Shadow went low and stole Hagakure headband, much to their shock. Good. Tokoyami said as Dark Shadow handed Izuku the headband. Dark Shadow, keep watching over our blind spots. You got it boss. The Quirk said with a thumbs up as he kept a lookout. Nice, Izuku said as he put the new headband around his neck. Thanks to Dark Shadow it can defend better at close range attack, not to mention it can steal headbands for us. Nice work Tokoyami. The bird team gave a cut nod. You were the one who chose me. We're landing. Achako called as she activated her hover boots. The landing went smoothly though it took a few seconds. Thanks to Achako's quirk all our weight is gone except for hers and the equipment we have. This will make mobility seriously easy for us. What do you think of my babies? Mai asked Izuku with an excited look on her face. The same as always, Izuku said with a grin. Simply amazing. And nice work on the landing Achako, keep this up and we'll win this. He said, getting a smile from the two girls. Once they landed completely they started to run again. Now then, everything barely 2 minutes have passed since we've started, it's already turned into a free-for-all. Fights over the headbands breaking out all over. Ignoring the 10 million points and gunning for second to fourth places isn't bad, either. Hahaha. Izuku followed the strange laughter and turned to see a somewhat bizarre sight. Shaoji was running low while his arms was covering his rider. Fighting? No, this is a one-sided pillage. Mineta. Izuku said in shock as he recognized a voice coming from Shaoji's back. Tokoyami noticed another team running at them from the front. Let's put some space between us for now. We can't stay in one place for too long or we'll be quickly overwhelmed. Just as Team Arrow was about to move Achako jerked to a stop. While my foot stuck. Izuku glanced down and was shocked to see Mineta's grapes around them. When did he from the corner of his eye Izuku saw something pink fly at him from Shaoji's back, making the archer duck. What now? I didn't expect any less from you Izuku. Sayu said from Shaoji's back as well. What, is there a third person in there? Izuku asked in an annoyed tone as his mind started to race. We're stuck and surrounded by Mineta's grapes. 2 teams are closing in on us and will reach us soon. Izuku thought before he acted. Tokoyami, take an arrow and hold the team in the front, I'll handle Shaoji. Which arrow? Tokoyami asked before Izuku throw 2 arrow at Dark Shadow. Dark Shadow. The Shadow Quirk caught the arrow and shot off at the front team. The Shadow threw the arrows at the team's feet, creating a large pile of red foam. Izuku turned to Shaoji only to duck as both Mineta and Sayu started attacking. Izuku could admit it was a good strategy, with Sayu tongue and Mineta's grapes, they had a long-range advantage, and thanks to Shaoji's quirk. They were mostly protected from all angles. The young archer was forced to bob and weave between the pink tongue and flying grapes. Team Mineta makes use of the overwhelming difference in their sizes. They're like a walking tank. That's one way to put it, Izuku thought before a grin crossed his face. But this tank can still fall. He muttered as he pulled out an arrow and fired. As the arrow flew through the air, the tip turned into a black boxing glove and was flying right for Xiaoji's head. The large teen easily saw this and brought his arms up to his face, easily blocking the attack. "Don't think I'll go down that easily." Xiaoji was cut off when something hit his legs, making him jerk forward. Whoa. As soon as Izuku fired the boxing glove arrow, he fired a bolo arrow soon after and hit Xiaoji's legs. This brought the large teen to his knees, forcing him to reveal Mineta and Sayu on his back as he brought his arms down. Izuku acted fast and shot a second arrow at Xiaoji's body, and soon red foam covered him from the neck up. "Tokoyami, now," Izuku ordered as he turned his arrows on any oncoming teams. Dark Shadow. Just like last time, Dark Shadow flew at the confused team and aimed for the rider. Mineta screamed in fear and cowered behind Sayu. The frog grill tried to hold the shadow off with her tongue, but it easily deflected the attack. And snatched the headband from Mineta, getting a cry of agony from the small teen. "Izuku, we need to move." Achako yelled as she noticed more team were getting closer. Just as Dark Shadow handed Izuku the headband, the teen quickly activated the jetpack, hoping for the best. Team Arrow jerked as they tried to fly before a ripping sound was heard. "AHH." Mei cried out with a look of dread. "My baby was torn apart," she said while looking at Achako's broken hover boot. "Sorry. But we got away, Mei. Your baby seriously saved us," Izuku said as he kept his eyes sharp. "Keep an eye out for any." Boom. Izuku whipped his head back to see Bakugo flying right at Team Arrow. "Don't get carried away," Bakugo called as he let off another explosion. Izuku acted fast and pulled out an arrow before firing. Bakugo saw the arrow and managed dodge with a large blast. "I'm not going to get hit from your stupid." Bakugo cut himself off as he saw Izuku hadn't fired one arrow, but two, and the second arrow was closing in too fast. "Fuck." Bakugo raged as the second arrow hit him dead in the chest, exploding into a pile of yellow glue. "Damn it, Deku, I'm going to kill you." The blonde yelled as he started to fall with his arms stuck. A moment later, a long strand of tape touched his back and pulled him back to his team. Izuku gave a sigh of relief as he lowered his bow. "Thank God Bakugo's mobility in the air isn't that sharp, or I wouldn't be able to hit him," Izuku thought as Team Arrow started to fall to the ground. Once they touched the ground, Achako started to wobble on one leg. "Whoa, whoa." She yelled in worry before she finally settled and Team Arrow started to run. "Nice job, Achako," Izuku said as he looked around. "It's hard to control our landing with just one foot," Achako said in a serious tone as she wobbled while running. "Got it." Izuku clicked his teeth but nodded his head. "Landing is now impossible for use, we spent too much time just trying to land. That'll make us an easy target for now on. So flying is out of the picture, we'll have to make do with Achako's quirk making us lighter and Tokoyami's Dark Shadow as defense. Now let's take a look at each team's points. It's been 7 minutes. Here are the current rankings up on the screen." Izuku glanced at the screen before he blinked. "Huh?" he said in confusion. "What? Wait a minute. Other than Team Arrow, Class A isn't doing so well." Izuku couldn't help but feel shock as he saw the scores. It was true, other than his team, everyone from Class A had either the same points or lost their points. In second place was Team Monoma with 970 points, in third was Team Shinso with 680 points, and in fourth was Team Awase with 625. What shocked Izuku a bit more was the fact Bakugo was currently at 0 points. Izuku looked around and saw Bakugo was jazzing Team Monoma, a smug look on the rider's face. The young archer also noticed an extremely pissed off look on Bakugo's face. Class B had a long-term strategy that involved throwing the qualifiers. It's true that they could leave a stronger impression by overturning the mood that favored Class A before the sports festival started. But based on their way of thinking, it means they won't necessarily come after our team. Looks like things will be a little easier. Izuku was cut off when Tokoyami jerked his feet to a stop. Whipping his head forward, Izuku couldn't help but give a sigh. "Me and my big mouth," Izuku said with an annoyed grin on his face. Less than half the time is left now. Team Todoroki stood only a few feet away from Team Arrow, a heavy air around them as the two stared each other down. "Guess things won't be that easy, huh?" Izuku asked himself as he stared into Todoroki's eyes. The cavalry battle is about to enter the second half. Is this unexpected rise of Class B who will wear the 10 million points in the end? If worst comes to worst, we'll just have to resort to Plan C. Izuku thought as he slowly reached for an arrow while staring at Todoroki's team. "I'll be taking that now," the dual quirk user said as a fact. The young archer just snorted as his own determined look showed. "Afraid I can't let you do that, it's the underdog's time to shine," he said as the two stared each other down. "Shaoji, full attack mode." Izuku glanced to the side to see Team Mineta running at them at full speed, with Shaoji's arms no longer protecting Mineta and Sai. "We're going to steal the points from those two team with everything we've got," Mineta shouted with a surprising amount of conviction in his voice. "I thought we would not have a confrontation until later in this contest," the Tokuyami said in a slight worried tone. "He seems to think highly of you, Midoriya." Izuku just snorted at that. Maybe he just wants the big target around my head," he said as he kept his body tense. "We only have half the time left, let's hold on just a little longer." "Iida, forward," Todoroki ordered. "Right." A moment later Iida started to pull his team forward at them. Izuku cursed softly as he saw it was not only Todoroki's team that were closing in, but Team Mineta, Hagakure, Tokage, Awase, and Rin. Just as the team was about to act he heard someone speak. "Make sure you guard up well," Kaminari said as his body started to spark up. A moment later Todoroki covered his team with a white blanked Momo made. Indiscriminate shock. Izuku's eyes wide as he instantly understood their plan. "Guys, back up now," Izuku said as he grabbed an arrow from his quiver before firing. 1.3 million volts. Kaminari shouted as he let off a giant wave of electricity, shocking everyone near. Just before the energy wave went off Izuku shot a foam arrow in front of them and the red blob was able to take the energy attack easily. A few bolts were able to get past, but thanks to Dark Shadow, it took the remaining attacks with little trouble. As soon as the attack ended the red blob of foam more of a melted puddle. At the same time Team Todoroki was getting closer. Less than 6 minutes left. Todoroki said as frost started to build up in his right hand before he reached for a black pole Momo made and started to freeze it. "We can't back down now." A moment later the ground froze. Trapping the other teams in place. "Sorry, but you'll just have to bear it." "What? What did he do?" Todoroki took care of the crowd of teams in an instant. "He froze them after Kaminari's shock stopped them. I guess it should be expected, but he took into account how a lot of people avoided it in the obstacle course." Nice commentary. Todoroki wasn't done yet, with the other teams distracted and stuck, he quickly took a number of headbands, practically shooting his score up to second place in an instant. "I might as well take these," the dual quirk user said simply as he put 3 new headbands around his neck. What? When did he? Damn it. A moment later a wall of ice blocked them from view and Team Todoroki continued their charge. Izuku narrowed his eyes before he felt his jetpack start to shake and spark. "May, the jetpack." Izuku shouted in worry as he didn't take his eyes off Team Todoroki. "Baby." May shouted at the Devis with some worry. "There's room for improvement. The boot's not strong enough." Achako shouted in worry as her one boot was pushing the team. "We can't get away." "I'll restrain them," Tokoyami said as Dark Shadow appeared and flew at Team Todoroki. "Yarozu." A moment later Momo created a long shield that was easily able to block Tokoyami's attack. "Don't stop moving," Izuku said as he started shooting off arrow. Momo's creation is too versatile, she can practically counter anything. He thought before firing off an arrow. Momo saw this and created another shield, easily blocking the explosive arrow. "No," Tokoyami said, grabbing Izuku's attention. "Kaminari is worse." Izuku looked slightly confused before remembering Tokoyami's main weakness. "Is the light from Kaminari's energy attack affecting you?" he asked in a worried tone. Tokoyami nodded with a grim look on his face. "Thanks to your actions from before I didn't waste too much energy, but if I to take a full-on attack, it will start to affect me," he said in a worried tone. "As long as he keeps discharging electricity, attacking will be difficult. Dark Shadow will become timid." Izuku was then surprised to hear a whimper come from the living shadow. "I'm against violence," Dark Shadow said in timid tone. A moment later Team Arrow jerked to a stop, surprising them. Then Izuku glanced back he soon started to sweat in worry, they had reached the end of the playing field. Team Arrow has nowhere left to go. Izuku clicked his teeth as he looked to the sides, only to see large walls of ice surrounding them. With the jetpack broken they couldn't fly away anymore. Looking ahead he saw Team Todoroki was closing in on them, and fast. "The creased defense, but they don't know that, do they?" Izuku muttered as he tried to form a plan in his head. "I don't believe so," Tokoyami said as he tensed his body. "The only other person I've told about this weakness is Koda at USJ, and he is a man of few words. Then we just might be able to hold them back if push comes to shove," Izuku said as he reached for his quiver again. "Plus they can't just use Kaminari's quirk without preparing first, or they'll be shocked too. So we'll have a small warning if they plan to use his quirk," he said as he gripped his bow tightly. "We're not out of the game yet, not by a long shot. No matter what, we will hang on to the 10 million. Right." Everyone shouted with their own determination. The next few minutes of an intense game of cat and mouse. Thanks to Iida's speed they were always on Team Arrow, yet thanks to Izuku's arrows and Tokoyami's dark shadow, they were able to hold them off and escape Team Todoroki despite the cramped space. 1 minute left. Todoroki made it so he'd have the 10 million to himself seize in an instant. At least, that's what I thought 5 minutes ago. But unbelievably, Midoriya's been able to keep away in the cramped space for 5 minutes. He's keeping his distance, staying on the left side. He's paying attention. At this rate, if I want to freeze them over the shortest distance possible I'll get Iida instead, hurting me more. Todoroki thought while narrowing his eyes. And if he keeps moving like this, I'll do myself in if I freeze indiscriminately and Tokoyami can defend against Kaminari electricity. 1 minute left. That bastard. Todoroki started to feel extreme worry for himself as he stared at Team Arrow's rider. Izuku started to breath softly as he kept his sharp eyes on Todoroki. The young archer glanced at his quiver and noticed he was running a little low on his trick arrow. Only 1 minute left, but we're far from winning. Izuku thought with worry. Todoroki might become desperate and launch a last-minute plan, giving us no time to recover our points. The young archer felt like everything was moving slower, as if this was the longest minute of his young life. Iida kept his eyes on Izuku before he narrowed them slightly. Everyone, there's less than a minute left. You won't be able to use me after this. I'm counting on you. Iida muttered quietly to his team, grabbing their attention. Iida. Iida crouched low and tensed his legs, something Izuku noticed. Hang on tight. Make sure you get it, Todoroki. Izuku's eyes widened as he heard the wind up Iida's engines, only this time it was different from before. Oh, shy. Torque over. Izuku blinked for a second and felt his headband snatched from his head. Reciproburst. The young archer was shell-shocked. Never before had he seen Iida use that kind of speed, it almost felt as if he teleported. The only kind of speed he could compare it to was All Might, Mirio, and even Shigaraki. What happened? So fast. So fast. Iida, if you could accelerate that fast, then show us in the prelims. What was that? Todoroki asked with a shocked look on his face. Iida panted hard before he spoke. By forcing the torque and rotations to increase, I created an explosive power. With a recoil, my engine stalls after a while, thought. He said while smoke was coming out of the mufflers on his legs. It's a secret move I haven't told anyone in my class yet. Iida said before he looked to the shocked Izuku with a grin. I told you, didn't I, Izuku? That I'd challenge you. Izuku was shocked seeing the side of Iida, but at the same time he couldn't help but grin as his blood started to pump. I just lost the 10 million points, yet for some reason I can't stop ginning. The tables are turned. Offense and defense right at the edge. Reining that in, Todoroki gets the 10 million. Can Midoriya survive with the points he's gained so far? Move, now. Izuku ordered while reaching for his quiver. Iida's engines are smoking, something must be wrong with his speed after using that move. As long as they have Kaminari, we'll be at a disadvantage if we attack. Tokoyami warned. Won't it be safer to try for other points right now and add to the points we still have? Izuku however shook his head. No. I don't know how the other points got split up. Not to mention we're still surrounded by this ice wall, by the time we get through the game will end. Our only shot to ensure our victory is to charge forward. Izuku said as he pulled out an arrow. You let me worry about Kaminari, I'll make sure he won't use his electricity. Ichako seemed hesitant before she nodded. All right. She shouted as she pushed Team Arrow forward. We'll get it back, Izuku. We'll definitely win. Izuku was slightly taken aback by Ichako's determination before remembering her reason for fighting, her family. That's right. Izuku thought as he remembered Mei's reason for fighting as well and the trust Tokoyami put in him. It's not just me. The feelings of the three who trust in me, I'm carrying all that right now. Izuku felt a wave of energy wash over him as he realized he was fighting more than just himself. He felt as if every single person that helped him to this moment was pushing him right now to win. Todoroki currently has 5 headbands. He's wrested away the top spot from Midoriya, who was running away like crazy. Will these be the top 4 teams to move on to the next round? Wait, what's this? Bakugo seizes 2 headbands to move to 4th place. The rankings keep changing in the final stages. It's the passion of youth. Monoma, Class B's strategy was certainly reasonable and good. But there's just one thing that is unfortunate, you didn't take the difference in tenacity into consideration, did you? Bakugo is merciless. If he's gonna do it, he's gonna be through. Bakugo moves to the 2nd place spot. Izuku ignored the commentary and focused on his own fight by fired off an arrow that exploded right next to Kaminari's head, getting a cry of pain from the teen as his eyes unfocused. Todoroki felt worry as he saw Izuku not only close in on him, but had a look of pure determination on his face. On pure reflex Todoroki raised his left hand and orange fire started to spill out. Izuku reacted fast and shifted CC into its staff form before he swung it at Todoroki, hitting his arm to the side away from Team Arrow. Todoroki blinked before turned to his arm with a shocked look on his face. My left, what am I? Izuku saw this and used the moment to reach forward. He turned his headbands inside out to hide their point value, but he took the 10 million last and put it on. He'll probably try to fake me out and put it somewhere less obvious, such as the middle. Izuku thought before snatching the very middle headband. This one. Izuku shouted as his team ran past Todoroki's team. Got it. Izuku shouted, making the crowds cheer. I as well. Tokoyami called as Dark Shadow managed to grab a headband from around Todoroki's neck. With just seconds left, there's an angry retrieval here, too. Wait a minute. Mei said in a worried tone as she looked at the headband. This is the wrong one. Izuku glanced down and cursed when he saw it was not the 10 million headband, but a headband worth 555. Looking to Todoroki, Izuku cursed louder when he saw it was only worth 70 points. Even if you knew we changed the position of the headbands, there was still a 1/4 chance you would guess right. Momo said in a confident tone. The odds were not in your favor. Izuku gripped his fist before sliding the headband on. There's no chose, with only seconds left we won't have enough time for another charge. We might make it through to the next round, but I didn't come here just to pass, I came to win. It's time for Plan C. Todoroki, get a hold of yourself. Iida said as he noticed Todoroki's current state. That was too close. Oh no. Team Arrow didn't retrieve the 10 million points. But they did grab a large amount of points, bringing them to second place. Izuku glanced at the scoreboard to see what Present Mick said was true. With 1435 points, Izuku's team was able to make it to second place, just ahead of Bakugo. But I'm far from done. Izuku thought with determination as he reached for his arrows. Time's just about up. Will Team Arrow be able to get their points back or will they settle for second place? Start the countdown. 10. Everyone, time for Plan C. Izuku shouted as he pulled out his arrows. This time instead of just 1 or 2 arrows in his hand like normal, Izuku had 8 arrows between his fingers. 9. Tokoyami. Dark Shadow flew at Team Todoroki only for Kaminari to hold the shadow with his electricity. This made his face slowly become slack. 8. Suddenly the wall of ice fell and Bakugo came flying in. Damn Deku. Bakugo yelled with an angry look on his face, flying right at Izuku. 7. Ichako, run. Izuku said as he took a deep breath before aiming all 8 arrows right at Team Todoroki, getting a surprised look from them as they noticed a calm look on his face. 6. Iida tried to activate his engines only for smoke to come out. Damn it, they're still stalled. 5. Aoirozu. Todoroki called and Momo quickly made a steel pole. Todoroki then covered the pole in ice as he held it in his hands. 4. The 10 million points are, Bakugo muttered in shock as he finally noticed Izuku didn't have his headband, but someone else. 3. Izuku grit his teeth as he pulled all 8 arrows back and aimed them at Todoroki. The young archer could feel them dig into his skin as he struggled to hold them, but that didn't stop him. 2. Half and half bastard. Bakugo shouted as he flew to Todoroki. 1. Hedgehog. Izuku shouted as he shot all 8 arrows at once, straight at Todoroki. Thanks to the short distance between them and speed of the arrows, Todoroki didn't have enough time to dodge or even move as the arrows quickly flew past the dual quirk user. Time's up. As soon as those words were said, all tension left everyone, even Bakugo flopped to the ground. Izuku panted hard as he looked at Todoroki and noticed something very different about the team before looking behind said team. What Izuku saw not far away made the biggest grin cross the young archer's face. Plan C is a total success. That's the end of the second round, the cavalry battle. Izuku climbed off his teammates and gave them all a smile, one they returned as their backup plan was a success. Now, let's take a look at the top 4 teams right away. In first place, it's wait what? Present Mick shouted in pure shock, grabbing everyone's attention. In first place it's Team Arrow. What? Team Todoroki shouted in complete shock and disbelief. But we got the 10 million. But do you still have it? Izuku called, making the 4-person team look at him, seeing the confident smile on his face. Because from where I'm standing, you seem to have misplaced it. Todoroki's hand whipped up to the headbands around his neck before he paled, noticing he was one short. He then quickly went through them and saw he had all of them but the 10 million. Where did it go? Momo asked in disbelief as she stared at Todoroki's hands. Izuku's only answer was to point behind them. Todoroki, Momo, and Iida, Kaminari was currently brain dead, so he just gave a stupid grin, all slowly turned around, and what they saw made their jaws drop. Stuck in the ice wall Todoroki made were several arrows Izuku had shot just before time ran out. But what was most noticeable was the one arrow that had a headband, the 10 million headband. Plan C, Izuku said, grabbing everyone's attention. Was a simple, but a last resort plan. If I can't have the 10 million, no one can. Wait a moment ladies and gentlemen, let me get the rule book. The sound of pages turning was heard before President Mick spoke again. Ah, here we go. If a headband were to drop out of a player's hands they become a free-for-all points, meaning they become no ones until they are grabbed. If the points are not picked up by the time the game ends, nobody gets them. What a twist. President Mick shouted in shock as he slammed the book closed. At the very last instant Midoriya is able to ensure his team gets first place. It's actually a brilliant plan in its own right. Midoriya's main focus is long-range attacks, he might not have been able to take the points for himself, but he chipped Todoroki's just enough to win first. Izuku get out a huge sigh as Mei pulled at the jetpack. I'm so glad I remember the rules from middle school. Izuku sighed in relief before he grinned to everyone. Nice work team, we managed to steal first. Yeah. Achako cheered as she hugged Dark Shadow, making it blush. The brilliant plan Midoriya, you have granted us victory. Tokoyami said while nodding to his teammates. I got to seriously show off my babies and I found new ways to make them great. Mei said in an excited tone as she fixed her jetpack. In second place, it's Team Bakugo. Most Bakugo's team was relatively happy with the fact they made it to the top 4. Bakugo himself however was pissed he didn't get first again and not only that Deku made first place, again. Damn it. In third place, it's Team Shinso. Izuku looked around and managed to find Shinso in the crowd of players. In Shinso's team was along with Shinso was Tetsutetsu, Kendo, and a girl with green vines for hair. The purple hair team noticed Izuku and gave the young archer a nod, one he returned. In fourth place, it's Team Todoroki. Todoroki was quiet for a long while, along with the rest of his team. They had managed to pass the game, but still they felt a huge loss when they lost the 10 million. I'm sorry. Iida said quietly as he gripped his fist. If I could have moved. This is on me. Todoroki cut Iida off as his hair shaded his eyes. I was completely overwhelmed. He said while staring at his left hand, the hand that used his fire. Hey now, Momo said with a smile on her face. We might have lost the 10 million, but we still managed to make it to the top 4. She said with a smile. Todoroki however continued to stare at his hand with a glare. I promised myself I wouldn't do what that old man wanted yet. Todoroki then glanced at the one person to manage to bring his flames out. Yet he managed to overwhelm me. Now, we'll take an hour break for lunch before we start the afternoon festivities. See ya. Hey Eraserhead, let's go grab some food. I'm going to sleep. Izuku gave a sigh as he pushed himself forward and started to make his way to the exit, he was feeling beyond hungry. Just as Izuku was about to step forward he felt a hand grip his shoulder, stopping him in his tracks. Looking back Izuku was slightly surprised at who he saw. Midoriya, I need to speak with you. Todoroki said in a very serious tone. Lila gave a weak sigh as she slumped in her chair. This kid is pulling too many close calls, she said as she pulled on her hair. I can already feel my hair turning gray. Really, it looks really smooth to me. Nijire said while tilting her head. Figure of speech kid. Lila said with a chuckle before she looked to the side. How you feeling Inko? Be better, Inko said in a shaky tone as Eri fanned the woman. I don't think I can handle this, these games are too intense. Don't worry Miss Midoriya, Mirio said with a thumbs up. There's just one more big game left before the sports festival ends. He said, making Inko sigh in relief. But isn't the last game the same every year, a battle tournament? Tamaki asked, making Inko slump farther in her seat and Eri fanning the woman even faster. Sorry. Tamaki said while ducking his head. Okay, so the last game is a tournament, how bad could it be? Lila said with a chuckle before noticing the look she was getting from the UA students, she then remembered what school they were at. Oh yeah UA she said with a sigh. If they're crazy enough to have their students fight giant robots, I can just imagine how the top 16 are. I'm sure Izuku will be okay. Nijire said while pumping her fist. He did super well in the first 2 events, I'm sure he'll win the tournament. Mirio folded his arms and looked down at the field with a serious look on his face. Well it won't be easy, a lot of strong students made it to the final round. This will push Izuku like never before. Lila sighed but smiled down gently. True, but you got to remember, she then turned to everyone with a smile on her face. He's my father's student and my little brother. She said with a big smile, bringing one to Mirio, Eri, and Inko. Big brother's going to win. Eri shouted while throwing her hands up, a second later her stomach growled. I'm hungry. Eri said with a pout. Everyone laughed while Nijire gushed at how cute Eri was. Come on, let's get some food before the next event starts. My treat. Lila said before she grabbed Eri's hand and the group quickly walked away. All Might gave a sigh as he rubbed his face. The last 5 minutes of the Cleverly battle were no joke. The number 1 hero was on the edge of his seat the whole time, and when Todoroki had finally caught the 10 million, All Might thought Midoriya had lost. Yet at the very last possible second, Midoriya was able to grab his victory for not only himself, but his team as well. What a spectacular show, the most likely to win all lost to the one nobody expected to make it halfway. All Might turned to see a creature sipping on a cup of tea. Was it a dog? Was it a mouse? Was it a bear? It was the principal of UA, Nezu. I can see why you considered Midoriya to be your successor. He has a lot of traits you had when you were that age. Nezu said with a small smile as he calmly sipped his tea. A shame he didn't accept it, he might have made excellent use of it. All Might smiled and shook his head. No, he didn't need it. You saw what he could do without any quirk, this is all him and his training. He said before chuckling as he remembered something Midoriya said to him. Also, Midoriya pointed out that my power couldn't fit his fighting style. He said it would be like me trying to be a ninja, what would be the point? Nezu looked up and thought as he imaged All Might in a ninja outfit hiding in the shadows, that brought him a laugh. Yes, that would have been quite the sight. He said as he looked down to the large field. You know, when the hero program allowed for quirkless people to enter the entrance exam for hero schools, it was mostly to bring more positive feedback to the hero course. Nobody actually expected a quirkless boy to not only pass, but rank first. Nezu said with a wide grin on his face. I have been receiving calls for the past hour about Midoriya's situation and how it will affect the hero program since he does not have a quirk, so a lot of the rules don't apply to him. The principal then let a wide grin cross his face to the point it was sadistic. It's oh so fun to watch them scramble like chickens with their heads cut off. All Might sweat dropped at the principal before a worrying thought crossed his mind. They won't try and force Midoriya to quit, would they? All Might asked in a worrying tone. Nezu quickly waved his paw while shaking his head. Doubtful, without any serious cause the hero program cannot take any student out on the simple base of their quirk or lack thereof. But if push comes to shove, I'm sure if the UA teachers banded together and put their foot down, the hero program would have no choice but to accept a quirkless student will one day become a hero. All Might sighed before letting a smile cross his face. Good. He said before he stood up from his seat. Let's get some food, all this fighting has got me hungry. The lone figure stood in front of a glass window to a TV store. A giant flat screen showing the most recent event of the UA Sports Festival. The figure was shocked to say the least at the outcome of that event. Somehow, someway, a quirkless teen was able to get first place in not one, but 2 events. The first one all on his own and the second with only a little help. If that wasn't bad enough, the passing comments were. Holy crap, did you see this kid? How can a quirkless kid go against Endeavor's son and win? I bet he was trained by a serious hero, like All Might or some other fist fighter. That's pretty cool, guess anyone can become a hero. The figure shook softly as he heard all the praise around him as he hung his head low before shuffling away. It's not fair. Izuku stood across from Todoroki in a small stone hallway. The young archer leaned against the wall while folding his arms and turned his eyes to Todoroki. Todoroki had a blank look on his face as he put his hands in his pockets and leaned against the wall. So, you wanted to tell me something? Izuku asked while rubbing the back of his neck. What is it? Todoroki didn't speak for a long moment and continued to stare into Izuku, the area around him deadly cold. You blindsided me. So much so that I broke my own pledge. Izuku raised an eyebrow as he glanced at Todoroki's left arm. Pledge, you mean your fire? He asked in confusion. Neither Iida nor Kaminari nor Yairozu nor Tokoyami nor Uraraka even felt it. Only I felt it, that moment, the same as him. Todoroki said while staring at his left arm. Izuku raised a brow as he stared at Todoroki for a long moment. So what is it you want to say? I'm saying what I felt from you was the same. Something too similar. Todoroki said before raising his head and looking straight into Izuku's eyes. Hey, are you All Might's illegitimate child or what? The fuck? This is the end of the video. If you enjoyed the story, then hit the like button and comment your favorite part, but for now see you all in the next video.